Marvel events didn't start as annual milestones or marketing engines. They started as experiments, loose crossovers, shared consequences, and stories that accidentally spilled out of their own titles. Over time, those experiments hardened into a formula, and that formula eventually became the backbone of Marvel's publishing strategy. I originally covered this history across a series of individual videos, each focusing on a specific stretch of time. This version brings all of that work together into one complete timeline, tracing every major Marvel Comics event from 1964 through 1999. The period where the idea of the Marvel event is invented, tested, and finally standardized. This series is still ongoing, and later years will get their own chapters. This video focuses on the foundation, how Marvel figured out what an event even was in the first place. This is a long one. Use the chapters, jump around if you want, or just let it run. By the end, we'll see how Marvel went from barely understanding what an event was to building an entire publishing strategy around them. Fantastic Four Annual number 3 remains a significant milestone in the Marvel Comics history. Primarily due to the highly anticipated wedding, this issue went beyond a simple wedding narrative, becoming a pivotal moment that showcased the interconnectedness of the Marvel Universe. The event drew an unprecedented gathering of Marvel's heroes, including the X-Men, Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, Hawkeye, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Daredevil, and numerous others, establishing a precedent for large-scale crossovers and team-ups that have become a hallmark of Marvel storytelling. Jack Kirby's dynamic artwork effectively captured the epic scale of the event, illustrating the clash between heroes and villains amidst the urban chaos of New York City. This issue wasn't solely a showcase for the heroes. It also featured a substantial collection of Marvel's iconic villains, including Doctor Doom, Mole Man, the Red Ghost, the Mandarin, Kang the Conqueror, the Super Skrull, and many more. Beyond the sheer number of characters, the wedding served to solidify the Fantastic Four's position, the cornerstone of the Marvel Universe, emphasizing their role as a family unit and a symbol of heroism. The convergence of so many significant characters within a single issue contributes to its enduring appeal and its status as a landmark comic. The Kree Skrull War stands as a landmark story arc in Marvel Comics. Created by Roy Thomas with art from Sal Buscema, Neil Adams, and John Buscema. Originally published in Avengers issues 89 through 97, this narrative went beyond the typical superhero conflicts, presenting a cosmic-scale interstellar war. The story begins with the Kree hero Captain Marvel returning to Earth, being captured by Avengers Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, and the Vision, along with Rick Jones. This capture is crucial as Mar-Vell is suffering from lethal radiation absorbed in the negative zone. Flashbacks reveal Marvel's prior encounter with the Nihilist and his subsequent escape, leading to his capture by Kree Sentry. The Avengers are then drawn into a mystery involving a research base in the Arctic where they encounter a hypnotized Goliath and Ronan the Accuser, who aims to devolve the Earth. Conflict escalates as Marvel's existence is revealed to the public, leading to the formation of the Alien Activities Commission and escalating tensions between the Avengers and the authorities. Simultaneously, Skrulls infiltrate Earth, capturing Mar-Vell and other Avengers. The remaining Avengers uncover the Skrull deception, embark on a rescue mission leading them to Attilan, and the alliance between Maximus and the Kree. The narrative culminates in a cosmic confrontation in Skrull space, where Mar-Vell is forced to build an Omniwave projector. With Rick Jones's Destiny Force, the Avengers and the Golden Age heroes turn the tide, ending the war and exposing a Skrull infiltrator on Earth. This storyline was notable for its expansive scope, featuring an enormous cast of characters. He used the Skrulls as a metaphor for how people were worried about spies and the enemy within. It also touched on the big political stuff too. The whole thing was more than just a space fight. It was like a mirror to what was happening in the real world at the time. The arc also introduced the pivotal romance between Vision and Scarlet Witch, a theme that would resonate through Avengers history. The Kree Skrull War is considered a high point of its era and the culmination of Thomas and Adams' collaborative work. The night Gwen Stacy died, also sometimes called the Green Goblin's last stand. is a huge moment in Spider-Man and Marvel history. It's a two-parter from Amazing Spider-Man number 121 and 122, back in 1973. Jerry Conway wrote it, and Gil Kane, John Romita Sr., and Tony Monterello did the art. The story goes like this. Norman Osborn, who was the Green Goblin, had amnesia and forgot he was the villain and that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. But then his son Harry's drug addiction and financial troubles triggered a breakdown, and he remembered everything. Goblin grabs Gwen and lures Spider-Man to a bridge. They fight, and the Goblin throws Gwen off. Spider-Man tries to save her with his webbing, but she ends up dying. There's debate about whether she died from the fall itself or the whiplash from the webbing, but either way, Spider-Man blames himself. The Goblin gets away, but Spider-Man tracks him down and beats him up. Can't bring himself to kill him though, and the Goblin tries to impale him with his glider. Spider-Man dodges, and the glider kills Norman Osborn instead. Peter's devastated, and Mary Jane, who was also close to Gwen, comforts him. This story shocked everyone. Now, back then, killing off a major character like a superhero's girlfriend was pretty much unheard of. That's why the story is considered such a big deal. It is said to have marked the end of Silver Age comics and the start of the Bronze Age, which is a time when comics started to deal with more mature themes. Gwen's death had a massive impact on Marvel and comics in general. It led to more focus on characters like Luke Cage and Mary Jane Watson, creation of the Punisher, and it solidified the Green Goblin, Spider-Man's ultimate nemesis, especially in other media. Killing off Gwen was a huge deal, and it really changed the tone of comics. It even led to the term the Gwen Stacy syndrome, which refers to the tendency for superhero girlfriends to meet tragic ends. And in a Marvel fan poll, these two issues were voted among the greatest of Marvel comics of all time. Back in 1973, after Roy Thomas created the Defenders, Marvel's editor-in-chief was swamped and passed the reins to Steve Englehart, who was already writing the Avengers at the time. To celebrate the Avengers' 10th anniversary, Englehart decided to do a big crossover, mirroring the original Avengers issue with Loki causing trouble. That's how we got the Avengers-Defenders War, an 8-issue crossover written by Steve Englehart with art by Bob Brown, Mike Esposito, and Frank Giacomo, spanning Avengers number 115 to 118 and Defenders 8 through 11. Started with the Enchantress turning Black Knight into stone. So, the Defenders, Doctor Strange, Hulk, Namor, Silver Surfer, Valkyrie, and Hawkeye, who just left the Avengers, tried to help. Doctor Strange tried to talk to the Knight's soul, but Loki and Dormammu messed with the message, sending the Defenders to find pieces of the evil eye. Dormammu wanted it to merge Earth with his dark dimension, while Loki, worried about Asgard, told the Avengers, Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, Vision, Scarlet Witch, Black Panther, Mantis, and the Sword to stop the Defenders. Misunderstandings led to fights between the teams. They split up and had individual battles, like Silver Surfer versus Scarlet Witch and Vision, Hawkeye versus Iron Man, and Doctor Strange versus Mantis and Black Panther. Hulk and Thor even fought, ending in a tie. Eventually, Cap and Namor realized they were being manipulated, but Dormammu had already gotten at the evil eye and started merging dimensions. Things looked dire when all but the Scarlet Witch was taken out. Then Loki, in a classic double cross, betrays Dormammu, and it was Scarlet Witch using her reality warping powers along with the evil eye who really turned the tide. She managed to disrupt both Dormammu and Loki's plans, ending the war. This crossover was important because it showed how connected the Marvel Universe was, proving that different characters and teams could have big, impactful stories together. Thanos War in 1973 was Jim Starlin's first big debut with Thanos. It throws Captain Marvel and the Avengers into a massive cosmic showdown. This story took place mostly in the Captain Marvel comics, issues 25 through 33, with some side trips to Marvel feature number 12 and Avengers number 125. The whole thing kicks off with the murder, Rick Jones getting double-crossed and him swapping places with Captain Marvel. This leads to Skrull imposters, the Super Skrull, and eventually Thanos, who's after the cosmic. Thanos pulls a lot of strings, using Rick's memories and even fighting Drax the Destroyer. Meanwhile, Captain Marvel goes on a wild spiritual journey with Eon, getting cosmic awareness and facing his fears. The Avengers get dragged into it, dealing with the Controller and the Blood Brothers. Thanos grabs the cube's power, basically becoming one with the universe. We also get to see Drax and Moondragon's backstories, which tie them directly to Thanos. The Avengers try a space assault to mess with Thanos' plans. Then comes the big finale. Captain Marvel, with Eon's help, and Mantis who can dodge Thanos' time tricks, confront him. Captain Marvel, realizing what the cube really is, shatters it, wiping Thanos out. The Avengers get back to normal and Captain Marvel's youth is restored. This story is a solid piece of work. Starling gives everyone a chance to shine, especially Marvel and Rick Jones. The cosmic stuff like Marvel's awareness and Thanos becoming the universe is pretty cool too. And Starling's art? It's amazing. The cosmic scenes are gorgeous and the layouts are creative, and it's really just fun to look at. Even though others are credited as writers, it's Starling's ideas that really drive this art. It's a great read, especially if you're curious about Thanos' early days. So, also back in 1973, Gary Conway, the writer of Spider-Man, decided to shake things up big time. They killed off Gwen Stacy, like we talked about earlier, Peter Parker's girlfriend, in issue 121. The reason they did this was the editors felt she had gotten a bit stale, and they wanted to crank up the drama in Peter's life. But Conway didn't stop there. In the stories that followed, he introduced the Jackal. And guess what? Gwen Stacy seemed to come back from the dead. Turns out the Jackal was Miles Warren, Gwen and Peter's biology professor. He was obsessed with Gwen, and her death messed him up big time. Being a cloning expert, he made clones of both Gwen and Peter, which is how he found out Peter was Spider-Man. He blamed Spider-Man for Gwen's death and wanted revenge. Jackal kidnaps Spider-Man and forces him to fight his clone. Both Peters thought they were the real deal. Eventually they teamed up, then boom, an explosion seemingly kills one of them and the Jackal. The surviving Spider-Man figured he was the original because he was in love with Mary Jane, which only happened after the clone was made. He dumped the clone's body in an incinerator, and Gwen's clone just vanished to start a new life. This happened in Spider-Man issue 149, and it left it kind of vague. Who actually died in the explosion? Was it the real Peter, or was it the clone? Conway said it was unintentional. He just assumed Marvel would never replace the real Spider-Man with a clone. It was a pretty wild ride, and definitely a memorable chapter in Spider-Man's history. This era had become known as the original Clone Saga, mostly because it was the starting point for one of the most controversial events that happened during the 90s, Clone Saga. We'll talk about that one when we get to it a little bit later. Dark Phoenix Saga is a cornerstone of X-Men storytelling, crafted by Chris Claremont and John Byrne. This arc, primarily featured in Uncanny X-Men issues 129 through 138, delves into Jean Grey's transformation by the Phoenix Force, exploring her descent into corruption and her ultimate sacrifice. This narrative is widely regarded as a classic within mainstream superhero comics, introducing pivotal characters such as Kitty Pryde, Dazzler, and Emma Frost. Jean Grey's exposure to solar radiation in space unlocks her latent potential, leading to her transformation into the Phoenix. She repairs the M-Cron crystal, but attempts to regulate her newfound abilities. Mastermind, seeking acceptance within the Hellfire Club's inner circle, manipulates Jean Grey through illusions and Emma Frost's technology. This psychological manipulation causes Jean Grey to identify with the Black Queen persona, leading to her corruption and the capture of the X-Men. During a psychic duel between Cyclops and Mastermind, Jean's inhibitions are shattered, and she becomes the Dark Phoenix. In her transformed state, Jean departs for space, only to discover her powers are not limitless, draining a star to replenish her energy. She inadvertently destroys an inhabited planet, prompting the Shi'ar Empire to intervene. They consider the Dark Phoenix a cosmic threat akin to Galactus. Returning to Earth, Jean confronts her dual nature, torn between her human emotions and her Dark Phoenix impulses. Following an unsuccessful confrontation with the X-Men, Charles Xavier engages her in a psychic battle, restoring her original Marvel girl powers. Shi'ar, deeming the Dark Phoenix a threat, abduct the X-Men and demand her execution. Xavier invokes a Shi'ar duel, lending to a battle on the moon between the X-Men and the Imperial Guard. As the battle progresses, Jean once again transforms into the Dark Phoenix. Faced with Lilandra's attempt to destroy the solar system, Jean, with the aid of the X-Men, regains control and chooses to sacrifice herself using an ancient Kree weapon. The narrative concludes with Uatu the Watcher's observation that Jean Grey, despite her potential for godhood, chose to die as a human. Dark Phoenix Saga is universally acknowledged as a masterpiece, resonating deeply with both critics and fans. It is consistently ranked among the top Marvel storylines, celebrated for its impactful artwork, compelling narrative that has profoundly influenced numerous creators. This story is often cited as the defining moment in the X-Men's history, showcasing the team at their best, solidifying its place as a legendary tale in the superhero genre. Days of Future Past is a classic X-Men story from 1981, specifically in X-Men issues 141 and 142. Basically a time travel story set in a really messed up future. Imagine a world where mutants are hunted down and thrown into internment camps, and giant robots called Sentinels rule America. That's the future they're dealing with. The story flips between 1980 and 2013. In the future, things are bleak. Sentinels have taken over, and mutants are living in a nightmare. With nuclear war looming, the few remaining X-Men make a desperate move. They send the mind of an adult Kate Pryde, who we know as Kitty Pryde, back in time to her younger self in 1980. The mission: stop a crucial event that sets this whole dystopian future in motion. That pivotal event is the assassination of Senator Robert Kelly, along with Charles Xavier and Muir, the Mystique's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Future Kitty is now in her younger body, teams up with the present-day X-Men to prevent this. They succeed, and Future Kitty's mind is pulled back to her time, leaving young Kitty with no memory of what happened. The story ends with the present-day X-Men wondering if they've actually changed the future or just postponed it. We never see the 2013 timeline again in this arc, leaving it a bit of a mystery. It's a pretty heavy story, and it's been revisited a lot in comics and other media. The Days of Future Past two-parter is a high point in comic history for several reasons. Notably, it was one of John Byrne's final stories on the title, and his artwork is just exceptional. Every panel is rich with detail and tells the story flawlessly. Byrne's art, combined with Chris Claremont's strong writing and detailed thought bubbles, effectively created a believable alternate future in just 2 issues. The world building established within the first 5 pages is remarkably efficient, a feat rarely seen today. The story's conclusion was also incredibly impactful, eliminating nearly all the future X-Men, including Wolverine. Seeing Wolverine's burnt adamantium skeleton in 142 was a shocking moment for readers in 1980. Peter Rasputin's emotional response to Ororo's death immediately after Wolverine's remains one of the most powerful scenes in Claremont and Byrne's collaboration. It's also worth noting that fans voted the first issue as one of Marvel's greatest comics, and it's officially designated as Earth 811 in the Marvel multiverse. Marvel's Superhero Contest of Champions was a 3-issue limited series Marvel put out in 1982. It's kind of a big deal because it was their first ever limited series. Mark Gruenwald wrote it, and John Romita Jr. and Bob Layton did the art. This series was also significant because it kinda laid the groundwork for future big Marvel events and crossovers. It introduced the idea of a massive story affecting the entire Marvel universe, even before multiple crossovers were a thing. Here's a fun fact. The original plan was to tie this series into the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow, with superheroes competing in game. I don't know how that's fair, but that was the idea. But back then, the US boycotted the Olympics, so Marvel had to rework the story. They still released it 2 years later, just without the Olympic connection. Plot's pretty wild. An elder of the universe called the Grand Master challenges Death to a game. He wants to bring back the Collector, who'd been killed by Korvac at this time. They decide to use Earth's superheroes as pawns in this cosmic contest. The goal is to collect pieces of something called the Golden Globe of Life. If Grandmaster's team wins, the Collector comes back. If they lose, he stays dead. Grandmaster's team had Captain America, Talisman, Dark Star, Captain Britain, Wolverine, Defensor, Sasquatch, Daredevil, Peregrine, She-Hulk, The Thing, and a guy named Blitzkrieg. While Death's team, Iron Man, Vanguard, Iron Fist, Shamrock, Storm, Arabian Knight, Sabra, Invisible Girl, Angel, Black Panther, Sunfire, and last but not least, well, maybe least, the Collective Man. Even though the story ends in a tie, Grandmaster is considered to have won. But to bring back the Collector, he has to take his place in the realm of the dead. He agrees, later pulls a fast one and tricks Death into making all the Elders immortal. This series also introduced a bunch of international heroes, like Blitzkrieg, Collective Man, Fensor, Peregrine, Shamrock, and Talisman, the same ones that were mentioned before. And each issue had a catalog of all the heroes in it, which basically was a prototype for the popular official handbook of the Marvel Universe. Marvel Superhero Secret Wars, 12-issue crossover limited series published from 1984 to 1985, was a significant event in Marvel Comics history. Written by Jim Shooter with art by Mike Zeck and Bob Layton. The series was notable for its tie-in with a Mattel toy line and a TSR role-playing game. The series' inception stemmed from Marvel Comics editor-in-chief Jim Shooter, originally titled Cosmic Champions. The series was renamed Secret Wars following feedback from Mattel's focus groups. Mattel's involvement extended to the storyline and character design, with adjustments made to enhance toy sales. Shooter asserted his exclusive ability to write the series. While the main narrative unfolded across the main 12 issues, there were numerous tie-in titles, including The Amazing Spider-Man, The Avengers, Captain America, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man, The Thing, Fantastic Four, Marvel Team-Up, The Uncanny X-Men, and Thor. Plot centered on the Beyonder, a cosmic entity who transported a selection of Earth's heroes and villains to a constructed planet, Battleworld. He tasked them with engaging in combat, promising the victors their heart's desires. The assembled heroes included Avengers, Fantastic Four members, Spider-Man, Spider-Woman, and the X-Men. Villains consisted of classic adversaries and cosmic entities like Galactus. The series featured numerous conflicts, betrayals, and power struggles. Key developments included Galactus' attempt to consume Battleworld, Doctor Doom's acquisition of the Beyonder's power, and Spider-Man's acquisition of his famous black costume. Upon the character's return to Earth, significant changes occurred within the Marvel Universe. She-Hulk joined the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man's costume was revealed to be an alien symbiote, and Colossus ended his relationship with an underage Kitty Pryde, which is probably a good thing. And the Hulk also experienced a resurgence of his savage nature. Despite initial critical reception being mixed, criticisms regarding its juvenile content, Secret Wars achieved substantial commercial success. Later assessments have acknowledged its lasting impact on the Marvel Universe, with publications like IGN and MTV News recognizing its role in establishing the modern event comic format. The Wraith War in Marvel Comics primarily takes place within the ROM comic series, with the most pivotal issues being ROM number 65 and 66, which depict the climax of the Dire Wraith's invasion and the subsequent aftermath of the war against them. The Dire Wraith saga began with an internal power struggle, as the Witch race eliminated the Scientist Wraiths, establishing sorcery as their primary tactic. This marked the beginning of a conflict that would escalate beyond their internal strife and impact the entire Marvel Universe. They then invaded Earth, starting with the infiltration and subjugation of Claritin, West Virginia. Rom and Starshine intervened, but a Skrull extermination squad arrived, eliminating the immediate Wraith threat. Rom, recognizing the gravity of the situation, went public, prompting the US government to engage in a clandestine war against the Dire Wraiths. The conflict intensified with a devastating attack on the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier, resulting in significant casualties. Global terror campaign ensued, with the Dire Wraiths attacking worldwide, massacring towns and villages. They employed diverse tactics, including attempts to sabotage the US space program for their own purposes, attempts to assassinate Forge and destroy his neutralizer technology, and the use of sorcery to mutate humans and wildlife. They also attempted a world merge, creating a sorceress conduit to bring Wraith World to Earth, causing global cataclysms. This plotline, where the Wraiths attempted to bring their home dimension into Earth's solar system, was particularly dramatic and visually striking. The culminating battle occurred in New York City and in space, involving numerous superheroes. Rom, Forge, and a team of astronauts utilized the satellite-based neutralizer to banish Wraith World, reflecting a technological countermeasure to the Wraith's magical abilities. Following the defeat of the Wraiths, the remaining individuals were gathered. After deliberation, Rom, citing his prolonged conflict with the Wraiths, was granted the authority to determine their fate. He subsequently banished them to Limbo, ending a conflict that was known for its dark and unsettling tones, reflecting Cold War paranoia and fears of hidden enemies. It is important to note that the Dire Wraith War was primarily featured in Rom's Space Knight series, which revolved around Rom's conflict with the shape-shifting adversaries. However, due to licensing issues related to the Rom character, Dire Wraith's appearance in the Marvel Universe have been somewhat limited since the series ended, leading to some continuity challenges. And it's kind of disappointing a little bit. I really wish we could see some more stories of the Dire Wraiths. However, the Wraith's War impact on the era's storytelling remains evident. In essence, the Dire Wraith War left a lasting imprint on the Marvel Universe by introducing themes of paranoia, blending genres, reinforcing the shared universe, exploring darker aspects of storytelling. Even with the licensing limitations, its influences can be seen in the continued use of similar tropes and themes in subsequent Marvel comics. Secret Wars 2, a 9-issue limited series and crossover event, was published by Marvel Comics from 1985 to 1986. Written by then editor-in-chief Jim Shooter with primary art by Il Milgram, it served as a direct sequel to the original Secret Wars. This series marked a significant shift in Marvel's approach to crossover events, introducing the concept of extensive tie-ins across numerous Marvel titles. Readers seeking the complete narrative were required to purchase over 30 additional comics, each bearing a designated logo in the corner, kind of like with Nabisco. This was a novel approach at the time, prompting readers to engage with a wide range of titles to follow the central storyline. Jim Shooter initiated the sequel shortly after the commercial success of the first Secret Wars. However, the production encountered challenges, including scripting delays, the replacement of initial artist Sal Buscema with Al Milgram, and Shooter's extensive involvement in the tie-in scripts, demanding rewrites to align with his interpretation of the Beyonders' narrative. As a personal aside, I must admit that Jim Shooter's writing style outside of the original Secret Wars has not really resonated with me. The series centers on the Beyonder's arrival on Earth, where he embarks on a quest to comprehend human existence. His initial attempts to grasp basic human activities are followed by his entanglement with organized crime and an obsessive interest in technology. Earth's heroes, growing suspicious of his motives, prompt the Beyonder to withdraw. Mephisto attempts to exploit the situation by recruiting supervillains, but their efforts are thwarted by the Thing, who receives augmented strength. The series also clarifies Doctor Doom's presence in the original Secret Wars, revealing that the Beyonder manipulated his personal timeline. The narrative culminates with the heroes preventing the Beyonder from causing planetary destruction, as Mephisto attempts to capitalize on his vulnerability. Critically, Secret Wars 2 received mixed reviews. While commercially successful, it was criticized for its convoluted plot, heavy-handed writing, and an extensive number of tie-in issues required to fully comprehend the story. Nevertheless, it established the precedent, large-scale crossover events in the Marvel Universe, better or for worse. Between the years of 1986 and 1990, Marvel delivered some of its most iconic and influential storylines. Heroes and villains clashed in Mutant Massacre, the first X-Men crossover that changed the team forever. Spider-Man's darkest days began with Kraven's Last Hunt. The Inferno event turned New York into a literal hellscape, and Acts of Vengence saw villains swapping enemies in an all-out battle of wits and power. Marvel events in this era weren't just about big fights, they were about consequences. Heroes lost, worlds crumbled, and the stories pushed characters to their limit, in ways that still resonate today. Mutant Massacre was a 1986 Marvel Comics crossover storyline that primarily took place in Uncanny X-Men issues 210 through 213 and X-Factor issues 9 through 11. With additional tie-ins of Thor issue 373, The New Mutants number 46, and Power Pack issue number 27. Although always not considered to be officially part of the crossover, Daredevil issue number 238 took place after the events of Mutant Massacre and followed Sabretooth's escape from the X-Mansion. The story of the Mutant Massacre revolves around the Marauders, a team of mutant assassins employed by Mr. Sinister, track a mutant named Tommy back to the underground tunnel of the Morlocks, an outcast community of mutants living beneath New York City. Without warning, the Marauders launch a ruthless massacre, slaughtering hundreds of Morlocks before the X-Men, X-Factor, and Power Pack intervene. Though the heroes fight to minimize the carnage, they suffer devastating losses. The X-Men are hit especially hard. Colossus is severely wounded, Shadowcat becomes trapped in her phased form, and Nightcrawler is left comatose after being ambushed by Riptide. X-Factor's Angel endures one of the most brutal fates, as he is pinned to the wall by the Marauder harpoon, leaving his wings so badly damaged that they later required amputation. Thor arrives too late to prevent the massacre, but incinerates the Morlock tunnels with fire, unknowingly leading the X-Men to briefly believe that the New Mutants perished in the blaze. Meanwhile, Wolverine battles Sabretooth, who later infiltrates the X-Mansion, only to be driven away by Psylocke, marking her official induction into the X-Men. The massacre leaves lasting consequences across the X-universe. Apocalypse seizes the opportunity to transform Angel, who lost his wings, into his Horseman of Death, later becoming known as Archangel. Mask assumes control of the surviving Morlocks using his grotesque powers to forcibly disfigure them, and Wolverine secretly discovers that Jean Grey is alive after detecting her scent in the tunnels, but he chooses to keep this revelation to himself. Years later, it is revealed that Mr. Sinister ordered the massacre to eliminate the Morlocks, who are actually the failed genetic experiments of the Dark Beast. Beast, a twisted version of Hank McCoy from the Age of Apocalypse time. Further retcons exposed Gambit's hidden role. He was unknowingly hired by Sinister to assemble the Marauders, leading to his temporary expulsion from the X-Men when the truth is revealed. Mutant Massacre was originally conceived by Chris Claremont as a storyline within Uncanny X-Men, but X-Factor writer Louise Simon suggested expanding it to a crossover, arguing that a storyline of this magnitude needed to be told across multiple books. The creative teams collaborated extensively, exchanging scripts and discussing the interconnected storylines, though Simonson later admitted that the coordination was horrible despite the event's success. Walt Simonson, who wrote the Thor tie-ins and penciled X-Factor, explained that the goal was to craft a crossover that could be followed through any one series, though reading them all provided a fuller picture. Mutant Massacre set the tone for future events, proving that large-scale, interconnected narratives could reshape the mutant mythos and sell books. Crossover proved to be an unexpected success, significantly boosting sales for Marvel's mutant titles and establishing the tradition of annual X-Men crossovers that would continue for years to come. I've already covered Kraven's Last Hunt in a previous video, but it's such an important Spider-Man story that it's worth revisiting its impacting legacy. Kraven's Last Hunt is a 1987 Spider-Man storyline by J.M. DeMatteis and Mike Zeck, spanning Web of Spider-Man issues number 31 and 32, The Amazing Spider-Man 293 and 294, and Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man 131 and 132. Widely regarded as one of the greatest Spider-Man stories ever told, it was originally published without an overarching title, later collected as Fearful Symmetry, Kraven's Last Hunt, before later editions dropped Fearful Symmetry entirely. After this story, Kraven the Hunter remained absent from Marvel Comics until 2009. The storyline began as a rejected Wonder Man pitch before DeMatteis adapted it for Batman, exploring what would happen if the Joker killed Batman, only for the Joker to regain his sanity. After DC rejected it due to similarities with The Killing Joke, DeMatteis repitched it using Hugo Strange, but was again turned down. Finally, he reworked it for Marvel, initially creating a new villain before swapping in Kraven after rereading the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. Marvel's decision to marry Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson led DeMatteis to make the relationship a central emotional thread. Editor Jim Salicrup ensured the story ran across all three Spider-Man titles to prevent other stories from lessening its impact. Mike Zeck created all 6 covers before drawing the interiors, with the Web of Spider-Man number 32 Resurrection cover becoming one of the most iconic Spider-Man images in all of comics. The original Batman concept was eventually published by DC in Batman Legends of the Dark Knight number 65 through 68 as Going Sane in 1994. The story sees Kraven ambushing and shooting Spider-Man with a tranquilizer before burying him with donning a Spider-Man costume to prove himself the superior version. He brutally takes down criminals and captures Vermin, who Spider-Man once needed Captain America's help to defeat. 2 weeks later, Spider-Man revives and digs himself out, immediately confronting Kraven despite not being fully recovered. Kraven refuses to fight, believing he has already won by proving himself the better Spider-Man. As a final act, he releases Vermin, defeats Spider-Man, only for Kraven to intervene. With his personal victory complete, Kraven reflects on his own life and takes his own with a rifle, leaving behind a confession and photographic proof of his actions. Spider-Man later captures Vermin and hands him over to the authorities, vowing to get him help. Kraven's Last Hunt is a psychological exploration of Spider-Man's identity and how others perceive him. Kraven sees Spider-Man as a dark, ruthless predator, failing to understand that Peter Parker remains compassionate and human no matter the mask. The story is framed by lines from William Blake's poem, The Tiger, replacing Tiger with Spider. Frequently ranked among the best Spider-Man stories ever, it was named the greatest by Comic Book Resources, while Complex and IGN placed it in their top 5. Comic Book Revolution praised its portrayal of Kraven and the Peter/Mary Jane marriage, particularly Mary Jane's reaction to Peter's disappearance. By running across all 3 Spider-Man titles, Marvel gave Kraven's Last Hunt an event feel, cementing its legacy as a groundbreaking, influential story that remains one of the most celebrated in Spider-Man's history. If you want an even deeper breakdown, be sure to check out my previous video where I covered the full story in detail. Fall of the Mutants is a Marvel Comics crossover storyline that ran from January to March 1988, involving 3 key titles: The Uncanny X-Men number 225 through 227, X-Factor number 24 through 26, and New Mutants number 59 through 61. The story didn't directly intertwine the events of each series, but instead thematically linked them, with each team facing significant challenges and changes in their status quo. Crossover's promotion was unique, capitalizing on the growing fear around the mutant menace and focusing on the mutant registration, Marvel released faux propaganda advertisements urging readers to register as mutants with the tagline, "You know what your children are," setting the tone for dystopian future explored in the Days of Future Past story. Uncanny X-Men team travels to Dallas to search for their missing leader Storm, who is on a mission to restore her powers. Meanwhile, they encounter Freedom Force, a government-sponsored team of reformed villains, leading to a battle that is interrupted by Destiny's prophecy. Everyone inside a specific Dallas skyscraper will be dead by dawn. As bizarre phenomena, including snow and prehistoric creatures, begin to appear, the X-Men and Freedom Force team up to face the threat. Storm and Forge, meanwhile, battle the demon adversary, and Forge sacrifices the souls of 9 X-Men to banish him. However, Goddess Roma resurrects the team and gives them the Siege Perilous, a device that can reset time should they be discovered. In X-Factor, Cyclops, Marvel, Beast, Iceman, and Caliban are captured by Apocalypse, who tries to recruit them for his war against humanity. They refuse, leading to a battle with Apocalypse's 4 horsemen. Angel is revealed as the Horseman of Death, having been transformed by Apocalypse. Despite their efforts, Apocalypse easily repels them and retreats, leaving the team to crash his airship onto their headquarters. In New Mutants, the team visits their friend Birdbrain on his remote island, where they uncover experiments on semi-sentient creatures by the Animator. After a confrontation with the anti-mutant group The Right, Cypher is tragically killed while saving Wolfsbane. The New Mutants return home, and Magneto, blaming humanity for Cypher's death, leaves the group to continue Professor X's dream of peaceful coexistence. Though not officially part of the event, several Marvel comics were marketed as Fall of the Mutant Time, including Captain America number 339, Daredevil number 252, Power Pack number 35, Fantastic Four number 312, and Hulk number 34. Crossover is unique in that it emphasized thematic connections rather than direct plot overlap, with each team dealing with a significant shift in their narrative. The Fall of Mutants left a lasting legacy, marking pivotal moments in the histories of the X-Men, X-Factor, and New Mutants, shaping their stories for years to come. The Evolutionary War is a Marvel crossover event that ran through most of the 1988 annuals, marking a significant moment in Marvel's crossover storytelling. It was the first major Marvel event to exclusively take place in annuals, setting a precedent for future crossover events, including Atlantis Attacks in 1989. The storyline was written by an ensemble of renowned writers such as Jerry Conway, Steve Englehart, Louise Simonson, Chris Claremont, and Steve Gerber. Plot centers on the High Evolutionary, a brilliant but unstable geneticist who has spent his life striving to unlock the mysteries of life and to create the new intelligent being. His crowning achievement was the creation of Counter-Earth, a mere planet he created for his genetic experiment. However, his grand plans are shattered when the Beyonders capture Counter-Earth for their cosmic museum, dwarfing his aspirations to godhood. His failure leads him into a deep depression, and in an attempt to end this suffering, he provokes the Hulk into damaging his armor, hoping to die. The Evolutionary survives and uses his survival as a turning point to rededicate himself, accelerating the evolution of humanity. The ultimate goal of creating a race superior to all others, including the Beyonders. The Evolutionary initiates several operations to further his goal. His Purifiers, specialized troops he commands, are sent to sterilize primitive races in Subterranean. But the discovery of a mutant moloid attracts the intervention of X-Factor and Apocalypse. The resulting battle in space convinces the Evolutionary to cease his operations there, as he is persuaded by Apocalypse that the Subterraneans have potential. Meanwhile, in Bogota, the Evolutionary sends his Eliminators to wipe out a drug cartel. Punisher arrives on the scene, and the brutal battle ends with him dispatching both the Purifiers and the drug cartel members. The Evolutionary then tries to recruit the Eternals to map the genetic code of the Silver Surfer, but the Surfer refuses, and the Eternals side with him to thwart the Evolutionary's plan. Next, the Purifiers target mutants, including Magma, whom they capture from Nova Roma. This sparks a rescue mission from the Hellfire Club and the New Mutants, with Mirage inadvertently enhancing her powers during the battle. At the same time, in New York City, a power struggle unfolds as the Kingpin, angered by disruptions to his drug empire, learns of the Evolutionary's plans and allows the information to reach Spider-Man, Daredevil, and Speedball, who manage to stop the Purifiers from sterilizing the city's undesirables. In a pivotal move, the Evolutionary targets the Inhumans to obtain the Terrigen Mists, in a bid to enhance his evolutionary scheme. He leads an attack against the blue area of the moon to capture the Inhumans' Mist. Quicksilver and the Inhumans, with help from the Fantastic Four, successfully repel the invaders. The Evolutionary's operations then shift to the Savage Land, where he aims to restore the damage caused by Terminus. With the help of Garok the Petrified Man, he is able to restore the land, and the survivors of Terminus' initial attack turn from their extra-dimensional refuge. Further complicating matters, the Evolutionary sends his exterminators to steal the nexus of all realities in the Everglades, fearing contamination of humanity's genetic purity. But Spider-Man and Man-Thing defeat the exterminators. In the grandest stage of his plans, Evolutionary constructs a genetic bomb that would alter all life on Earth. To complete it, he sends his gatherers and the censors to Wakanda to obtain vibranium. Unbeknownst to him, Bill Foster, one of the scientists working for the Evolutionary, secretly alerts the Black Panther, who along with the West Coast Avengers defends Wakanda. Despite their best efforts, the vibranium is stolen. Estranged Avengers, including Moon Knight, Tigra, and Mockingbird, come across the Evolutionary Citadel in the Savage Land, where they rescue Bill Foster, who recovers his powers as Giant Man. Before the Evolutionary can complete his bomb, the Avengers use his own technology to hyper-evolve Hercules to match the Evolutionary's power in combat. In an epic battle, both Hercules and the High Evolutionary are seemingly destroyed, leaving the Avengers to stop the genetic bomb and save the world. In addition to the main story, each chapter of the crossover features a backup series titled The High Evolutionary, written by Mark Brunwald, with art by Paris Collins and Ron Lim. These backup stories delve into the origins of the High Evolutionary, recounting his previous exploits and the key events in which he was involved, such as the origins of Spider-Woman, Quicksilver, and Scarlet Witch. The series also explains how the High Evolutionary survived his suicide attempt and began plotting the Evolutionary War. It's revealed that a mysterious benefactor helped him unlock the secrets of the human genetic code, though the identity of this benefactor is not immediately clear. It was speculated for years that the benefactor was Fader of the Inhumans, or Mr. Sinister of the X-Men, a theory that was confirmed by Marvel years later. Additionally, while the storyline and the main crossovers were meant to be read in sequence, there was a mix-up in the order of the backup stories in Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 22 and Fantastic Four Annual 21. However, these discrepancies are clarified through the events of the stories themselves. The event was so wide-reaching that even Alf Annual number 1, a comic based on the TV series Alf, included a tongue-in-cheek tie-in featuring the High Evolutionary meeting Alf, which was later confirmed as canonical by the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. In 1989, Marvel Comics decided to do a crossover storyline that spanned multiple series, primarily affecting the X-Men titles, but extending to other corners of the Marvel Universe. This event was called Inferno. The event unfolded across Uncanny X-Men number 239 through 243, X-Factor 36 through 39, and Annual number 4, the New Mutants number 71 through 73, and the Exterminators number 1 through 4. Numerous tie-in issues spread throughout the Marvel line, including Excalibur 6 and 7, Avengers 298 through 300, Daredevils 262 through 263 and 265, Power Pack issues 42 through 44, Cloak and Dagger Volume 3 number 4, Fantastic Four number 322 through 324, and several Spider-Man issues. So yeah, you could say that there are quite a few issues that tie into Inferno. It was probably the biggest event in 1988. Central conflict of Inferno was a demonic invasion of New York City, orchestrated by the demons of Sim and Inashtrith. Their goal was to use Atlani Rasputin magic of the New Mutants, whose mutant abilities allowed her to open portals between Limbo and Earth to permanently merge the two realms. Manipulated by Inashtrith, Lana embraced her demonic side, transforming into the Darkchild and unleashing chaos upon Manhattan. Simultaneously, Madeline Pryor, Cyclops' estranged wife and a clone of Jean Grey, created by Mr. Sinister, succumbed to the dark forces and was reborn as the Goblin Queen. Inashtrith offered her a deal. He would help her find her kidnapped son Nathan in exchange for her existence in solidifying Limbo's foothold on. Under his influence, Madeline set out to sacrifice Nathan to open a permanent gateway between dimensions. Throughout the event, numerous Marvel heroes, including the Avengers, Fantastic Four, Daredevil, Power Pack, and Spider-Man, fought to defend New York against the waves of demons. Even inanimate objects became possessed, attacking citizens in bizarre and nightmarish ways. In a particularly memorable moment, Spider-Man initially believed the supernatural chaos was illusion, orchestrated by Mysterio, only to discover that the nightmare was real. As the event reached its climax, Illyana, horrified by her transformation and by the destruction that she had unleashed, ultimately sacrificed her demonic powers to end the invasion. reverting to a child in the process. Meanwhile, the X-Men and X-Factor confronted the Goblin Queen in a final showdown. Learning the truth about her origins, Madeline Pryor, overcome by rage and grief, attempted to take down Jean Grey with her in death. Jean, aided by the fragment of the Phoenix Force, survived, breaking Madeline's mental hold over her. In the aftermath, many New Yorkers dismissed the entire ordeal as a mass hallucination, despite the extensive destruction left in its way. The X-Men and X-Factor turned their attention to Mr. Sinister, leading to a climactic battle at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. Before his apparent demise at the hands of Cyclops, Sinister revealed his long-running manipulations of Scott's life, including orchestrating his marriage to Madeline. The Inferno crossover was the culmination of years of storylines, particularly those involving Illyana Rasputin and Madeline Pryor. Writers Chris Claremont and Louise Simonson, along with artists Brett Blevins, Mark Silvestri, and Walt Simonson, crafted a narrative that blended superhero action with horror and demonic fantasy. Editor Bob Harris maintained the extensive notes to ensure continuity, tracking individual character arcs over roughly 20 pages of timelines. Public reception at the time was generally positive, especially among the X-Men fans who appreciated the payoff to long-running subplots. The horror aesthetic and the darker tone were well received, though some readers found the sheer number of tie-ins overwhelming. Critics and modern readers have noted that Inferno marked a transition in Marvel's storytelling, blending supernatural horror with superhero drama in a way that influenced later events. Discussions on platforms like Reddit and fan forums reveal a split in opinion. Some hail Inferno as a classic, praising its ambitious scope and character development, while others find the crossover bloated with too many tie-ins, diluting the main story. One fan observed, Inferno was kind of a kiss goodbye to the old standard of comics, referencing how the event reflected shifting trends in the industry. Despite its divisiveness, Inferno remains one of Marvel's most memorable crossovers, leaving a lasting impact on characters like Illyana, Madeline Pryor, and Nathan Summers, who would later become Cable. The event's legacy continues to be explored in later comics, with elements revisited even today in modern X-Men storylines. In the summer of 1989, Atlantis Attacks was a crossover event that ran through Marvel's summer annuals, expanding on the format established by 1988's The Evolutionary War. While the title suggests a major Atlantean assault, Atlantis and its then leader Attuma play a relatively minor role. True masterminds behind the storyline are the Lemurians, led by Lyra, and the deviant priest Gar, who seeks to bring back the seven-headed elder god Set. Unlike the Evolutionary War, which featured mostly standalone stories tied together by the High Evolutionary scheme, Atlantis Attacks was a true series, with many annuals ending in cliffhangers that directly continued into the next installment. Crossover spanned 14 parts in total. It also included a 14-part backup feature called The Serpent Crown Saga, written by Peter Sanderson with art by Mark Bagley, detailing the history of the Serpent Crown for new readers. Crossover begins when the Silver Surfer, distracted by the second Kree Skrull War, unwittingly revives Gar from a fungal state. This happened in Silver Surfer Annual number 2. Realizing he cannot defeat the Surfer, Gar flees to Earth and allies with Lyra. Together, they plan to summon Set, using the Serpent Crown. Gar recruits Attuma, promising him command of their combined army. Attuma's Atlanteans, Lyra's Lemurian rebels, and Gar's deviants to weaken the surface world in preparation for Set's return. Namor and Iron Man, investigating a Hydra operation, discover Attuma's forces, attempting to infiltrate the Panama Canal. Battle ensues with the heroes holding off the invasion until the US Air Force intervenes. Meanwhile, Gar and Lyra establish a base on Magneto's former island in the Bermuda Triangle, where they begin reconstructing the Serpent Crown. They also free the Abomination, who is possessed by Tyrannus, and restore his original mind. Gar's forces launch a coordinated attack on the US, with Attuma's lieutenants, U-Man, Tyrak, Lord Arno, and Warlord Crane, leading separate assaults on key military installations. Captain America assembles the Avengers to stop them, and the team successfully repel the attacks. Meanwhile, a team of deviants disguised as New Mutant members steal the Horn of Doom, summoning a sea monster that devastates Atlantis as a sacrifice to Set. Namorita and the New Mutants ultimately defeat the creature, but Atlantis is left in ruins. Gar also abducts several female heroes, including Marvel Girl, Invisible Woman, Scarlet Witch, and She-Hulk, branding them as the 7 Brides of Set. These women are sent on missions to receive mystical artifacts to complete the summoning ritual. While She-Hulk is freed by Captain America and the West Coast Avengers, the other brides succeed. Gar then sends Attuma to invade New York City, where the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and the US military hold off Atlantean army until Spider-Man defeats their trump card. massive creature called the Megasaur. While this battle rages, Lyra's forces destroy the now unprotected city of Atlantis. Upon learning of this betrayal, the Atlantean army withdraws, and a stunned Attuma surrenders. Gar's final ritual succeeds, and Set begins breaking into Earth's dimension. In response, Thor, Doctor Strange, Quasar, and the Thing enter Set's realm to battle him directly. With Gaia trapped and unable to help, Thor transforms into Demogorgon, the God Eater. After briefly being consumed himself, Thor gains partial control of Demogorgon, using his power to sever Set's 7 heads and scatter them across different dimensions. Back on Earth, the Avengers, Fantastic Four, and other heroes launch an assault on Lyra's undersea stronghold. As Gar absorbs the power of the Serpent Crown, he betrays Lyra, triggering the battle between himself and the Spirit of the Crown, and the Spirit of the Crown's former wielder, Naga. This results in all 3 villains, Gar, Lyra, and Naga, vanishing into oblivion, with the Serpent Crown on the verge of exploding, the former brides of Set casted into a trench, where it detonates harmlessly. While ambitious in scope, the event received mixed to positive reviews from both fans and critics. Many readers appreciated the grand scale of the story, which involved Atlantis, the Serpent Crown, and the return of Set, giving it a strong connection to Marvel's mystical and cosmic lore. The attempt to weave together numerous characters and teams, the Avengers, Fantastic Four, X-Men, Spider-Man, Daredevil, and more, was seen as a bold narrative choice. One of the biggest criticisms was its repetitive formula, as many of the annuals followed a similar structure. The Lemurians and Set followers attack, a hero fights back, and some aspect of the villain's plan progresses regardless, leading to a sense of redundancy across the installments. Additionally, because the story is told across multiple annuals with different creative teams, tone and quality varied significantly, making some issues feel disconnected or rushed. While the event promised major consequences with the potential destruction of the world and the enslavement of humanity by Set, many fans felt that it lacked the lasting impact of other Marvel crossovers like Inferno or Acts of Vengence, as much of the damage was undone by the end. Despite these flaws, the backup stories detailing the history of the Serpent Crown and Set's influence on humanity were well received, adding depth and historical connections that enriched the event. Atlantis Attacks remains a memorable Marvel event, especially fans of Namor, the Serpent Crown mythology, and Marvel's undersea lore. It's often remembered as a classic example of the late 80s Marvel crossover, setting the stage for future annual-based events like the Terminus Factor and Subterranean Wars. Marvel has referenced Atlantis Attack in later stories, and it was even loosely revisited in a 2020 mini-event of the same name, involving Namor and the Agents of Atlas. The original remains a cult favorite, appreciated for its ambitious storytelling, but often criticized for its execution. Acts of Vengence was a company-wide crossover event from late 1989 into early 1990. Unlike the previous 3 fall crossovers, which revolved around the X-Men and their extended universe, Acts of Vengeance focused primarily on the Avengers and the Fantastic Four. Promotional materials teased the event as a shakeup of the traditional hero-villain dynamic, featuring an array of supervillains facing off against the heroes they had never encountered before. Core titles of the crossover included Avengers, Avengers Spotlight, Avengers West Coast, Captain America, Iron Man, Quasar, Thor, and Fantastic Four. Major tie-ins extended across the Amazing Spider-Man and other Spider-Man titles, Uncanny X-Men, and the second Damage Control Limited series. And an epilogue appeared in Cloak and Dagger, Web of Spider-Man, and Avengers Annual. Unlike later Marvel events, Acts of Vengeance did not follow a structured narrative, rather served as a conceptual crossover exploring what would happen if heroes faced villains outside of their usual rogues gallery. This led to matchups such as Spider-Man vs. Gravitron, Daredevil vs. Ultron, and the Hulk vs. Grey Gargoyle. In many ways, Acts of Vengeance was a spiritual predecessor to Marvel's Dark Reign, where villains temporarily seized power in unexpected ways. At the heart of the event was a secretive alliance of Marvel's top villains, known as the Prime Movers. This cabal, composed of Doctor Doom, Magneto, Kingpin, Wizard, Mandarin, and Red Skull, believed that they were the masterminds behind the villain-swapping strategy. They were all being manipulated by Loki, who disguised himself as an unassuming man in a white suit, playing each villain against each other while orchestrating the event from behind the scenes. The villains reasoned that years of constant defeat were due to their repetitive strategies, and by targeting unfamiliar heroes, they could catch them off guard and achieve victory. The event also introduced major status quo changes for certain characters. Acts of Vengeance marked the debut of Psylocke in the body of Quanon, under the name Lady Mandarin. Additionally, Spider-Man temporarily gained the Captain Universe powers, which he used to defeat the Tri-Sentinel created by Loki. Magneto's involvement was particularly controversial among Marvel writers at the time, due to the Red Skull also being a member. This led to Mark Gruenwald retconning his participation in Captain America's number 367, revealing that Magneto had only joined Villains Alliance as a ruse, capture and bury the Red Skull alive. The event also saw the destruction of Avengers Island and the conclusion of long-running subplots. Notably, the Acts of Vengeance branding on the certain issues was inconsistent. While core issues prominently displayed the event banner, tie-ins had smaller event tags in the corner. Iron Man number 250, despite featuring the branding, was mistakenly included. It actually fits better with the Iron Man / Doctor Doom Camelot trilogy from Iron Man number 149 and 150. Nevertheless, it thematically aligns with the Acts of Vengeance and is often read alongside the event. In 2019, Marvel published Acts of Evil, a thematic sequel marking the event's 30th anniversary. While not a direct continuation, it embraced a similar concept of unexpected hero and villain matchups across various titles. Days of Future Present was a 1990 crossover appearing in the page of the Fantastic Annual number 23, X-Factor Annual number 5, New Mutants Annual number 6, and Uncanny X-Men Annual number 14. These 4 annuals made up the complete story, with Uncanny X-Men Annual number 14 also containing a backup story, The Fundamental Things, which adds some extra context to Rachel Summers and Franklin Richards' journey. Serving as a sequel to the Days of Futures Past, it follows an adult Franklin Richard from a dystopian future as he inadvertently reshapes reality. The story unites the Fantastic Four, X-Factor, New Mutants, and a scattered X-Men team against the threat Franklin poses. It also introduces Gambit and features the first meeting between Jean Grey and her future daughter, Rachel Summers, as well as an early moment connecting Cyclops' infant son, Nathan Christopher Summers, with the time-traveling Cable. After returning from space, the Fantastic Four arrive at Four Freedoms Plaza, only to find it replaced by the original Baxter building from years ago. Confused, they investigate and discover an adult Franklin Richards, who is equally bewildered. He recognizes them, but is shocked to see his younger self still a child. His appearance disrupts reality, drawing the attention of Rachel Summers, Forge, and Banshee, as well as the mutant hunter Ahab, who launches an attack using miniature sentinels. During the chaos, Franklin vanishes. Meanwhile, Franklin materializes aboard X-Factor's ship. Because the ship did not exist in his memories of the past, it begins to fade from existence. X-Factor, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Archangel, Iceman, and Beast teams up with the Fantastic Four, Rachel, Forge, and Banshee to track Franklin down. Rachel, now wielding the Phoenix Force, is stunned to see Franklin alive, as she remembers him dying at the hands of Sentinels in her timeline. Ahab reappears, forcing the heroes into battle. Amid the fight, Jean Grey meets Rachel for the first time, but refuses to acknowledge her as her daughter. Franklin, further confused by these contradictions, panics when he sees a baby Nathan Christopher Summers, the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. Overwhelmed, he knowingly caused the infant to disappear. Franklin then appears at Xavier's school, where the New Mutants, led by Cable, encounter him. The young mutants Sunspot, Warlock, Boom Boom, Cannonball, Richter, and Wolfsbane come face to face with adult versions of themselves, including a resurrected Cypher, whom they know to be dead. This confrontation reveals that Franklin is unintentionally warping reality. Before they can reach him, he disappears once again. Ahab arrives, launching another attack. In response, Franklin instinctively obliterates the Hounds, revealing his immense powers. Realizing the danger he poses, both the older and younger Franklins work together to seal the younger one's abilities, causing him to slip into a coma. With his task complete, adult Franklin vanishes. After these events, Franklin, still unconscious, begins to fade. Rachel and Franklin's dream self decide to leave together to create a new future. Before departing, Franklin manipulates Reed and Sue Richards into a state of euphoria, but they won't stop him. With the young Franklin still comatose and growing weaker, Hero scrambles for a solution. At Xavier's school, the scattered X-Men regroup. Storm, now leading the team, works alongside Forge and Banshee. Gambit makes his first appearance, aiding the X-Men in tracking Franklin. Ahab returns and successfully captures Cyclops and Sue Storm, transforming them into Hounds under his control. Using them, he attempts to hunt down Franklin, Rachel, and baby Nathan. A final battle ensues, during which Storm deduces that the adult Franklin is merely a dream self, projected into the past. at the moment of his death in the future. Sustaining himself by draining energy from Rachel and young Franklin, he unwittingly puts them at risk. Realizing the truth, Franklin releases his stolen energy and vanishes. With his departure, young Franklin regains consciousness, his powers intact. Rachel, using the Phoenix Force, restores Cyclops and Sue Storm to normal. X-Factor's ship, which had disappeared, is also restored. Rachel, still wearing her Hound uniform, realizes that despite everything, her dystopian future has not been erased. Jean watches but does not reach out to comfort her. Heartbroken, Rachel departs. Later, Jean contemplates their connection, unsure of how to feel about her supposed daughter from the future. In the aftermath, Reed and Sue Richards struggle with the implication of Franklin's possible future. Some appreciate its ambitious crossover nature, but felt short of its predecessor, Days of Future Past. On Goodreads, the story holds an average rating of 3.47 out of 5. Readers highlighted the complexity of the narrative and the involvement of multiple Marvel teams. One reviewer noted that while the story had potential, its execution was inconsistent, mentioning that some issues were better than others. He remarked that, compared to Days of Future Past, this sequel felt less compelling. A Reddit user expressed a more positive sentiment, highlighting the tragic elements of the story. They appreciated the character arc of Franklin Richard, who after rejecting his death, travels back in time seeking familiarity, but finds the past altered. The user's admiration for the storyline suggests it had impactful moments that resonated with some readers. In summary, Days of Future Present elicited mixed responses. While some readers valued its ambitious crossover and emotional depth, others felt it didn't measure up to the original Days of Future Past storyline, citing inconsistencies and less compelling execution. And last on our list is X-tinction Agenda, which came out in 1990. It was a crossover storyline that ran through Uncanny X-Men, X-Factor, and New Mutants. It marked the first time that all three mutant teams united in a single battle, facing the oppressive Genosian government. The event also served as a reunion for the X-Men who had been scattered after the events of Uncanny X-Men 246 through 251. Genosha, a nation built on mutant exploitation, launches an attack on the X-Mansion after the leadership of the cybernetic villain Cameron Hodge. Their forces, including an amnesiac Havoc, abduct Storm and several new mutants: Warlock, Boom Boom, Richter, and Wolfbane. During an escape attempt, Warlock is killed when his life energy is forcibly drained by Hodge. Wolfbane, captured again, is brainwashed and transformed into one of Genosha's enslaved mutates. Determined to rescue their teammate, the remaining X-Men and New Mutants enlist X-Factor and launch a counterattack on Genosha. They are ambushed by Havoc and the Genosian magistrates. While Cyclops tries to restore his brother's memories, Genosians suffer humiliating loss. Meanwhile, Wolverine, Psylocke, and Jubilee rescue Richter and Boom Boom before infiltrating Genosha disguised as magistrates. Cover is blown when Havoc recognizes his lover's stolen uniform attacks them. Psylocke manages to subdue Havoc, but both she and Wolverine are captured by Hodge. Elsewhere, Storm, seeking revenge against the scientist David Moreau, is also caught and enslaved. Jean Grey, Cable, Gambit, Sunspot, and Forge attempt to sabotage the capital city, but their powers are neutralized by Wipeout, another Genosian magistrate. The remaining heroes set a trap, but are ultimately overpowered. Havoc, still struggling with his lost memories, finally regains his identity during a battle with Cyclops. Realizing he could do more good from the inside, fakes loyalty to Genosha by knocking out Cyclops and handing him over to Hodge. With the heroes in prison, Genosha puts them on trial. Wolverine makes a failed assassination attempt on the judge, leading to the team being turned over to Hodge. Cyclops, pretending to be broken by torture, submits to the mutate process, but later escapes, taking advantage of their captor's overconfidence. Gambit picks their locks using a dart fired at him earlier. Cameron Hodge, now turning against Genosha itself, kills several magistrates, including Wipeout. With their captors in disarray, the chief magistrate turns to the X-Men for help. Using Storm's powers, she restores the mutants' abilities, breaking their restraints and even reversing Storm's brainwashing and age regression. As the heroes regroup, Jubilee, Richter, and Boom Boom encounter Moreau, who has developed a way to fight Hodge. He leads them to a citadel where they reunite with their teams. Moreau helps Wolfsbane break her brainwashing by forcing her to stay in wolf form. He then shoots Hodge with a prototype weapon, but is killed before he can finish him off. The mutants pursue Hodge through the citadel, with Cyclops and Havoc finally destroying his body. However, due to a mystical deal with an asterisk, Hodge's severed head remains alive. Richter collapses the citadel, burying him alive. With Genosha freed from Hodge's influence, Havoc and Wolfsbane choose to remain behind to help mend the fractured X-Factor Nation. The X-Men and their allies return home and hold a funeral for Warlock, spreading his ashes over the grave of his fallen friend Cypher. X-tinction Agenda was a well-received crossover, though it had its share of criticisms. At the time of its release, it was a major success due to the involvement of artists Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld, both of whom were rising stars in the industry. Critically, the crossover was praised for uniting the three major mutant teams, X-Men, X-Factor, and New Mutants, for the first time in a major storyline. The stakes were high, with character deaths and major status quo shifts. Fans genuinely enjoyed the intense action and darker themes surrounding the mutant slavery of Genosha. The psychological toll on Wolfsbane, who was transformed into a mutant and bound to havoc, became an enduring plotline that carried over into the later X-Factor story. Some readers and critics felt that the story was overly long and repetitive, with heroes being captured and escaping multiple times. Others noted that Cameron Hodge, while a formidable villain, became a bit cartoonish in his over-the-top evilness. Crossover also sidelined some characters, with certain team members getting little to do. Despite these criticisms, X-tinction Agenda remains a significant storyline in X-Men history, marking a transition in the X-books. Overall, while not as universally beloved as some other X-Men crossover, X-tinction Agenda was an important and commercially successful event that had lasting effects on the X-Men mythos. And so, with these events, Marvel cemented the blueprint for modern event storytelling. The crossovers weren't just about the spectacle, they reshaped entire franchises, introduced lasting character arcs, and left ripple effects that would be felt for years. The X-Men evolved through the Mutant Massacre, Inferno, and X-tinction Agenda. Spider-Man faced his darkest moments, and the Avengers stood against impossible odds. Stories were about survival, loss, and the ever-growing complexity of the Marvel Universe. As the 80s ended and the 90s approached, Marvel wasn't slowing down. The events would only get bigger, bolder, and more ambitious. Looking back, these late 80s crossovers laid the foundation for everything that was to come. The 90s were a turning point for Marvel Comics, and you can see that shift by looking at their events. In the late 80s, Marvel would put out a handful of crossovers, sometimes only one big event per year. But once the 90s hit, things changed. Suddenly, crossovers were everywhere, spanning multiple books and dominating the publishing line. That's why, even though the last two videos in the series covered multiple years at a time, this one is only focused on 1991 and 1992. And going forward, that's probably going to be the norm. These 2 years alone gave us some of Marvel's biggest and most defining events of the era, from the universe-shaking Infinity Gauntlet to the sprawling mutant conflicts of X-cutioners Song and Operation Galactic Storm. Some of these events were instant classics, while others not so much, but each one played a role in shaping Marvel's new era of interconnected storytelling. So let's take a look back at all of Marvel's major events from 1991 and 1992. What worked, what didn't, and how they set the stage for the heavy crossover decade to come. The Muir Island Saga was a 5-part Marvel crossover event featuring the X-Men and X-Factor, published in 1991. This storyline ran through Uncanny X-Men number 278 through 280 and X-Factor 69 through 7, marking a major turning point for both teams and setting the stage for X-Men's 90s relaunch. After warnings from Forge and Banshee, X-Men and Professor X head to Muir Island to investigate strange happenings, only to find that the Shadow King has taken control of its inhabitants. They don't get far before they're captured. Meanwhile, Professor X returns to his mansion, now in ruins after the events of Inferno, to use Cerebro, but instead finds Stevie Hunter being hunted by Colossus. Forced into battle, Xavier manages to free Colossus, but in doing so, has to erase the Peter Nicholas persona that Colossus had been living under since passing through the Siege Perilous. Realizing the full scope of the threat, Xavier calls on his original student, now operating as X-Factor, for backup. Back on Muir Island, Wolverine splits off from the group and is immediately ambushed. Forge manages to take him down and break the Shadow King's control, then does the same to Rogue when she appears, ready to attack. Banshee shows up next, also brainwashed, but Forge quickly neutralizes and frees him as well. Once Banshee is back to himself, he fills the group in on what's been happening. Shadow King has been using Polaris as a living nexus between the physical world and the astral plane, ever since Zaldane stripped her of her magnetic abilities. Now she's absorbing negative energy and using it to enhance her strength, making her a key part in the Shadow King's plan to amass unlimited power. The heroes quickly realize that breaking that connection might mean having to kill her. With X-Factor assembled, Professor X launches a full-on assault on Muir Island, using resources provided by Val Cooper. X-Factor lands first and swiftly takes out the island's defenses. Back at his base, Professor X comes under attack himself. Shadow King, using his host's body, Jacob Rice, goes after him directly. Believing he has control over everyone present, including Val Cooper, Rise is caught off guard when Cooper reveals herself to be Mystique in disguise and promptly kills him. But it's not over. Shadow King jumps bodies again, this time taking over Legion. On Muir Island, X-Factor and the freed X-Men finally reach Polaris, but before they can act, Legion sends off a massive explosive, devastating much of the island. Professor X arrives just in time to find Legion holding the X-Men hostage, but before Legion can do any more damage, Storm catches him off guard and frees the others. Knowing that they need to hit the Shadow King from both sides, Xavier decides to split the team. Half will try to sever Polaris' connection to the astral plane, while the other half will guard his body while he takes the fight to the Shadow King on the psychic battlefield. Once inside though, Xavier quickly realizes the Shadow King has grown too powerful for direct attack. Worse, the damage Xavier is taking on the astral plane is bleeding into his real body. Seeing this, Jean Grey pulls herself and the X-Men into the astral plane to assist. Meanwhile, in the physical world, Forge fights and defeats the still brainwashed Psylocke, then uses her psychic knife on Polaris to disrupt and destroy the Nexus. With his power source gone, the Shadow King is ripped apart. The Muir Island saga had massive lasting consequences for the X-Men universe, marking the end of an era and setting the stages for the franchise's 90s relaunch. Muir Island was left heavily damaged, forcing longtime residents like Moira McTaggart and her research team to relocate. Polaris lost the super strength she gained from absorbing negative energy, regained her original magnetic abilities. Professor X once again lost the use of his legs, putting him back in a wheelchair for the foreseeable future. Legion, his son, is left in a catatonic state, which set up major events down the road, eventually leading to Legion Quest and Age of Apocalypse. The X-Men abandoned their standardized team uniforms, returning to individual costumes, a shift that reflected the franchise's visual reinvention for the 90s. Colossus, now free of the Peter Nicholas identity, officially rejoined the team as well. Beyond the immediate changes to the X-Men status quo, this storyline marked the final issues of X-Factor in its original form before its transformation into a government-sponsored team. It also led directly into X-Men #1, which kicked off the next chapter of the franchise with the famous blue and gold team split. The Muir Island saga was a crucial transition between the X-Men's late 80s era and their explosive 90s reinvention, making it one of the most pivotal X-Men events of its time. In 1991, one of the most influential comic events in Marvel Comics was introduced, called the Infinity Gauntlet. Written by Jim Starlin and illustrated by George Perez and Ron Lim, this 6-issue limited series centers on Thanos and his pursuit of ultimate power through the 6 Infinity Gems, later known as the Infinity Stones in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Thanos believes that by wielding the gauntlet, he can prove his worthiness and earn her affection. His desire for Death's approval is not merely personal. Thanos' actions with the gauntlet have catastrophic consequences for the universe. In one of his first acts, he wipes out half of all life with the snap of his fingers, creating chaos across the cosmos. Surviving heroes, including Doctor Strange, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and others, form an alliance to stop Thanos, but their efforts are futile. Thanos is far too powerful. The gauntlet allows him to alter the very fabric of reality, reshaping the universe at will. His power is so overwhelming that the heroes realize that they must take a different approach than brute force. Despite their strength, Thanos' emotional instability and his obsession with Mystech's death make him a formidable opponent on a psychological level as well. Amidst the chaos, Adam Warlock emerges as a key player in this cosmic battle, having ties to the Soul Gem. Warlock becomes the central to the struggle against Thanos. While the heroes try to mount a resistance, it's clear that only someone with a deep understanding of the Gauntlet's power and consequences has the chance of defeating Thanos. Warlock's emotional intelligence and experience with cosmic forces give him a unique advantage. Though Thanos' power remains nearly unstoppable, 6 Infinity Gems, each tied to a specific aspect of the universe, grant incredible abilities. Space Gem allows for teleportation and manipulation of distances. Time Gem lets Thanos control the past, present, and future. The Reality Gem lets him alter the nature of existence itself. The Mind Gem grants ability to manipulate thoughts and consciousness. The Soul Gem provides control over life force forces, allowing Thanos to steal souls or manipulate life and death. And the Power Gem amplifies strength and energy. With all these powers at his disposal, Thanos becomes nearly invincible. Thanos' unrelenting desire to prove himself to Mistress Death, along with his emotional instability, ultimately lead to his downfall. Adam Warlock, who eventually gains control of the Infinity Gauntlet, challenges Thanos' reign of terror. A combination of strategy, understanding of the Gauntlet, and deeper implications, and the intervention of other cosmic entities, Warlock is able to wrest the Gauntlet from Thanos' grasp. In the end, Thanos is defeated and sent into exile, marking the end for his quest of ultimate power. The Infinity Gauntlet is not only an epic story of cosmic skill, but also one for philosophical depth. The event explores themes of power, responsibility, and isolation, asking what happens when one individual gains control over the universe, whether such power can truly bring fulfillment. The saga's impact on the Marvel Universe is immense, shaping the trajectory of many characters and events in the years to come. Creation of the Infinity Gauntlet was the culmination of a long-running storyline involving Thanos. It was developed by writer Jim Starlin, who had been closely associated with the character since the 1970s. In 1988, Starlin began exploring the concept of the Infinity Gems in Silver Surfer, where the initial groundwork for the event was laid. Starlin's involvement in the story was initially driven by his desire to create a grand cosmic tale, and in this early phase, he envisioned the plot as a way to push Thanos to the height of his power. The project didn't start with the idea of a crossover event in the mind. It wasn't until editor Tom DeFalco saw the potential for a larger story that it evolved into a massive universe-spanning saga. Starlin worked with George Perez and Ron Lim on the series, with Perez initially penciling the first few issues. Due to scheduling concepts, Lim took over the art duties from Perez midway through the event. Perez's artwork, though short-lived, had a significant impact on the series' visual identity, and his iconic covers helped drive early fan excitement. The tie-ins to other Marvel comics like Captain America and X-Men, carefully controlled by Marvel's editorial staff, with certain characters being omitted or altered to fit the needs of the story. The Infinity Gauntlet became an instant success. It's considered to be one of the most influential storylines in 1990s comics. It ranked among the top 10 sellers in the months of its release, with its first issue seeing a significant increase in resale value. The series, which led into sequels like the Infinity War and the Infinity Crusade, was also commercially successful, and spin-offs like Warlock and the Infinity Watch were highly anticipated. Critics felt the sequels were driven more by sales rather than strong storytelling due to their excessive tie-ins and slow pacing. By the mid-1990s, interest in the saga began to decline. Warlock and the Infinity Watch was cancelled in 1995. Despite this, the Gauntlet's iconic imagery remained popular, including being featured in a 2010 ESPN promotional campaign. The storyline regained attention with Thanos' appearance in The Avengers in 2012, a movie from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the reveal of Avengers Infinity War, which directly drew inspiration from the original comic. This renewed interest made the Infinity Gauntlet graphic novel best-selling graphic novel of 2018. Not all reviews were positive, some critics stating that the story lacked real consequences or emotional depth. In the years since, the Infinity Gauntlet had influenced multiple Marvel comics and adaptations, including What If, Avengers in the Infinity Gauntlet, and Secret Wars in 2015, cementing its legacy as a cornerstone of Marvel Comics storytelling. The Infinity Gauntlet holds a pivotal place in the history of comics. It expanded the scope of superhero storytelling, pushing the boundaries of cosmic events and the exploration of power on an unparalleled scale. The series was a key moment in Marvel's evolution, bringing together its vast pantheon of characters and creating a storyline that felt both intimate and epic. Its success helped solidify the notion of the cosmic event in modern comic book culture. The influence of the Infinity Gauntlet can still be felt today, and has been referenced in countless comics and films, including the MCU, where the saga was adapted into Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Operation Galactic Storm was a 19-part comic book crossover story that ran through Marvel Comics Avengers-related titles, including Avengers, Avengers West Coast, Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Wonder Man, and Quasar, from March to May of 1992. The story revolved around the Avengers' intervention in the Galactic War between the alien Kree and Shi'ar empires. The crossover is notable for reigniting the long-standing tension between Captain America and Iron Man, as well as the significant shift it caused in Marvel's alien empires, culminating in the Shi'ar annexing the Kree Empire. The plot was developed by Mark Gruenwald, Bob Harris, and Fabian Nicieza. with each issue being written and drawn by the regular creative teams of the Evolved titles. The title Operation Galactic Storm is a reference to Operation Desert Storm, the US military operation during the 1991 Gulf War, though the comic plot has no direct connection to the Gulf conflict. The crossover acts as a spiritual sequel to the 1971-1972 Kree Skrull War, which we talked about in a previous video, wherein the Avengers again find themselves caught between two warring alien factions threatening Earth. The idea for the crossover initially came from Grunwald, who along with Harris and Fabian developed the plot into a crossover for the Avengers title. The crossover itself was conceived during an Avengers Summit, a meeting where all the involved series writers and editors worked together to refine the plot. The creators included Grunwald, Harris, Tom DeFalco, Gerald Jones, Glenn Kaminsky, and Roy Thomas, who wrote the original Kree Skrull War. Pencilers such as Greg Capullo, Stephen Empty, Ron Friends, and Jeff Johnson brought the story life. The story begins in Captain America number 398 with the abduction of Rick Jones by the Shi'ar agents seeking Kree artifacts to build the superweb. As Captain America rescues Rick Jones, he uncovers the start of a war between Kree and Shi'ar empires. In Quasar number 32, Quasar learns that the use of the nearby Stargate is destabilizing the sun, prompting the Avengers to act in order to protect their solar system by either negotiating a truce or preventing further use of the Stargate. The Avengers assemble into three teams. One stays on Earth, the other two are sent to the Kree and Shi'ar homeworlds. The Earth team, led by Wasp, includes characters like She-Hulk, Spider-Woman, and Hawkeye. The Shi'ar team, led by Captain Marvel, includes characters like Scarlet Witch and Star Fox. The Kree team, led by Captain America, includes Iron Man, Hercules, and Black Knight. The Avengers encounter various factions, including the Kree Star Force and the Shi'ar's Imperial Guard, but their attempts to negotiate fail. The Shi'ar use Kree artifacts to create the Negabomb, a weapon capable of devastating the Kree Empire. As the conflict escalates, the Shi'ar's Deathbird assassinates Kree military leaders, and the Skrulls are revealed to be manipulating the war. Eventually, the Negabomb is detonated, decimating the Kree Empire and killing billions. Avengers later learned that the Supreme Intelligence orchestrated the war as a means to evolve the Kree. While Captain America votes against killing the Supreme Intelligence, Iron Man and the others take matters into their own hands, leading to a division within the team. The Shi'ar annex the Kree Empire, Avengers return to Earth, disillusioned. Following the events of Operation Galactic Storm, Aftermath is explored in Captain America number 401. And Quasar 35-36. These issues focus on the emotional and political consequences of the war, both for the Avengers and the wider galaxy. Kree Empire's devastation has lasting repercussions, with subsequent Avengers stories dealing with revenge attempts from surviving Kree factions. The crossover also affected future Marvel stories, with the Kree, Shi'ar, and Skrull Empires experiencing major changes. Subsequent storylines like Avengers Forever and Maximum Security eventually see the Kree Empire restored to its former glory, though with some significant twists. The events of Operation Galactic Storm continue to echo throughout Marvel comic stories, cementing its place as a crucial moment in the history of the Avengers and the broader Marvel universe. In general, Operation Galactic Storm has become a memorable Marvel crossover, but it's not as universally loved. For fans of cosmic Marvel stories and those looking for a sprawling multi-issue crossover, it has a lot to offer. However, for those who prefer more straightforward, concise narratives, it may not have been as enjoyable. Its legacy lives on primarily due to its impact on the Kree and the Shi'ar, and it remains an important piece of Marvel's history. In short, while it wasn't universally adored, it certainly has a dedicated fan base and is respected for its ambition and lasting influence on Marvel's cosmic storytelling. In 1992, Marvel released a 6-issue limited series that went by the name Infinity War. Written by Jim Starlin with art by Ron Lim, Ian Laughlin, Al Milgrom, Jack Morelli, and Crystal Shield, a direct sequel to the Infinity Gauntlet, it was followed by the Infinity Crusade. After claiming the Infinity Gauntlet, Adam Warlock expels both his good and evil aspects to become purely logical beings. This act unwittingly gives rise to the Magus, his malevolent counterpart, who sets out to seize control of the universe. The Magus gathers cosmic containment units akin to a cosmic cubes to amplify his power, creating a twisted army of doppelgangers modeled after Earth's heroes and villains. His power grows strong enough to render eternity, the embodiment of the universe, catatonic, preventing higher cosmic entities from intervening. Sensing a massive cosmic disturbance, Thanos begins investigating and soon realizes the Magus' return. Recognizing the severity of the threat, he reluctantly allies himself with Warlock's Infinity Watch. Meanwhile, the Magus' forces strike Earth. Some heroes, including Reed Richards and Iron Man, are ambushed and replaced by doppelgangers, posing as their real counterparts. These imposters lure the heroes to 4 Freedoms Plaza, where they intend to eliminate them using a gamma bomb. Wolverine's heightened senses detect the ruse, and with the help of Daredevil and the Invisible Woman's force field, the heroes narrowly escape destruction. Realizing the scope of the threat, the heroes divide their forces. One group stays on Earth to battle the doppelgangers, while another ventures into space to confront the Magus. In deep space, they encounter Thanos and the Infinity Watch, but unaware of their true intentions, mistakenly engage them in battle. Meanwhile, Galactus arrives and determines that the only way to stop the Magus is to restore the Infinity Gauntlet's power. However, at this time, the Gauntlet had been deactivated by the Living Tribunal at Eternity's request. To resolve this, Galactus and Gamora set out to revive Eternity and appeal for the Gauntlet's reactivation. As events escalate, the Magus captures Warlock and the powerless Gauntlet. His Thanos doppelganger assists him, throwing the real Thanos off-balance. Time running out, Thanos sends Quasar on a mission to use the Ultimate Nullifier, the weapon capable of erasing anything from existence, against the Magus. Meanwhile, Doctor Doom and Kang the Conqueror, each intending to betray each other, infiltrate the Magus' forces. They sabotage his containment unit system, forcing him to attempt a direct control over the Cosmic Cubes. Upon reaching them, he discovers that they have been stolen. Seeing his chance, Doom attacks the Magus, demanding the Infinity Gauntlet for himself. Before he can act, Galactus successfully revives Eternity, leading the Living Tribunal to restore the Gauntlet's power. The Magus, now wielding the full functional Gauntlet, ascends to omnipotence. Instantly, he erases Quasar from existence and imprisons Doom. As the remaining heroes fight through waves of doppelgangers, Thanos absorbs his own duplicate and attacks the Magus directly. But even this proves futile. The Magus appears triumphant. At the last moment, Warlock reveals the Magus' fatal miscalculation. The reality gem in his gauntlet is a fake. Thanos had secretly withheld the real one, preventing the Magus from achieving true omnipotence. Seizing the opportunity, Warlock reconnects with the Infinity Gems, reasserting control. Overwhelmed, the Magus is absorbed into the Soul Gem, trapped as a spirit unseen by the other souls dwelling within. In the aftermath, the Living Tribunal decrees that the Infinity Gems can never be again used together as a single unit. Meanwhile, the stolen cosmic containment units remain missing. In a final twist, it is revealed that they were taken by Warlock's suppressed good persona, now manifesting as a separate being, the Goddess, who would soon ignite the next cosmic conflict in the Infinity Crusade. In 2014, Marvel Studios announced Avengers-Infinity War, a 2-part film written by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely and directed by the Russo brothers. Initially planned as a single film, it was later split into Avengers-Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Despite sharing a title with the 1992 storyline, the film primarily adapts the Infinity Gauntlet rather than the Infinity War. The Infinity War received a generally positive reception from readers. On Goodreads, the collected edition holds an average rating of 3.7 out of 5, based on over 3,500 ratings, indicating an overall favorable response. While the series was popular among readers, some critiques emerged over time. A 2018 retrospective review noted that the storyline heavily relied on characters' doppelgangers and involved complex machinations by the antagonist, the Magus, which some found to be a little convoluted. Despite these critiques, the series maintained a solid fan base and contributed significantly to Marvel's cosmic narratives. Dead Man's Hand was a 1992 crossover event that ran through Daredevil number 307 through 309, Nomad number 4 through 6, and Punisher War Journal number 45 through 47. Unlike Marvel's more cosmic or superhero-driven crossovers of the era, Dead Man's Hand was a gritty, street-level crime saga, focusing on the power vacuum left in the wake of the Kingpin's apparent demise. Various criminal organizations, including Hydra, the Hand, the Secret Empire, and the Yakuza, converged in Las Vegas to carve up his empire. Their plans were met with resistance from 3 very different vigilantes: Daredevil, the Punisher, and Nomad. The story begins when 2 unexpected figures arrive in Las Vegas, lawyers Matt Murdock and Foggy Nelson, summoned under the guise of providing legal counsel for some of the involved parties. As soon as they realized the true purpose for their invitation, Matt and Foggy, despite the danger, firmly declined any offers of cooperation. Their refusal did not go unnoticed, and the Magia, unwilling to take no for an answer, sent the ruthless enforcer Tombstone to silence them permanently. They underestimated who they were dealing with. When Tombstone launched his attack, he found himself facing not just any ordinary blind lawyer, but Matt Murdock's alter ego Daredevil. In a brutal showdown, Daredevil managed to fend off the assassin, but this was just the beginning of a much larger war. The criminal gathering did not escape the notice of the world's deadliest vigilantes. Punisher, ever watchful for major criminal activities, saw the concentration of so many high-profile targets as a perfect opportunity to strike. Meanwhile, Nomad, formerly Captain America's sidekick, now operating as a rogue anti-hero, had followed his own leads on a growing conspiracy tied to the Yakuza. Both men arrived in Las Vegas with their own missions, unaware that their paths would soon collide. What was meant to be a tense negotiation quickly unraveled into outright war. Fragile alliances between the criminal factions crumbled as betrayals, power grabs, and target assassinations ignited an all-out battle. Hydra clashed with the Secret Empire, the Hand and the Yakuza turned on each other, and Magia bosses ordered hits on their rivals. Amid the carnage, Daredevil struggled to keep order, but the sheer scale of the conflict overwhelmed even his enhanced senses. Things became even more complicated when the good guys found themselves divided. Punisher, driven by his relentless crusade against crime, clashed with Nomad. More unorthodox methods put them at odds. The two vigilantes had little patience for each other's moral codes. Temporary alliance threatened to break down into a battle of its own. As the war raged on, Daredevil found an unlikely adversary with the mercenary known as Terror, a ruthless but effective fighter with his own reasons for getting involved. With his help, as well as reluctant cooperation from Nomad and the Punisher, Daredevil attempted to shift the tides of battle. While the criminals had strength in numbers, the combined efforts of the three vigilantes proved to be an equalizing force. One by one, the criminal factions suffered heavy losses and their grip on Vegas weakened. In the final battle, as the remaining crime bosses gathered for a desperate last stand, conflict reached its peak. The Hand's representative, Red Skull's emissary were both eliminated in the bloodshed. With so many figures either dead or on the run, the power struggle collapsed in on itself. By the time the dust settled, Hydra, the Yakuza, and the Magia families had been forced to retreat. While crime would truly never vanish, Vegas was no longer under their control, for now. Daredevil, Nomad, and the Punisher had succeeded in breaking the criminal stronghold, but the victory came at a cost. The city was left in partial ruins, and the power vacuum remained. Though the immediate threat was dealt with, new criminals would inevitably rise to fill the void. Dead Man's Hand may not have had the universe-shaking consequences of Marvel's larger events, but it was a defining moment in street-level storytelling. It reinforced the roles of its central figures, Daredevil as the moral compass in a world of corruption, the Punisher as a relentless force of destruction, and Nomad as a man caught between ideologies. Though the Kingpin's empire had been shattered, one truth remained: crime never truly dies, and for those who fight it, battle is never over. Despite being a well-structured and entertaining event, Dead Man's Hand remains one of Marvel's lesser-known crossovers. It didn't feature world-ending stakes or an A-list of heroes like the X-Men or Avengers, which may explain why it's faded into relative obscurity compared to events like Infinity War or Maximum Carnage. Marvel's Rise of the Midnight Suns was a crossover event that brought together a team of supernatural heroes. Launched in 1992, it capitalized on the growing demand for horror and occult-themed stories in comics. It was part of the Marvel Universe, had a darker, more occult-oriented focus. The story began in the Spirits of Vengence and Ghost Rider series, with the formation of the Midnight Suns, a group of supernatural characters who band together to battle evil forces that threaten the world. The team included familiar characters such as Ghost Rider, Danny Ketch, Blade, Morbius the Living Vampire, Johnny Blaze, the original Ghost Rider, Doctor Strange, and the Night Stalkers. A team made up of characters like Blade, Frank Drake, and Hannibal King. These characters were mostly individuals who dealt with the supernatural or the occult in some way. Lilith, the mother of demons, was an ancient necromancer whose origins stretch back to pre-cataclysmic Atlantis. Thousands of years ago, Atlantean sorcerers defeated Lilith and sealed her within the remains of the biblical Leviathan. Lilith left behind many children, the Lilith, who over centuries bred with humans, diluting their demonic blood with each generation. Leviathan's body lay buried for a millennia, until it was discovered in the frozen wastelands of Greenland in recent years. Around this time, Doctor Strange became aware that Lilith was regaining strength to soon rise from her slumber. He also learned of her plan to open a dimensional rift to conquer the world with her Lilith. As Sorcerer Supreme, Strange understood that using his full magic against Lilith inadvertently strengthened her by further opening the rift. The only way to stop them was 9 chosen warriors, the Midnight Suns. Though each of them only had minimal individual power, together they could stand against Lilith's forces. Doctor Strange set out to gather the Mystic Nine. the Ghost Rider began experiencing visions of Lilith's rise and convinced his former host Johnny Blaze to join him in the fight. Johnny, reluctant to re-engage with the Ghost Rider, agreed, knowing that his family would be in danger if he didn't help. Together, they became the Spirits of Vengeance. First, to confront Lilith's progeny, they battled Blackout, a grandchild of Lilith, as well as the other Lilith, like Pilgrim and Creed, outside Providence, Rhode Island. Meanwhile, Lilith, Blackout, and Pilgrim traveled to New York, searching for two more of her Lilith, Dakota and Fang. Knowing that Ghost Rider and Blaze had arrived, Lilith sent Fang to infect Morbius, the living vampire with demonic blood. This transformation made Morbius stronger and more vampiric. Doctor Strange approached Morbius asking for his aid against Lilith, and the vampire, disillusioned with his existence, agreed. 3 more members joined the Midnight Suns: Victoria Montesi, Louise Hastings, and the Interpol agent Sam Buchanan. They were tasked with finding and protecting the lost pages of the Darkhold, Book of Sins. After encountering cultists, they agreed to join the fight against Lilith. Doctor Strange then arranged for a vampire hunter, Blade, to be freed from a mental hospital. Blade reunited with Frank Drake and Hannibal King, forming the Night Stalkers. The group used King's Detective Agency as their headquarters. Lilith sought to manipulate the Night Stalkers into killing Ghost Rider and Blaze, claiming that they were demons. After a brief confrontation, the Night Stalkers realized Lilith was the true enemy. Lilith, now with all her surviving Lilith, turned to Greenland to open the dimensional rift. Doctor Strange teleported the Midnight Suns to confront her, and the two sides clashed. While the Midnight Suns fought valiantly, it was Ghost Rider who defeated Lilith by turning her dimensional rift back on herself. Rise of the Midnight Sun story arc introduced a more gritty, horror-driven direction for Marvel's supernatural characters, setting them apart from the traditional superhero fare. Though the event was short-lived, it had lasting implications for the characters involved, with the Midnight Suns becoming a recurring group, various Marvel stories related to the occult and the supernatural. It also helped shape darker, horror-inspired tone that would influence some of Marvel's later supernatural-themed stories. X-cutioners Song was a 12-part crossover storyline published by Marvel Comics from November 1992 to early 1993, spanning Uncanny X-Men, X-Men Volume 2, X-Factor, and X-Force, with Strife as the central villain. The issues were sold polybagged with special trading cards featuring Strife's personal views on key characters, increasing their price $1.50 from the usual $1.25. The story begins when mutant pop star Lila Cheney organizes a free concert in Central Park, intended to promote the unity between mutants and humans. Professor Charles Xavier is invited to speak, but the event takes a dark turn when he is shot by an assailant who appears to be Cable. Bullet carries a lethal techno-organic virus, leaving Xavier on the brink of death. This act of terrorism triggers widespread chaos as the X-Men and their allies scramble to understand who is responsible and how to save Xavier. Meanwhile, Cyclops and Jean Grey are kidnapped by the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. In exchange for the Summers couple, Strife gives Sinister a canister that supposedly contains valuable genetic material related to the Summers bloodline. However, Sinister is later revealed to have been double-crossed. Xavier incapacitated, tensions flare between different mutant factions. The X-Men, alongside with X-Factor, suspect Cable's team X-Force is complicit in the attack. They confront and capture X-Force in a brutal battle, even though X-Force had no contact with Cable since a S.H.I.E.L.D. raid on their headquarters. Wolverine and Bishop locate Cable, and after a brief skirmish, determine that he may not be the culprit. As the mystery deepens, Apocalypse, previously thought to be dead, is revealed to be alive, but severely weakened. His former minions, the Dark Riders, betray him and align with Strife. In a moment of desperation, Apocalypse turns to the X-Men for protection and offers them something invaluable in return: cure for Xavier's techno-virus infection. Held captive, Cyclops and Jean Grey endure psychological and physical torture at the hands of Strife, who blames them for his suffering. His accusations leave them confused, as they have never met Strife before. Eventually, they realize that Strife and Cable must be connected to their son, Nathan Christopher Summers, whom Cyclops had sent to the future years earlier to be saved from the techno-organic virus. With Xavier stabilized with the help of Apocalypse, the X-Men launch a rescue mission to save Cyclops and Jean, taken to Apocalypse's old lunar base. Cable, Wolverine, and Bishop arrive first, engaging in an intense battle with Strife's forces. Soon after, Storm's team of X-Men and Apocalypse arrive, leading to multiple confrontations. The Dark Riders viciously turn on Apocalypse, bringing him to the brink of death. Meanwhile, Archangel, still struggling with his past transformation at Apocalypse's hands, refuses to grant his former master a mercy killing. Strife, determined to ensure that Cyclops and Jean suffer, activates a massive time portal. As he prepares to collapse the structure on top of them, Cable intervenes, grappling with Strife in a desperate final confrontation. Cyclops, despite his lingering doubts, triggers the portal, causing both Cable and Strife to hold into the time vortex. The explosion leaves everyone uncertain whether either of them survive. In the aftermath, the X-Men decide piecing together the implications of what happened. Canister Strife gave Sinister, instead of containing genetic material, releases the deadly Legacy virus, a plague designed to wipe out mutant kind. The story's impact extended beyond its immediate events, as the Legacy virus became a major plot point in X-Men comics, eventually leading to Colossus' sacrifice to activate the cure. Strife and Apocalypse would return, with Strife haunting Cable as a ghost, ultimately resurfacing as a time anomaly. Crossover, highly anticipated at the time, boosted sales, but disappointed some fans due to its cryptic handling of Cable's origin. The full revelation that Cable was Nathan Summers and Strife was his clone was delayed until 1994. The storyline was conceived at a 1992 X-Men Writers Retreat, where the writers sought to pit the X-Men against their greatest foe. Initially, Magneto's return was planned for added shock value. This idea was scrapped, later used in Fatal Attraction. There were rumors that editor Bob Harris forced changes to the ending, but others have also denied. Strife's Strike File, a 1993 one-shot, expanded on the crossover's theme, using a CD-ROM found by Bishop as a framing device. It teased future plotlines, including Legacy Virus, and introduced characters like Braden Creed, Irondi, and Holocaust before their main appearance. X-Cutioners Song received mixed to positive reception upon release. Strong sales, driven by the event's polybagged issues and collectible trading. Crossover capitalized on the early 90 comics book boom, where limited edition packaging and speculation fueled demand. Each issue sold well, contributing to the X-Men franchise's dominance in the industry at the time. Even though it was financially successful, the event received divided critical fan responses, largely due to its complex narrative, delayed payoffs, and controversial portrayal of Cable and Strife's connection. At the time, many readers were intrigued by the mystery surrounding Cable and Strife, as Marvel had been teasing their relationship for years. The event ultimately did not provide a definitive answer, frustrating some fans who expected a resolution. It wasn't until 1994's The Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix that it was confirmed that Cable was the real Nathan Summers and Strife was his clone, making X-Cutioners Song feel like more of an extended setup rather than a self-contained story. Some critics view this as a weakness, arguing that the story leaned too heavily on the cryptic dialogue and prolonged suspense without clear answers. Another point of contention was the forced conflict between the X-Men and X-Force. Some readers felt the immediate assumption that Cable had shot Professor X, leading to a violent clash between the teams, contrived. The fight scenes were exciting, but seemed to rely on misunderstanding rather than the meaningful character development. Conversely, others praised the tension, arguing that it added drama and showcased how fragmented the mutant community was at the time. The artwork, which rotated between Brandon Peterson, Andy Kubert, Greg Capullo, and Jay Lee, was another diverse aspect. Many praised the dynamic action sequences, especially Lee's gothic, heavily inked style in X-Factor, which gave the story an ominous atmosphere. However, some felt that the constant shift in artistic style between issues hurt the event's visual consistency. Despite these criticisms, the crossover was significant for its lasting impact on X-Men lore. Introduced the Legacy virus, which became a major plotline for nearly a decade, serving as a metaphor for the AIDS epidemic. It also further developed Apocalypse and Strife's dynamic, reinforcing Strife's hatred toward Cyclops and Jean Grey. Additionally, the event helped solidify Cable's role as a major player in the X-Men universe, even with all the lingering mystery around his past. In retrospective rankings, X-Cutioners Song is often remembered as a quintessential 90s X-Men crossover, action-packed, melodramatic, and heavily steeped in continuity. Some modern critics appreciate its ambition and themes, while others see it as emblematic of the excess of the area, particularly with its plot, editorially driven spec. Nonetheless, it remains a significant milestone in X-Men history, both for its narrative consequences and its role in shaping the franchise's direction throughout the decade. While Marvel 2099 wasn't technically one event, I still wanted to cover it because it played a significant role in what was happening at Marvel at the time. Launched in 1992, Marvel 2099 was an imprint that explored a possible future of the Marvel Universe, before later being established as an alternate Earth. In comics, an imprint refers to a specific publishing line within a larger company, often with its own branding, themes, or continuity. Marvel 2099 was first introduced in Stan's Soapbox as a Marvel World of Tomorrow project initially developed by Stan Lee and John Byrne, eventually expanded into a full-fledged imprint, originally titled Marvel 2093, before ultimately becoming Marvel 2099. The imprint launched with Spider-Man 2099, Doom 2099, Punisher 2099, and Ravage 2099. 3 of these reimagined characters, while Ravage 2099 introduced a brand new hero. While originally presented as a possible future of Earth 616, the main Marvel universe, it was later designated Earth 928. Marvel 2099's world was a cyberpunk dystopia, with mega corporations like Alchemax controlling much of society. The present-day Marvel Age of Heroes had become mythologized, with figures like Thor worshipped as religious icons. The economy was driven by plantable currency chips, and law enforcement was replaced with privatized security forces such as the Public Eye. Under editor Joe Cavalieri, the imprint was well coordinated, with interwoven storylines similar to Marvel's 1960s approach. Early success led to expansion, including X-Men 2099 and 2099 Unlimited, which introduced Hulk 2099. The imprint's first major crossover, The Fall of the Hammer, featured a technologically recreated Norse pantheon, but struggled with execution. As sales declined, Marvel attempted to reinvigorate the line. Warren Ellis took over Doom 2099, leading a storyline in which Doom seized control of the US, and this shifted the imprint into 2099 AD, while struggling titles like the Hulk 2099, Ravage 2099, and Punisher 2099 were cancelled. In-universe, this was explained as the corrupt President Rogers ordering the execution of several heroes. 1996, Marvel fired Cavalieri as a part of a cost-cutting measure. Many creators, including Peter David, Warren Ellis, left in protest. Without strong editorial leadership, imprint floundered. Marvel attempted to salvage it with X-Nation 2099 and Fantastic Four 2099. Despite all this, sales continued to decline, leading to the cancellation of all series. The imprint's finale, 2099 World of Tomorrow, attempted to wrap up loose ends, but only lasted 8 issues. The final story, 2099 Manifest Destiny, 1998, depicted Captain America awakening in suspended animation, Gail O'Hara assembling a new Avengers team, closing the book on Marvel 2099. Despite the imprint's decline, Marvel has revisited 2099 multiple times. Miguel O'Hara returned to mainstream Marvel in Superior Spider-Man in 2013, later starring in a solo series and playing a key role in the Spider-Verse. 2099 timeline has since been altered, particularly during the Secret Wars in 2015, which merged different versions of 2099 to one new continuity. For the 25th anniversary in 2019, Marvel released new one-shots, including Conan and Venom 20. The imprint was initially well received, particularly Spider-Man 2099, written by Peter David and drawn by Rick Lenardi. The series' cyberpunk themes, strong characterization, critique of corporate control made it the standout title. Doom 2099 was also praised, especially Warren Ellis' tenure, which introduced a bold political shift in the story. Other series had mixed receptions. Ravage, originally written by Stan Lee, struggled after his departure. Punisher 2099 was divisive, appealing to some readers with its over-the-top action, but failing to capture the depth of its predecessors. Later titles such as X-Nation 2099 and Fantastic Four 2099 completely failed to gain traction. By the mid-1990s, declining sales and editorial management led to the imprint's downfall. The firing of Cavalieri and the departure of key writers hastened the decline. While the initial vision of a cohesive future Marvel universe was strong, oversaturation and loss of creative leadership led to its premature end. Despite this, Spider-Man 2099 remains one of Marvel's most enduring characters, keeping the spirit of 2099 alive through various revivals and crossovers. By 1992, it was clear that Marvel had fully embraced the event-driven storytelling that would define the 90s. The days of just 1 or 2 big crossovers per year, now it felt like there were always another major storyline right around the corner. Some of these events pushed Marvel's biggest characters into exciting new directions, while others leaned a little too hard on the spectacle over substance. Love them or hate them, they shaped the Marvel Universe in ways that are still being felt today. Marvel Marvel was in a creative frenzy, cranking out event after event, each one bigger and more chaotic than the last. Whether it was the rise of new characters, dark turn of some old favorites, or just sheer comic book madness, 1993 had a little bit of it all. So buckle up, we're diving deep into the year, and let's see what Marvel had in store. Mystech Wars was a 4-issue Marvel Comics crossover event published in 1993, centered on the shadowy British organization Mystech. It's a weird, deep-cut Marvel UK storyline where magic, sci-fi, and bureaucratic evil all collide, and everyone from the Avengers to the X-Men gets dragged into the mess, whether they like it or not. Basically, the story goes like this. Once upon a time, 7 old creeps made a deal with the literal demon to live forever. They promised him endless souls, and in exchange, they got to run a multinational corporation, because if you're going to be evil, you might as well be efficient. Fast forward to modern day. Mystech owns everything, kills whoever they want, and plays with the forces of hell like it's a company retreat. Nick Fury, thinking he's still relevant, sneaks into their lair. He's immediately caught, shot, and packed into a nightmare meat locker called the Da Vinci Cube. Nice job, Nick. Meanwhile, Earth's finest heroes start getting psychic headaches because Mystech has accidentally connected our world to a hell dimension. The X-Men, Avengers, Fantastic Four, Hulk, and Doctor Strange all scramble to figure out why everything smells like burning rubber and failure. Demons start vomiting out of the ground, and our heroes assemble just in time to start dying in increasingly depressing ways. Spider-Man, everybody's favorite quip machine, gets torn apart solo in Manhattan. Cyclops gets sniped by a demon foot soldier like he's a background character. Jean Grey, the psychic goddess, spirals into such deep despair she takes herself out. While Thor, the literal god of thunder, gets jumped and shanked like a punk. Wolverine and Captain America, meanwhile, go on a side quest to find Nick Fury's rotting corpse. Then they start beating up on Motormouth and Killpower by mistake, because why not make everything worse? While the heroes tear each other apart with mistrust and bad decisions, the Warheads and Death's Head 2 finally realize that maybe, just maybe, partnering with a demonic megacorporation wasn't the best career move. They kill some of Mystech's leadership, but it's too little too late. Earth is already crumbling like a wet cake. In one final Hail Mary, a handful of battered survivors activate a cosmic do-over button called the Monterey's Core. Time rewinds, the dead breathe again, all the blood and broken bones get swept under the rug. Nobody remembers anything. Only a few unlucky souls like Professor X, Doctor Strange, and Motormouth are cursed to live with the memory of Earth's most spectacular failure. Captain America and Wolverine, knowing what could come, vowed to remain vigilant should Mystech rise again. And somewhere deep underground, Mystech still waits, smiling and filing paperwork, because as we all know, true evil never really dies, it just franchises. This crossover was a strange one, mostly because it included a lot of UK characters that not everybody knew at the time. But it was still something different, received with mixed reactions. Some people really liked it, and some people thought it was just really too over the top. Personally, I love the idea of a corporation being demons because that just makes sense. However, I do think some of the stories seem a little disjointed and not everything lines up as nicely as it could. For Love Nor Money, which featured Luke Cage, Silver Sable, and Terra Incorporated, was a 6-part storyline revolving around the pursuit of a mystical artifact known as the Vatsanya Tryst. Each character is independently hired to retrieve this powerful relic, leading to a series of confrontations and uneasy alliances among the three. The story starts out with Parapus, a mutant, a demon, deviant, a god, a guy who rarely can't pick a lane. He hires 3 mercenaries to do his dirty work. Terror, a rotting corpse who moonlights as a hitman, Silver Sable, basically mercenary Barbie, and Luke Cage, last adult in the room at this point. Their mission, fetch the scattered pieces of a mystical puzzle called Vatsyanya's Tryst, which apparently points the way to the legendary carnal serpent. Terror, realizing that teamwork is for suckers, immediately backstabs Cage and Sable, steals their puzzle pieces, and tries to cash in solo. It backfires spectacularly, no surprise. Luke Cage smashes his way back into the action, yanks the Tryst away, and leaves Terra short one arm. Sable attacks Cage, thinking he's double-crossed her too, because when in doubt, punch first. Cage just shrugs, hands her the relic, and both awkwardly return to Priapus. Priapus, being exactly gross as you expect of someone with followers named Brother Randy and Libido, uses his magic to unleash a wave of paralyzing horniness on our heroes. Yes, That's seriously the vibe. While they're busy losing control of basic bodily functions, Priapus powers up his weird pleasure palaces. Luckily, Terror, who's already 80% dead inside, shrugs off the spell and helps the others escape, torching Priapus' strip club empire on the way out. Priapus, furious that his big gross dreams are crumbling, summons living, breathing version of the hero's deepest, sweatiest desires to fight them. Cause when in doubt, weaponize shame. With the hero sidelined, Priapus slithers off to Venezuela to feed himself to the carnal serpent, because when your life's mission is cosmic level degeneracy, you go big or you go home. Unfortunately for him, the heroes show up, kill the serpent, and for a moment everything seems fine. Until Priapus rips himself out of the serpent's dead body, stronger and even slimier than before. He enslaves the heroes, cause what's better than victory? Humiliation. But Cage rips the tryst from his chest like he's yanking the heart out of a piñata. Carnal Serpent, finally free, rewards their hard work by bursting out of Priapus' body like an overcooked microwave dinner, grabs the tryst, and slithers off into the sunset. The heroes are left standing in a puddle of guts and regret, wondering how exactly their lives took this particular turn. You probably haven't heard of this particular crossover, and that's probably because it's not very popular. It's not collected in any major trade, it had really zero long-term impact, and it was released in the middle of Marvel's 1993 event Deluge, buried under bigger crossovers that we'll talk about, like Maximum Carnage, Infinity Crusade, and Siege of Darkness. It's not bad per se, but it's definitely a product of its time. Gritty, overwritten, and trying to juggle too many tones at once. Also in 1993, Marvel unleashed Maximum Carnage, a 14-part fever dream of blood, screaming, and deeply questionable decision-making. Greatest hits collection of What If Spider-Man comics were written by a group of angry 13-year-olds. It crammed every Spider-Man character they could find into one endless street fight. The fun kicks off when Cletus Cassidy, serial killer, bad roommate, general stain on humanity, loses his symbiote to a sonic weapon, or so they think. Turns out Carnage was just living in his bloodstream, like the world's angriest STD. So naturally, Cletus cuts his wrists open and gives birth to Carnage again, immediately murdering half of Ravencroft's staff, because what else would he do with his freedom? Carnage immediately assembles a little Manson family. Shriek, his psycho wife, Spider-Man's doppelganger, the demonic clone nobody wanted, Demogoblin, a religious fanatic hobgoblin reject, and Carrion, who looks like if skin disease was a person. They unleash pure chaos on New York, because of course they do. Spider-Man, already nursing ribs from after getting stomped into applesauce by Shriek and Doppelganger, desperately tries to put a team together. He ends up rolling with Cloak, Dagger, Venom, Black Cat, Morbius, Deathlock, Iron Fist, Firestar, and eventually even Captain America. Basically, anyone who didn't ghost him got a team jersey. The city falls into a full-blown riot because Shriek's psychic tantrums turn every civilian into a frothing maniac. Carnage, meanwhile, treats the apocalypse like a music festival, crucifying Deathlock in Times Square for aesthetic reasons and torturing Venom at the Statue of Liberty because irony is delicious. Spider-Man, trying his best not to become a Venom-style maniac, somehow keeps pulling his punches until enough corpses pile up that he finally accepts that maybe, just maybe, this isn't a talk-it-out situation. The final battle is a fireworks show of dismemberment. Shriek and Demogoblin get blasted into submission with the magical Happy Thought cannon. No, seriously. Carnage fake dies in an explosion, classic, and tries to dig up his dead mom's grave, cause mommy issues are forever. In the end, Venom pile drives Carnage into a generator. Both explode and Spider-Man pretends everything is fine as long as he limps home to think about life choices. Despite critics calling it bloated, loud, and a little bit dumb, so basically the comic book equivalent of an energy drink, Maximum Carnage became a 90s institution. It spawned a blood red video game cartridge, a toy line, and even a haunted house where teenagers could pretend to get murdered by Carnage during Halloween. Love it or hate it, Maximum Carnage turned Carnage from Venom's weird nephew into a full-blown Spider-Man boogeyman. And if nothing else, it proved once and for all that when things get bad enough, Spider-Man might just call Morbius for backup. By now, Marvel decided that you hadn't been emotionally damaged enough by the first two Infinity disasters, so they dropped the Infinity Crusade, third and final chapter of Adam Warlock's big cosmic identity crisis, written by Jim Starlin, drawn by Ron Lim, and some other poor souls trying to keep up. It picks up after Warlock got his grubby hands on the Infinity Gauntlet and thought, Hey, what if I surgically remove every feeling I've ever had? Purges good and evil sides like two toxic roommates moving out at once. The evil side became Magus again, and the good side became the goddess. We immediately decided the best way to fix this universe was to erase literally everyone with a brain. Instead of using her 30 stolen cosmic cubes for something normal, like infinite tacos or paying off student loans, Goddess built Paradise Omega, a perfect planet where she kidnapped a bunch of superheroes, brainwashed them with good vibes, and prepared to spiritually nuke all sentient life. Meanwhile, back on miserable Earth, Mr. Fantastic, Vision, and Iron Man realized all their friends were missing. After getting bloodied by their mind control pals and nearly killing Professor X in the process, they ran home crying to Thanos, who hilariously is now the guy you call when you're in real trouble. Thanos cuts a deal with Mephisto. Being Marvel's sweaty used car salesman of evil, trades insider knowledge about the goddess for a broken cosmic cube and a pat on the back. Plan, trick the goddess into revealing she's actually worse than Thanos on a bad day. Warlock fakes her cosmic genocide with a hallucination. Her cult army realizes maybe total soul death isn't great PR, and her whole operation collapses like a cheap card table. Cornered by the spiritual plane, the goddess gets tag teamed by Warlock, Thanos, and a mentally projected half-dead Professor X. They yeet her into the soul gem like garbage on pickup day. Problem solved, kinda. Before heading home, Thanos vaporizes the cosmic egg. Goodbye, universal wishes, and hands Mephisto his payment. Totally useless, broken cosmic trinket, because in hell, there's no customer service line. In the end, the heroes return to a perfectly reset Earth, pretending none of this ever happened. Just another Tuesday in Marvel's galaxy of therapy bills. Infinity Crusade was met with a loud, awkward cough from fans and critics alike. Some people loved it for the big cosmic vibes, and the chance to see brainwashed superheroes slapping each other across heaven. But a lot of readers thought it was the worst kind of Marvel event. Boring, preachy, and padded out like a bloated corpse. Compared to the high-stakes chaos of Infinity Gauntlet and Infinity War, this one felt like Marvel was stuck shaking an empty cosmic piñata and hoping candy would still fall out. Even die-hard fans admitted it was less about the characters you cared about and more about Adam Warlock fighting his feelings again, this time with even more monologuing. Today, Infinity Crusade mostly survives as a cautionary tale. Maybe not every cosmic event needs a sequel to the sequel. You ever wonder what would happen if the strongest guy you knew just snapped one day and decided to punch reality until it broke? Well, welcome to Blood and Thunder, a Marvel crossover event where Thor, the actual god of thunder, completely loses his mind and decides it's time for the entire universe to catch these hands. Driven mad by a fake Valkyrie cooked up in his own broken brain, Thor tumbles into what the Asgardians politely call Warrior's Madness. Basically cosmic rabies. He beats up his best friends, smashes entire planets, turns himself into an unstoppable cosmic wrecking ball. Things get even better, or worse depending on your taste for destruction, when Thor gets his hands on the power gem, meaning he now hits like a freight train piloted by another freight train. The event shambles its way across Thor, Silver Surfer, Warlock and the Infinity Watch, and Warlock Chronicles, dragging a whole conga line of Marvel's cosmic heavy hitters along with it. Silver Surfer, Doctor Strange, Adam Warlock, and even Thanos shows up, forming the least functional intervention group in history. Imagine trying to stop a speeding bus with a handful of cardboard signs that say, "Please don't." That's the vibe. Things finally climax in Asgard when Odin himself decides that he's had enough of his son's cosmic tantrum and throws down the dad hammer. It's loud, messy, and leaves everyone wondering how Thor still has any friends after this. When Blood and Thunder hit shelves, readers were confused. Some loved the non-stop cosmic fist fights. Others wondered if they had accidentally bought the same issue 4 times in a row, because it's basically Thor punches people on loop with different backgrounds. The story felt stitched together, hopping across books with wildly different art styles, like a kid wearing mismatched socks. Still, it gave some fans some truly insane Thor moments, and if nothing else, beautiful screaming monument to Marvel's early 90s philosophy: if something's broken, hit it harder. Fatal Attractions is Marvel's 1993 X-Men crossover where everybody finally stops pretending things are fine, starts throwing hands and ideologies in every direction. It was supposed to be the next big shot of adrenaline for the X-Men franchise. Marvel rolled it out with holographic covers, big deaths, big promises, and even bigger hair. First couple of chapters actually did move some serious copies. Early sales spiked above the regular numbers for ongoing titles. For a second, it looked like Marvel had figured out the formula again. Throw Magneto on the cover, make him float dramatically, and print money. Underneath the foil and the flash, Fatal Attractions was basically a slow-motion breakdown caught on paper. It kicks off with Magneto, who's been hiding in deep space licking his wounds, deciding that he's finally done pretending to be reasonable. Builds a floating mutant utopia called Avalon, and declares screw you to humanity, and cranks the mutant superiority dial up to 11. The X-Men, because they have nothing better to do than crash people's existential crises, show up for a very aggressive intervention. Think Spiral. Magneto triggers an electromagnetic pulse that wipes all technology off the face of the earth, like an angry dad flipping the breaker switch during a family fight. Charles Xavier, never one for healthy conflict resolution, pulls together a strike team to sneak into Avalon and lobotomize his former friend the old-fashioned way, with psychic violence. The big gut punch comes when Magneto rips the adamantium straight out of Wolverine's body. Not surgically, not nicely, he just yanks it out like a magician pulling tablecloths, and leaves Logan a bloody heap of meat and regrets. It's one of the most gruesome moments in 90s comics. The kind of body horror that made kids either fall in love with comics forever, put them down, and never come back. In retaliation, Xavier mind-wipes Magneto into a coma, crossing every moral line he spent decades preaching about. No speeches, no trial, just psychic execution in a bathrobe. Then the X-Men dust off their hands like they just took out the trash and fly home, pretending they didn't just shatter the last shreds of their own ideology. And somehow, through all this, Fatal Attractions still manages to feel weirdly sleepy in places, stretched thin across too many titles, dragging its boots between the big moments like it was stuck wading through wet cement. Wizard magazine at the time pointed out that fans were already burning out on the endless X events, promised to change everything forever, and ended with half-hearted group hug and a new costume redesign. People came in hyped for Mutant on Mutant War, but what they got was a disjointed therapy session with a few high-profile mutilations sprinkled in. Crossover's pacing lurched between moody existential dread and characters monologuing like bad theater students. Worse, most of the real consequences, cough, Xavier turning into Onslaught later, cough, get quietly swept under the rug until Marvel needed another crossover to pay the bills. Still, if nothing else, Fatal Attractions proved one thing. No matter how tired the ideas got, no matter how many lasers and holograms you slapped on the cover, the X-Men were doing what they do best. Fighting Magneto, fighting each other, slowly tearing their own dream apart from the inside. It's less about saving the world and more about watching a family self-destruct. If Fatal Attractions was the X-Men setting themselves on fire, Bloodties is what happens when the Avengers show up, smell the smoke, and decide to jump in too. Bloodties was a 1993 crossover between X-Men and the Avengers, cooked up to celebrate the 30th anniversary of both franchises. It picks up right after Xavier mindwipes Magneto, an act that basically leaves a giant vacancy sign hanging over the throne of mutant supremacy. Magneto's unstable ex-protege, Fabian Cortez, decides to exploit the chaos by lighting Genosha on fire and kidnapping Magneto's human granddaughter, Luna, for extra insurance. Because nothing says strategic mastermind like starting a civil war and dragging a toddler into it. With Luna's parents, Quicksilver, who's X-Men adjacent, and Crystal from the Avengers both freaking out, two teams get pulled into the conflict. At first, the Avengers are ordered to stand down by the United Nations, but in true Marvel fashion, they decide that global politics can eat it and storm Genosha anyways, but getting into an actual fistfight with S.H.I.E.L.D. in the process. Meanwhile, the X-Men split off into teams, tracking Cortez and trying to stop the bloodbath spreading throughout the streets of Hammer Bay. It doesn't go well. Exodus shows up, declares himself Magneto's rightful heir, basically threatens to nuke Genosha if the heroes don't back off. War Machine tries to stop him and gets flattened for his trouble. The heroes scramble to rescue civilians while Exodus tears through the place like a nuclear blender. Underground, Professor X and Beast undercover armies of enslaved mutates being used as cannon fodder. Cortez, ever the coward, tries to use Luna as a human shield, only for Exodus to almost vaporize him too. Because there's no loyalty among sociopaths. In the end, it's the combined forces of the X-Men and the Avengers that finally bring Exodus down. Professor X hits him with a psychic assault, and the Black Knight stabs him into unconsciousness. And Quicksilver nearly dies trying to save his daughter. Luna is finally freed, but Genosha is left in ruins, locked inside a force field to keep the world out. Cracked, smoking monument to mutant kind self-destruction. Bloodties hit at a weird time. Readers were still reeling from the grim chaos of Fatal Attractions and weren't sure if they were ready for another round of dysfunction. Sales were solid, the event didn't land with the same thunderous impact as earlier crossovers. Some fans loved the high-stake Carnage, others were left wondering if Marvel's only plan was to keep stacking tragedies until readers finally cried uncle. Still, Bloodties mattered. It severed the Avengers from the United Nations control, dissolved the West Coast Avengers, rest in peace awkward second team, and hinted at a future where mutant-human relations weren't just strained, they were circling the drain. If Fatal Attractions was Marvel lighting the match, Bloodties was them watching the house burn down and deciding, maybe we live here now. After 2 decades of slicing through vampires, demons, and every other filthy thing that skitters in the dark, Blade was done. In the Midnight Massacre, the Daywalker wasn't just hunting anymore, he wanted to end it all. No more vampires, no more demons, no more monsters. So when Blade gets his hands on the Black Envelope, a cursed artifact with a page from the Darkhold, he sees a way out of the endless bloodshed, promises to wipe out every supernatural creature. But Blade didn't know what he was really dealing with. When he reads the page, it changes him. Darkhold doesn't just give him power, it twists him into something grotesque. The man who once hunted night becomes a nightmare himself. Switchblade, as he's now called. Switchblade is a monstrosity. Peeling skin, giant pinchers, and a body that burns like the Ghost Rider he's about to kill. Every monster he kills, he absorbs their powers, making him stronger, more dangerous, and more unrecognizable with each bloody murder. And let's just talk about that name for a second. Switchblade. Seriously? Blade was a badass name, but now he's just a half-melted, pinchered freak, and they slapped Switchblade on him like he's some edgy mall ninja. It's like calling a werewolf Fluffy. It's just stupid. But whatever. He's got a whole new identity, so he might as well roll with it. Hannibal King, Johnny Blaze, gone. One after the other. And then the real massacre begins. Blade doesn't just kill demons and vampires anymore, he devours them. Demogoblin? Slaughtered. Every supernatural being he touches makes him more of a twisted amalgamation of every creature he's slain. He's unstoppable, but at what cost? Blade's mind unravels as he becomes something worse than the very creatures he hunted for years. But the monster's hunger doesn't stop there. Switchblade takes on the Ghost Rider and absorbs the Penance Stare. Someone like Blade, who's lived in the gutter of every mistake and bloodbath, would be immune to it. But no one is. The Penance Stare forces Blade to relive every ounce of pain he's ever caused, every life he's ever taken, every person he's hurt, every goddamn thing he's ever done. You know, you'd think by now Blade would have figured out that absorbing everyone's powers might not be the smartest idea. But hey, what's life without a little irrational, rage-fueled decision-making? He buckles, falls apart, and for the first time in years, Blade feels the weight of all the blood on his hands. Enter the Darkhold Redeemers. They're the only ones who can stop Blade before he burns the world down with him. They dig through the cursed pages, searching for a way to break the curse. They find it just in time, but the damage has already been done. Blade is forever changed. Blade didn't just get powers from the Darkhold, he was broken by it. Started as a quest to wipe out the world's evil, turn Blade into the very thing he's trying to destroy. But in that brief moment of agony under the Penance Stare, Blade was forced to own his own demon. It didn't fix him, but it gave him something to hold on to. Switchblade is dead, long live the Daywalker. Midnight Massacre definitely pushed the limits of Blade's character, and not always in the way fans expect. Some readers were all in, loving the gritty, violent transformation of Blade into Switchblade. Yeah, that name really works. There was something undeniably bizarre about watching the Daywalker turn into a pinchered, skin-peeling nightmare, and fans appreciated how dark and twisted it made the character. It wasn't just a fight against vampires anymore. Now he is a walking Frankenstein of every demon he'd ever killed. Which, you know, adds layers, but let's be honest, not everyone was thrilled with Switchblade. The comic received its fair share of side-eye for that, and the extreme violence too. Blade was no stranger to bloodshed, but this was next level, even by his standards. It's like when your friend takes a joke too far, and you're like, okay, that's enough. Still, Midnight Massacre earned its place in Blade's legacy, albeit with some mixed feelings. It didn't exactly go down in history as the greatest thing that ever happened to the character. That honor probably goes to, the original Blade. But over time, it has been recognized for its boldness and for deepening Blade's tortured character arc. The storyline was ultimately included in several collections, showing that it wasn't a complete dumpster fire. Just a dumpster filled with cool powers and fire. The Blade Epic Collection Night Stalkers trade paperback is one such collection that features this madness, which speaks to its enduring, if somewhat controversial, appeal. So yeah, not everyone loved it, but hey, at least it gave us Switchblade, a name that will forever be associated with that one time Blade went totally off the rails and turned into a monster. Sure, more like a pincher-wielding hellhound than a superhero, the pain of watching him burn out is what truly makes it unforgettable. By now, Marvel was deep in its supernatural era, a time when demons were plentiful, trench coats were mandatory, and every other page promised someone screaming in hellfire. Enter Road to Vengeance, the Missing Link, a chaotic crossover mostly taking place in Ghost Rider, Spirits of Vengeance, and Midnight Suns Unlimited books. It starred Ghost Rider, Dan Ketch, Johnny Blaze, the shotgun that spits literal hellfire, and Vengence, the angrier Ghost Rider with more spikes. All thrown into a storyline that tried to be part demonic family drama, part origin retcon, and part 90s metal album cover. The plot kicks off with Lilith. Not that Lilith, but Marvel's own mother of demons, getting resurrected along with her brood, the Lilith. She teams up with Centurious, the villain with no face, to hatch a plan, crank out a new generation of Hellspawn, and steal the hero's powers while they're at it. First step, send Blackout and Pilgrim to take out the Ghost Rider. That plan works about as well as you'd expect. Ghost Rider embeds a chunk of his mystical chain into Blackout's face like he's a goth pinhead, which sounds cooler than it probably was. Meanwhile, Centurious kidnaps Dan Ketch's mom to trade her for Ghost Rider's power source, the Medallion of Power. Blaze, on the other hand, gets himself captured by a demon named Carver and ends up melting down thanks to the unwild, unstable hellfire inside of it. Fortunately, the Quentin Carnival crew fixes him up with some arcane attachments, and boom, now Johnny Blaze is riding around like a magical cyborg cowboy. While all of that's happening, Vengence shows up, angry as ever, throws hands with Ghost Rider until Caretaker shows up, finally explains what's going on. Turns out the Medallion of Power is a big deal. It's the reason these guys can throw fire, ride flaming bikes, and make the Punisher look underdressed. Medallion contains the essence of Zatharos, and it was split into 3 pieces, now lodged in the bikes of Ghost Rider, Blaze, and Vengence. The finale sees all 3 anti-heroes uniting to confront Centurious, who tries to jack the medallions and ends up unleashing Zarathos himself. Things go predictably sideways. Fights break out, hellfire flies everywhere, and somehow amid all the infernal chaos, Johnny Blaze and Danny Ketch finally discover their brothers. Because if you're wondering how more melodrama could be squeezed into a story about demonic power medallions and a flaming biker cult, a surprise family reunion is always on brand. In the end, the trio managed to banish Centurious, Lilith, and Zarathos to the shadow side, using the medallions like a supernatural group project that actually worked for once. Road to Vengeance had a lot going on. Probably too much. Fans of Ghost Rider's darker mythology appreciated the deeper dive into his origins and the connections between Blaze, Ketch, and Vengence. Horror-adjacent vibes, grotesque villains, and relentless momentum made it a standout for hardcore readers of the Midnight Suns line. But casual readers, not so much. If you didn't already know the difference between Zarathos, Centurious, and your average flaming skeleton guy, this arc might have read like an overcooked fever dream. Critics noted that the story leaned so hard into the supernatural lore, left some readers wondering if they missed previous arc or a prerequisite course in demonology. Still, the sheer audacity of the crossover earned it a kind of chaotic respect. It's like Marvel said, what if everything happened in one arc and then just did it? The storyline was reprinted in trade form later, bundled alongside other Midnight Sun era madness. It might not be the crown jewel of Ghost Rider history, but it's definitely one of the loudest, weirdest, and most 90s thing character ever rode through. Also, props to whoever greenlit the idea of giving Johnny Blaze magic cyber part, calling it a fix. That's some real comic book science, baby. And last but not least is the Siege of Darkness, which was also a crossover event that centered around Midnight Suns. Ran across several titles: Ghost Rider, Spirits of Vengeance, Morbius, Night Stalkers, Darkhold, and Doctor Strange. You ever have one of those Tuesdays where half your friends are possessed, base explodes, and you end up killing a demon god in South America with a magic sword? That's Siege of Darkness, the biggest, messiest supernatural brawl Marvel threw in 1993. It kicks off after the Night Stalkers take some rando named Short Circuit. Blade calls in the Midnight Suns, all 9 of them, to say Lilith is dead, but nobody can find her body. And if horror movies have taught us anything, that's never a good sign. The team splits up. One group hits Cypress Hill Cemetery to confirm the kill. The others wade into the demonic mist rolling around New York. They get jumped by Lilith, including one literally named Bad Timing. How appropriate. Eventually, Vengence, Caretaker, and Doctor Strange join the mess. Ghost Rider and Vengence stop a Lilith assault on a police station, then get yanked into another dimension and learn there's a traitor on the team. Morbius, infected by Lilith blood, straight up kills Louise Hastings. Everyone thinks Mordred did it, which doesn't help, and the Liliths start picking off the team one by one. Over in the main Marvel universe, Lilith's demons are attacking anyone remotely supernatural. Werewolf by Night, Devil Slayer, even the Scarlet Witch gets dragged into it. Things get worse. The possessed Morbius leads Lilith straight to Strange's mansion, which gets obliterated. The survivors hole up in a literal nightclub, because when reality is crumbling, there's always room for bottle service. Eventually, Ghost Rider, Blaze, and Vengence regroup for a final battle at Cypress Hills. Using the Medallion of Power, they manage to banish Lilith and her children to the Shadow Side dimension. But Zarathos, the ancient demon Ghost Rider is tied to, comes back stronger than ever, with his personal army of fallen demons. So now it's round 2. Ghost Rider tries to gather the Ancient Order of the Blood to help, but most of them die horribly. One gets killed, another is kidnapped. Victoria Montesi finds out she's pregnant with Elder God Chthon and nearly takes her own life. Mordred flirts with joining Chthon's team, and Doctor Strange gets replaced by a sketchy doppelganger simply named Strange. Oh, and Zarathos kills Ghost Rider. In the final round, only a handful of Midnight Suns are still upright. Vengence, Blaze, Caretaker, Morbius, and the Night Stalkers. They track down one last hidden blood member named Foundry, who gives Blade a mystic sword, a Justicar, just in time for a final showdown in South America. One apocalyptic sword fight later, Blade stabs Zathros into oblivion, and that's how you save the world in 1993, by surviving mass possession, watching most of your friends die, and letting Blade solo a demon god with the sword someone handed him 2 pages ago. The reception to Siege of Darkness was largely mixed, with fans and critics expressing frustration over its convoluted and overcomplicated structure. The event's reliance on numerous tie-ins across multiple series left readers struggling to keep up, with many feeling that the story was more about selling comics than delivering a cohesive narrative, which, let's be honest, you hear that a lot. While the dramatic moments were eye-catching, they felt like a narrative shortcut, undoing much of the emotional weight built up throughout the event. The aftermath left the Midnight Suns even more fractured and isolated, making it hard for readers to invest in the team's future. Ultimately, Siege of Darkness failed to deliver any lasting resolutions, leaving fans with more questions than answers, in a sense that the event was more a temporary reprieve than a true victory. It was like they saved the world, but they forgot to clean up the mess. And hey, I get it. Nobody's in the mood to mop up after a demon apocalypse. And that wraps up our deep dive into 1993, a year that really pushed Marvel's event culture into overdrive. With epic crossover-heavy storylines like Siege of Darkness and the Infinity Crusade, Marvel's throwing everything at the wall to see what would stick. The sheer number of events was impressive, but as we saw, not all of it landed perfectly. Whether you love it or loathe it, 1993 will go down as one of the most event-heavy years in Marvel history. Now we're entering 1994 and 1995, where things somehow got even more unhinged. This stretch of time gave us mutant extinction scares, techno-organic alien invasions, an entire alternate reality where Charles Xavier dies and everything goes completely to hell. We've got the X-Men shutting down their own books, the Punisher getting brainwashed into killing Nick Fury, and Ghost Rider breaking out of a prison called the Black Hole. Comics were going through it. This is the era where Marvel tried throwing every idea at the wall, from existential horror to Gen X angst, and a surprising number of them stuck. Some events were epic, some were disasters, some were a little bit of both. Let's get into it. Child's Play. By 1994, the upstarts were somehow still a thing. Remember them? Bunch of mutant murder socialites competing for points by killing famous people, like the X-Men, Hellfire Club members, and eventually each other. The prize? Vague power, psychic upgrades, and the approval of a cosmic edgelord named Games Master. Treated mass murder like fantasy football. Child's Play is their final big move, a 4-part crossover between the New Warriors and X-Force, where the upstarts changed the rules of the game. No more hunting old mutants, now they're targeting the next generation. Young heroes, specifically mutant teens. Nothing says relevant threat like billionaires hunting teenagers in spandex. The roster of the upstarts this time includes Shinobi Shaw, Trevor Fitzroy, Fabian Cortez, and Graydon Creed, the only guy in the room who's not a mutant and and still manages to be the worst. They're all competing for psychic bragging rights by kidnapping members of X-Force and the New Warrior, including Cannonball, Moonstar, Firestar, Nova, Karma, and others, while Games Master watches from his reality TV-style mind palace. Meanwhile, both teams are doing what classic crossover thing where they get mad, team up, punch each other, and then go to Switzerland, because of course, the upstarts have a mountain lair. Here's the twist. Games Master doesn't actually care who wins, he's bored. The big finish? Paige gives a whole "we're not your plaything" speech about autonomy and choice. It's heartfelt for sure, but also kind of hilarious because it somehow convinces Games Master, an immoral brain ghost who lives in everyone's head, to quit. He just decides to stop being evil. Mid-sentence, crossover over. The upstarts dissolve, Generation X gets greenlit, both X-Force and the New Warriors erase this event from memory like it was a weird dream where someone tried to kill them with metaphors. It's not a total disaster, the art's solid, there are some good team dynamics, and seeing two second-tier teams cross over is kind of fun. But Child's Play is also exactly what happens when you try to combine teen drama, moral lessons, and a psychic battle royale in 4 issues, and wrap it all up with a motivational speech from a character we barely know. Child's Play received mixed reactions upon release. Some readers appreciated the crossover for bringing together X-Force and the New Warriors, offering a fresh dynamic between the teams. However, others criticized the storyline for its convoluted plot and abrupt resolution. The event is often remembered more for its role in setting up Generation X than for its own narrative merits. Time and time again. In 1994, Marvel's New Warriors comics delivered a wild crossover that shook up the team in a big way. The villain, the Sphinx, Nova's ancient, time-twisting nemesis who's been lurking in the shadows waiting for his moment. After watching Night Thrasher crush a demon named Jabata, sounds like Ciabatta, the Sphinx decides it's finally time to mess with the New Warriors for real. When his trusted advisor Sage questions why Lady Sphinx tried stealing his Cause Stone, the Sphinx snaps, killing Sage in cold blood and vowing revenge on Lady Sphinx herself. Meanwhile, Lady Sphinx discovers the Sphinx isn't dead yet. The Warriors think they've got it right. Chilling out, Speedball's on a first date, Silhouette's getting close to Bandit, and Night Thrasher's debating splitting the team in 2. But the Sphinx isn't done. Using half the cost, he scatters the Warriors across time and space. Night Thrasher lands in the middle of a fight against the KKK. Silhouette finds herself at a mystic temple in Cambodia with a young girl named Tai. Chimera faces a brewing Atlantean war she's afraid to change. Nova wakes up in a devastated future where Earth's been wiped out by an alien swarm, Rage is thrown into American past slaves fighting their own battles, and Firestar, she's caught in a witch hunt that's way more real and dangerous than anyone ever expected. Hindsight Lad, Cord, and Sprocket try to track the scattered warriors, but end up tracking the Cause Stone's power signature instead. They set out to form a new team to rescue their friends. Bandit, despite hating the warriors, and his half-brother Night Thrasher, shows up to round up recruits out of love for Silhouette. At Lady Sphinx's grave, the Sphinx gets a surprise. Lady Sphinx has reincarnated and followed him through time, claiming love. He falls for her trap, she helps him steal the rest of the Cause Stone's power. Meanwhile, Alex Power combines the powers of his Power Pack siblings to become Power Packs, joining the New Warriors lineup. The Sphinx starts reshaping the world into his image, an eerie peace enforced by power. Future Nova trains Richard Rider to unlock his full potential through Stargates. Speedball discovers strange new abilities with his kinetic powers. Cloak decides this madness isn't for him and leaves the New Warriors. The rest teleport to Cairo, where the Sphinx rules, only for Nova to arrive and turn the tide. With Nova's help, the new and original Warriors unite, rescuing the originals trapped inside Speedball's powers. They take the fight to the Sphinx, but the villain's relentless. In a surprising twist, Sage returns and reminds the Sphinx of the youth and the hope he once had. Lady Sphinx offers him salvation, and the two merge, disappearing into the unknown. Crossover ends with Speedball, worn out but ready, asking the big question: what do we do with 14 New Warriors? Fans have expressed mixed feelings about the storyline. Some appreciate the ambitious scope and the opportunity to see characters in diverse historical settings. However, others feel that the event's complexity and the large cast may have diluted its impact, and I agree with that. It gets really confusing sometimes. Also, one reader noted that while they enjoyed the individual stories, the overall narrative felt less cohesive due to the fragmented focus. Despite these critiques, Time and Time Again remains a notable entry in the New Warriors series, showcasing the team's resilience and the depth of its characters. It serves as a testament to the creative risks taken during the 1990s in superhero storytelling. In late 1994, Marvel unleashed the Phalanx Covenant, a techno-organic horror show that somehow managed to make the already chaotic X-Men universe feel even more unhinged. This wasn't a typical mutants versus big bag setup. It was a body-snatching, hive-minded apocalypse that turned assimilation into an art form. And it all started when some humans, as usual, got their hands on something they absolutely should have left alone. That something was the transmode virus, an alien infection introduced through Warlock, a lovable cyber goo member of the New Mutants. Unfortunately, the humans in question were Stephen Lang and Cameron Hodge, two longtime mutant-hating lunatics with a flair for overcomplicating genocide. They used the virus to create the Phalanx, a collective of techno-organic beings with the ability to absorb, infect, and digitize organic life. The original plan? Exterminate mutants. The updated plan after the virus evolved past its program, assimilate everyone into a writhing mass of metal and biomass. Thus, progress. The invasion came fast. Within the first act of the story, nearly the entire core X-Men roster was captured and absorbed into the Phalanx structure. Not killed, just fused into the walls like screaming sentient wallpaper. With the heavy hitters sidelined, the story turned to the backups, the oddballs, and the next generation. In Generation Next, we follow Banshee, Emma Frost, Jubilee, and Sabretooth, because apparently someone decided this mission needed exactly one teacher, one chain-smoking mall rat, one murder machine with impulse control issues. Their goal was to locate and protect a group of new, untrained mutants before the Phalanx could infect them. The stakes were high, the team dynamic was tense, and yes, this was the launchpad for Generation X, Marvel's next big teen mutant team. Against all odds, that series turned out to be one of the more enduring successes of the 90s, and personally one of my favorites as well. Meanwhile, Life Science brought together Excalibur, X-Factor, and X-Force to investigate what the Phalanx had become. These weren't just drones running a murder script anymore. They were adapting, developing individuality, and getting smarter. That's where Doug Locke entered the scene. A strange resurrection of the dead New Mutant Doug Ramsey merged with Warlock's techno-organic essence, equal parts philosophical and deeply uncanny. Doug Locke helped the teams understand the Phalanx and prevent them from sending a signal to their creators, Techno-Archy, the cosmic-level threat that made the Phalanx look quaint by comparison. And then there was the final sanction, payoff chapter, with the Phalanx main hive operating out of a hidden stronghold in the mountains near Mount Everest. A rescue mission was mounted. Cyclops, Jean Grey, Cable, and Wolverine formed the infiltration team. And this was not a stealth mission. They brought the pain. The group tore through layers of techno-horrors to reach the imprisoned X-Men and dismantle the psychic core binding the Phalanx together. Turns out even technopath aliens can't handle a telekinetic bomb to the brain. This crossover had all the hallmarks of early to mid-90s X-Men. Overlapping teams, gooey visuals, and enough technobabble to choke a sentinel. But what made it memorable was how much it leaned into horror. This wasn't just a fight, it was a full-scale infestation. The Phalanx were grotesque, inhuman, and nearly unstoppable. They weren't looking to conquer, they were looking to replace. Phalanx Covenant hit readers like a punch from a cable modem. Reactions were mixed, but passionate. For a lot of fans, it was a bold, unsettling shift in the tone that worked, sidestepping the usual cast to focus on emerging characters and setting the stage for Generation X, which became one of Marvel's more successful spin-offs of the era, as I mentioned before. Body horror vibes, the cold hive mind logic, and the sheer alien weirdness of the Phalanx made the event a standout, especially during a time when Marvel events were often loud but forgettable. That said, not everyone loved it. The story could feel overcomplicated, especially since it played out across multiple titles that weren't exactly tightly interwoven. The Phalanx themselves, while creepy and distinct, visually hard to pin down. Some artists leaned into sci-fi fluid metal, others went full snot monster. Either way, it wasn't always pretty, and despite the cool premise, some critics felt the story didn't quite stick the landing, relying too heavily on exposition and sudden shifts in pacing between the acts. But even with its flaws, Phalanx Covenant left a mark. It was messy, yes, but also ambitious. It dared to sideline the icons and focus on characters still figuring themselves out. It pushed the envelope of what counted as mutant storytelling, and it reminded everyone that the X-Men's greatest threats aren't always Magneto or Sentinels. Sometimes it's the creeping dread of losing your humanity to something you can't even comprehend. If you're curious about the Clone Saga, I actually already did a whole video on it before. Feel free to check that out. I'll put the link down in the description. But for now, here's the quick rundown. The Clone Saga was a sprawling, chaotic chapter in Spider-Man's history. running from late 1994 all the way through till the end of 1996. Started as a straightforward mystery about Peter Parker's clone, quickly spiraled to one of the most notorious and divisive storylines Marvel ever published. The initial plan was a short arc, but as sales soared, the story just kept ballooning. Kind of like Peter's web shooters after one too many energy drinks, turning into a marathon of confusion, identity crises, and questionable plot twists. At the heart of it was Ben Reilly, Peter's clone, who had been quietly forgotten for years, basically existing somewhere between that guy in the background and Mystery Me. Taking the name Scarlet Spider, Ben re-emerged in New York, swinging back to action with all the confidence of someone who just found out they're the real Spider-Man, and Peter is the imposter. Because apparently one Spider-Man wasn't enough, and now we had to figure out which one was the real one. Chaos didn't stop there. Peter and Ben had to deal with the Jackal, villain who made the clone in the first place. Came back for a sequel nobody asked for. Then there was Kane, a failed, brutal prototype clone with anger issues that made even Peter's worst days look like a pigment. And to top it off, another clone named Spider-Side went full supervillain, providing that yes, even Spider-Man clones can turn bad. Throw in bizarre characters like Druid's Traveler and Scryer felt less like villains and more like writers just pulled some weird names out of a hat. The biggest curveball came when medical tests, since those are always 100% reliable in comics, declared that Peter Parker was actually the clone. Ben Reilly was the original. Naturally, Peter, being Peter, stepped aside and handed the costume over to Ben, trying to live a quieter life, especially with Mary Jane pregnant. But of course, nothing good lasts. The entire saga was revealed to be one giant manipulation by Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, who had somehow come back from the dead like a bad penny. The grand plan was to break Peter's spirit by messing with his sense of identity. In the final act of the drama, Ben Reilly sacrificed himself to save Peter, disintegrating in a way that looked suspiciously like a bad photocopy fitting for a clone. So it turned out that Peter was always the original Spider-Man after all. What a roller coaster. Throughout the whole saga, Marvel's cranking out 4 Spider-Man titles every month, plus spin-offs and tie-ins, basically turning the story into a relentless weekly barrage of cliffhangers and existential crises. Readers hated the constant twists and the sidelining of Peter, while characters like Druid's Traveler and Scryer were widely criticized for feeling too far removed from Spider-Man's usual street-level drama. And then there was the Osborn resurrection, undercutting the impact of one of Spider-Man's most iconic and tragic storylines, the death of Gwen Stacy. If Osborn was pulling the strings all along, why let his own son Harry die? Why let any of those classic Spider-Man tragedies happen? It just didn't add up. Still, the Clone Saga left its mark. It showed just how far Marvel could push their flagship character, and how much fans could take before saying enough. It was messy, exhausting, and controversial, but it remains an infamous chapter in Spider-Man's history. It's a story you can't quite look away from, no matter how confusing it gets. Countdown was a 5-part crossover centered on the Punisher and spread across his 3 ongoing titles at that time: The Punisher, Punisher War Journal, and Punisher Warzone. It was written by Chuck Dixon with art by Rod Wiggum and Doug Wheeler, and it's pure 90s Marvel gritty bleak, very into the idea that you can fix betrayal with a rocket launcher. This whole thing starts off with Frank Castle, already in bad shape. He's been betrayed by his best friend, replaced by a newer, younger Punisher model, and caught in the middle of a gang war. And Bullseye is also trying to kill him, just in case things weren't bad enough. The new Punisher, Carlos Cruz, and a vigilante named Phalanx, real name Cord Mather, crash a gunfight between the Carbone and Viducci crime families. Bullseye, who's been hired by Rosalie Carbone to kill both Vito Viducci and the Punisher, drops in and immediately proves he's still got it by stabbing Phalanx through his armored helmet directly in the eye. Before dying from what I think we can all agree is a very solid reason to die, Phalanx manages to shield Carlos from an explosion. Carlos escapes, but Bullseye realizes this isn't Frank Castle. It's a knockoff Punisher, and he pieces out. Rosalie Carbone, meanwhile, finishes Vito and swipes Phalanx armor for herself, cause nothing says mob boss like battle armor ripped off a dead vigilante. Elsewhere, the real Frank Castle finally catches up to Microchip, his old partner in crime, and confronts him over the whole "you replaced me with the new guy" thing. Micro's defense? He thought Frank had lost the plot, so he trained a replacement. Frank is unconvinced. That conversation quickly escalates into a full-on gunfight. It's interrupted by rogue S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Derek Stone Cold Smalls, not to be confused with the bassist from Spinal Tap. He ends the argument by firing a rocket into the building, killing Microchip and blowing everything to hell. Frank escapes barely. Carlos Cruz blames Frank for Microchip's death. Frank, for his part, goes back to what he does best, murdering drug dealers in South America. But Carlos finds him and they start shooting at each other again, because what else are you gonna do in this book? Fortunately, a nearby family gets caught in the crossfire, echoing the tragedy that created the Punisher in the first place. Carlos hesitates, Stone Cold does not. He kills Carlos Cruz on the spot. Frank, maybe finally ready to stop, turns himself in. Then Wilson Fisk shows up like a devil on his shoulder and makes him an offer. Kill all of Fisk's enemies and Frank gets to feel like he's doing some good. And Fisk gets to quietly rebuild his empire, the American dream. Frank says yes. He kills everyone on the list except Rosalie Carbone, who's conveniently out of the country, and then he heads off to kill Fisk himself. Meanwhile, Nick Fury has enough of Stone Cold and sends a team of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, including the former Punisher ally Shotgun, to take him out. As for Frank, finally ends up in a showdown with Bullseye at Coney Island. It's a brutal fight, but just when Bullseye looks like he might win, Stone Cold interrupts again and blasts him off the board. He gets the drop on Frank, but Shotgun shows up one last time and puts Stone Cold down for good. The event ends with Shotgun taking Frank Castle into S.H.I.E.L.D. custody. Not dead, not free, just in a holding pattern until the next time Marvel wants to break him out again, which we'll see later in this video. While the crossover featured notable confrontations, such as the Punisher's battle with Bullseye, some readers felt that the storyline lacked the depth and cohesion of earlier arcs. The introduction of new characters and plot developments like the emergence of Carlos Cruz as a replacement Punisher received mixed responses, with some fans questioning the necessity and execution of these changes. From a broader perspective, Countdown is often seen as reflective of Marvel's struggles during the mid-90s. Companies' financial difficulties and the oversaturation of titles may have impacted the quality and direction of the storylines. The decision to cancel all 3 Punisher series in 1995 due to declining sales underscores the challenge faced during this period. In retrospect, while Countdown had its moments of intensity and attempted to provide a climactic narrative for the Punisher, it's frequently viewed as a product of its time, marked by editorial challenges and shifting creative directions. Welcome to the End of the World Again. Legion Quest is a 6-part crossover that ran through Uncanny X-Men, X-Men, X-Factor, and Cable, serving as the direct prelude to Age of Apocalypse. It's a kind of storyline where Bad Idea doesn't even begin to cover it, because the person trying to rewrite history this time is Legion, David Haller, an Omega-level mutant, son of Professor X, and until recently, very, very comatose. We start with a rare moment of calm. The Xavier School has moved to the Massachusetts Academy, and the original mansion is rebranded as the Institute for Higher Learning. Then everything changes when Legion wakes up, or rather, he's woken up by the Ghost of Destiny, a precognitive mutant he killed during one of his mental breakdowns. She gives him a warning. He's about to destroy reality. He responds by declaring he's going to fix everything. Classic X-Men move. Elsewhere, Mystique is presumed dead, but Forge is convinced otherwise. He's right, of course. Nick Fury sends X-Factor to hunt down Mystique's old Brotherhood associates in an effort to find her, which they do. At the hospital where Legion is recovered, she's come to kill him for Destiny's death. Too bad Legion wakes up mid-assassination attempt, starts quoting cryptic poetry before vanishing into the sky like a prophecy in a trench coat. Legion's newfound clarity of mind is suspicious. Gone is the fractured psyche, replaced by a calm, focused mutant with a master plan. He tells his father he's going to make the world better by going back in time and murdering Magneto before he was Magneto, in the name of peace. You can guess how well that goes. Legion jumps back 2 decades and accidentally pulls Psylocke, Storm, Iceman, and Bishop along with him. They're stranded in the past with scrambled memories, while the Shi'ar Empire is warned that the M-Cron crystal, the thing that breaks when reality does, is starting to panic. Back in the present, Charles Xavier calls in Cable for time travel expertise, which is basically like calling your worst ex for advice. You'll get something useful, but it'll come with emotional damage. Cable managed to piggyback into the past, syncs with Bishop, and helps him remember why they're here. Meanwhile, Legion tries to seduce his own mother, awkward, while disguised as Charles Xavier, double awkward. When the real Xavier and young Magnus arrive, Legion finally makes his move. Battle between Legion and not yet Magneto explodes across the desert. Xavier's students explain the stakes to the younger versions of their mentor, who realizes too late that history is breaking in real time. Apocalypse, watching from the sidelines like a doom-loving vulture, takes notice. While Legion moves in for the kill, Xavier throws himself in the way. He saves Magneto, dies at the hands of a son he hasn't even conceived yet. This paradox rips Legion, Psylocke, Storm, and Iceman out of the time stream. Bishop, the last man standing, is left to watch as Magneto cradles the body of his best friend, now a corpse decades too early. and then the universe ends. Literally, the M-Con crystal releases a reality-destroying wave. The Earth is swallowed, the last moment we see, Rogue kissing Gambit goodbye as all existence dissolves into white. The stage is now set for Age of Apocalypse, a world born from one man's attempt to heal the past by tearing it apart. At the time of its release in late 1994 and early 1995, Legion Quest was well received by X-Men fans, though it rarely gets spotlighted on its own. It's partly because it's been overshadowed by what came next, the Age of Apocalypse, but also because it functions more like a high-stakes prologue than a standalone event. The art was consistently solid across the crossover, with strong work from Andy Kubert, Steve Epting, and Roger Cruz. While the writers successfully gave Legion a successful, compelling art without relying on his usual mental illness tropes. The final chapters in Uncanny X-Men number 321 and X-Men number 41 delivered genuine weight, giving Xavier a tragic, almost mythic send-off. In hindsight, Legion Quest has aged better than many 90s events. It's tightly plotted, builds tension effectively, and crucially has actual consequences. You don't usually expect a prelude to end with the death of the franchise's moral center and the annihilation of reality. It's not flashy, but it did what few events could. It made readers believe that everything was about to change, and for once, Marvel actually followed through with that. Next up is what was probably the largest event of 1995, the Age of Apocalypse. Age of Apocalypse is one of Marvel's most ambitious alternate reality stories. This 1995 crossover didn't just explore a different timeline, it completely replaced the main Marvel universe for several months. Earth 616 was effectively erased and swapped out for this darker, more brutal world. While it's now classified as an alternate reality, for a time, Age of Apocalypse was a central reality, and it left a lasting impact with its grim and complex story. During the whole twisted saga, Marvel pulled the plug on all their regular X-Men titles. Forget Uncanny X-Men or X-Men for a bit. Instead, readers got a fresh lineup like Excalibur, Weapon X, and Generation Next. And trust me, those kids had it way worse than the Clone Saga crew. The event was framed by two massive one-shots, X-Men Alpha and X-Men Omega, as you gotta kick off and close a nightmare with a bang. So, how did this timeline get so monumentally screwed? Blame Legion. Charles Xavier's telepathically unstable reality warping son David Haller. This poor messed up dude thought it'd be genius to go back in time and kill Magneto, just like we talked about in Legion Quest. You know, to prevent future crimes. But instead, he accidentally killed his own dad, Professor X, in a moment that perfectly sums up, well, that escalated quickly. With Xavier dead, Apocalypse, the ancient genocidal mutant, decided awesome. He launched his assault a full decade early, turning North America into his brutal playground, killed by a savage horseman after a bloody war of secession, where they brawled over territory like spoiled toddlers. The rest of the world wasn't far behind in chaos. The last hope? Magneto, the very guy Legion tried to kill. Without Xavier around, Magneto stepped up, fired by his friend's dream, and formed a ruthless version of the X-Men. He became the Resistance, fighting Apocalypse's iron grip in a world where the survival of the fittest basically meant you were about to get wiped out. The twist? Salvation came from Bishop, time-displaced mutant who barely remembered the original timeline, but somehow survived the reality rewrite. He was the only one carrying fragments of the real world in his head. When Magneto's X-Men realized Bishop wasn't just crazy rambling about butterflies, they hatched a plan. Send him back to stop the moment Legion killed Xavier. This desperate mission got wild fast. Jean Grey and Weapon X helped drop nukes to sterilize Apocalypse's North American domain. Gambit and his externals had to steal the M-Con crystal from the Shi'ar galaxy, basically the universe's biggest, most unstably shiny thing, to reboot history. Nightcrawler and Mystique went searching for Destiny, and the kids of Generation Next set off to rescue Illyana, Colossus' sister, from the slave pens. It was a chaotic, insane puzzle. The climax was an epic, bloody showdown in Apocalypse's fortress. Magneto finally faced off against the big bad, ripping him in half with his magnetic powers like a cheap toy. Meanwhile, Bishop, aided by Destiny and Illyana, dove into the M-Con crystal and blasted back to the moment Legion was about to kill Xavier. He stopped it. Paradox imploded, Age of Apocalypse vanished, wiped clean from existence. One hell of a ride, proving that even when reality's a dumpster fire, there's usually a cranky time traveler ready to clean it up. Age of Apocalypse was one of the biggest gambles Marvel ever took, and it paid off like crazy. Killing your entire main X-Men line for 4 months and replacing with a parallel universe nightmare was either publishing suicide or genius, and in 1995 it was the latter. Readers loved it. The events boosted sales across the board, and a bunch of the replacement titles like Weapon X, Astonishing X-Men, and Generation Next were critically well received and sold like crazy. Artistically, the series leaned hard into that mid-90s X-Men house style. Thick lines, grim faces, and pouches everywhere. Joe Maduria's work on Astonishing X-Men was a standout, with its manga-influenced flair giving the event a visual energy and even the dystopia look cool. Writers like Scott Lobdell and Warren Ellis, yes, that Warren Ellis, kept the tone bleak but weirdly hopeful, with Magneto as a tortured father figure at the center of the whole grim circus. Critics praised the cohesiveness of the story across many titles. Minor miracle by 90s crossover stand, and more importantly, fans actually cared about the characters. Blink, Morph, Nemesis, and even the completely unhinged Sugarman all gained following. A few, like Blink, became multiversal staples in later books like The Exiles. Of course, Marvel couldn't leave a good timeline dead. Age of Apocalypse got sequels, miniseries, a 10th anniversary event, and was resurrected multiple times in later comics. Some were decent, some were disasters. None quite matched the raw, chaotic energy of the original. But in the end, Age of Apocalypse remains one of the crown jewels of X-Men event storytelling. It's overstuffed, over-serious, and over-the-top, but it worked. And for a brief window in 1995, it proved that even Marvel's most convoluted corner could burn it all down and build something better in the ashes. Over the Edge was a 6-part Marvel crossover under the short-lived Marvel Edge imprint, diving into a darker, more mature corner of the Marvel Universe, with street-level and supernatural heroes caught in a violent spiral. The story centers on Frank Castle the Punisher, who falls victim to a brutal mind control scheme that twists his reality into a nightmare. Basically, Frank got more messed up than a Rubik's Cube in a blender. It all starts with the Punisher still being in the custody of Nick Fury. A mysterious man named Spook shows up, and Nick Fury questions his interest in the Punisher, but he never gives Fury an answer. Using Leonard Sampson, some drugs, and some sick Photoshop skills, he convinces Punisher that Fury was the one that really killed his family. Just then, a bomb that was meant to kill the Punisher breaks Frank out, and soon he is on the hunt for revenge. This warped perception sends Castle on a relentless crusade, not just against Fury, but anyone who stands in his way. In his altered state, the Punisher even targets Nick Fury's son Michael, attempting to kill him, only to be stopped by Daredevil. Adding to the chaos, a new figure donning Daredevil's classic yellow and red costume begins fighting crime in Hell's Kitchen, proving that apparently nobody told this guy that those colors really never caught on. Meanwhile, the supernatural side of things unravels as Ghost Rider, previously detained in S.H.I.E.L.'s superhuman prison known as the Black Hole, breaks free. After clashing with the villainous Scarecrow, he forms an uneasy alliance with the Punisher, though both are on a collision course with S.H.I.E.L.D. forces. Nick Fury, desperate for help, turns to Doctor Strange, but the Sorcerer Supreme is tied up dealing with his own troubles. His manservant Wong is attempting to kill him over the death of Wong's fiancée, and a coven's chaotic influence is spreading through the Sanctum Sanctorum. Try juggling a world-ending cult while your butler's trying to kill you. As the Punisher's war escalates, Hell's Kitchen becomes a battlefield. Daredevil struggles to contain the chaos amid the violent clash between Fury's forces and Castle's rampage. Plan orchestrated by Dum Dum Dugan and Michael Fury, involving disguising Michael as Nick Fury to lure the Punisher out, backfires spectacularly. The dark truth comes out. Spook, a shadowy figure manipulating events behind the scenes, arranged for Castle to believe Fury killed his family, driving the Punisher's vendetta. Despite attempts to de-escalate, it all culminates in a brutal final showdown. With all life model decoys of Nick Fury destroyed, Punisher finds and guns down the real Nick Fury. Castle is then arrested and taken away, facing execution for his actions. The event ends on a grim note, leaving the Marvel Universe to pick up the pieces from one of its darkest and most complex character arcs. Over the Edge drew attention for its mature storytelling and psychological depth, particularly its unflinching portrayal of Frank Castle's fractured mind. Fans appreciated the gritty realism and complex moral questions it raised about vengeance, trauma, and manipulation. However, some readers found the convoluted crossover and reliance on brainwashing plot devices challenging to follow. While it never reached the popularity of Marvel's biggest events, it developed a cult following and influenced later darker narratives within Marvel's street-level and supernatural titles, proving that sometimes even comics need a little edge and a whole lot of cleanup. The years 1996 and 1997 were a turbulent period for Marvel Comics, marked by bold experiments, major crossover events, and behind-the-scenes struggles. These years saw headline-grabbing events like the Marvel vs. DC crossover, where two comic book giants clashed in fan-favorite showdowns. Events like the massive Onslaught Saga would reshape the Marvel Universe and its characters, followed by the controversial Heroes Reborn reboot, which handed some of Marvel's biggest titles over to popular former artists to reimagine them from the ground up. Meanwhile, Operation Zero Tolerance brought a darker, more intense storyline focusing on the mutant persecution that tested the loyalty of fans. All these efforts unfolded as Marvel faced serious financial challenges and uncertainty about the company's future. By 1996, Marvel and DC had both spent decades dominating the superhero market, and occasionally throwing a few jabs at each other across the racks. But for one wild moment, they decided to throw down together. Marvel vs. DC was a 4-issue miniseries that didn't just ask who would win, it let the fans decide, literally. The outcomes of key several battles were left up to a reader vote, and yes, that went about how you'd expect. The premise is big and dumb in the best way. Two cosmic brothers, each representing their universe, Marvel and DC respectively, suddenly become aware of each other's existence and immediately do what all cosmic beings do: force their most popular superheroes to fight to the death. Whichever universe loses the most battles will be erased from existence entirely. So yeah, the stakes are high, even if the logic is non-existent. There were 11 major battles. 6 were determined by the creative team, and 5 were decided by the fan ballot, which meant the most popular characters were going to win regardless of how the fight actually made sense. Aquaman defeats Namor by literally dropping a whale on him. Robin beats Jubilee using the old cape decoy and tripwire strategy. Thor knocks out Captain Marvel by intercepting his transformation lightning. The Flash outruns Quicksilver, and Silver Surfer annihilates Green Lantern with a single energy blast. Then came the fan votes. Superman predictably takes down the Hulk in a slugfest. Batman beats Captain America in the sewers thanks to a lucky splash of water. Storm defeats Wonder Woman after Diana decides to try to level the playing field by dropping Thor's hammer and introducing one of Wonder Woman's worst costumes of all time. Meanwhile, Spider-Man webs up Superboy, and Wolverine defeats Lobo in a bar fight that happens almost entirely off-panel. Arguably the most anticlimactic fight of the whole series, and still somehow one of the most controversial, depending on who you talk to. With the duel results in, Marvel gets the win. But instead of erasing DC, the universe has a meltdown. This leads into the real novelty of the event, the Amalgam Universe. For 2 months, Marvel and DC published comics under the fake imprint Amalgam Comics, which presented an alternate timeline where characters from both universes had always been merged. Batman and Wolverine became Darkclaw. Superman and Captain America fused into Super Soldier. Doctor Strange, Professor X, and Dr. Fate got tangled into Doctor Strange Fate, the most powerful sorcerer in the Amalgam Universe. Even smaller characters like Elektra and Catwoman got mashed into Cat's side, and fake backstories went deep. Fake Golden Age reboots, fake crossovers, even a fake Crisis event called the Secret Crisis of the Infinity Hour. There was even an amalgam parody of Crisis on Infinite Earths number 7, with Super Soldier cradling his sidekick's corpse. Best part, Marvel and DC played it completely straight. Books were treated as if they've always existed. Editorials talked about the classic stories that had never happened. It was bizarre, immersive, and kind of weirdly brilliant. Eventually, the character Access, an original creation meant to act as a bridge between the worlds, helped separate the two realities using fragments of Darkclaw and Super Soldier to restabilize the multiverse. The event ended with Batman and Captain America confronting the Cosmic Brothers and convincing them to stop the war. Final message: the universes are different, that doesn't mean they can't coexist. As for reception, Marvel vs. DC was an enormous commercial hit. The first issue alone reportedly sold over 1 million copies. It was a genuine crossover moment, not just in story but in pop culture. Kids, teens, and longtime collectors all had something to say about it. Battle results sparked heated debates in comic shops for months, and while critics weren't exactly calling it a literary triumph, they largely agreed it was fun, fast-paced, and packed with enough spectacle to make up for the lack of depth. The Amalgam comic one-shots were surprisingly well received. Titles like JLX, Magneto and the Magnetic Men, and Darkclaw Adventures were praised for the creativity and how committed they were to the bit. A second wave of books came out in 1997, though by that point the novelty had faded. Still, this brief window where the big two got weird together left a permanent mark on comic book history. In fact, a complete DC vs. Marvel omnibus collecting the entire crossover and all one-shots were finally released last year in 2024. And to this day, there's still a small but vocal chunk of fans asking, why can't we get Darkclaw back? Who knows? This may not be just nostalgia. Reports confirm that Marvel and DC are teaming up again in 2025, kicking off with 2 one-shot crossovers, Deadpool/Batman in September and Batman/Deadpool in November. Your guess is as good as mine if we'll ever see those characters again. Let's start with a little behind the scenes context, because this one didn't come out of nowhere. Onslaught was the brainchild of writer Mark Waid and artist Andy Kubert. Editorial direction from Bob Harris, during a time when Marvel was desperately chasing sales with one line-wide event after another. Core concept? What if Professor X's suppressed psychic darkness and also Magneto's repressed anger, cause sure, why not, fused together into a giant armored psychic god named Onslaught, who could fight everyone, wreck the Marvel Universe, and sell a ton of comics. Simple. The idea was big, too big. It ballooned quickly into a full-line crossover spanning X-Men, Avengers, Fantastic Four, Hulk, Spider-Man, and several unnecessary tie-ins probably didn't need to read, but might have bought anyway because the covers look cool. It was also created with an endpoint in mind, continuity reset that would let Marvel kill off most of their major non-mutant heroes and launch the infamous Heroes Reborn reboot, where characters like Iron Man and Captain America would be handed over to Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld in a separate continuity pocket with belts and shoulder pads. Now, for the actual plot, Onslaught first shows up as shadowy force manipulating things behind the scenes, like kidnapping Franklin Richards and using Nate Gray to boost his power. Eventually we find out that Onslaught is Professor X, or more accurately, Professor X possessed by the worst parts of himself and Magneto's brain, which he psychically absorbed all those years earlier in X-Men number 25 after mind-wiping Magneto in a rage. That moment, meant to be triumphant, turned out to be the trigger for Xavier's slow breakdown, and Onslaught was the result. The X-Men try to stop him, but Onslaught just keeps evolving. He sheds his armor, becomes pure energy, builds a massive psionic citadel in Central Park, and declares war on all of humanity. He's essentially a mutant supremacist now, but wrapped in the language of peace and unity, which makes him even creepier. The Avengers, Fantastic Four, and Hulk all join the fight, and it still barely makes a dent. Controls Sentinels, kills or incapacitates some of the most powerful beings on Earth. It's chaos. At one point, Jean Grey reads Xavier's mind, confirms what no one wants to hear. Professor X is still in there, fully conscious, watching everything, trapped inside the monster he created. It's one of the most disturbing details of the whole saga, and a rare moment where the story actually leans into its horror potential. Eventually, the only way to beat him is through a mass sacrifice. All the non-mutant heroes, Cap, Iron Man, Thor, the Fantastic Four, dive into Onslaught's energy form to burn him out from the inside. It's treated as a noble death, but really it's just a soft exit for the upcoming Heroes Reborn line. The only reason Hulk survives is because he was technically mutated enough to not count as fully human, and even that's debatable. The Onslaught Saga was supposed to be tragic, sweeping, and profound. What it often was instead was overstuffed. The concept of a dark Xavier had real potential. By the time the tie-ins started piling up, you needed a flowchart, 3 backups to keep track of who was doing what. That said, there are genuinely memorable moments. Xavier's mental collapse, Hulk physically separating Banner from Onslaught with a single punch, and the sheer audacity of killing off almost every A-list hero in one go. Even fringe titles like the Green Goblin and Punisher had to nod toward it, whether it made sense or not. Reception was divisive. Some readers were into the scale and the dramatic weight of it all. Others thought it was bloated mess that tried to do too much, relied too heavily on mystery box marketing, collapsed under its own weight. The fact that it directly fed into Heroes Reborn, project driven by editorial panic rather than creative necessity, didn't help. But if nothing else, Onslaught proved Marvel was willing to blow everything up to get your attention. And for better or worse, it kinda worked. The end of the Onslaught Saga was a big moment in Marvel history, not just for its in-universe destruction, but for what came after. In the wake of Onslaught's defeat, Fantastic Four, the Avengers, Iron Man, and Captain America were presumed dead. But in truth, they'd been transported into a pocket universe, created by Franklin Richards, effectively giving Marvel a chance to reboot these characters outside the confines of their continuity, and more crucially, outside the hands of their usual team. Marvel still technically published Heroes Reborn. Creative control is handed off to two of their former Golden Boys, Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld, working through their Image Comics studios, Wildstorm and Extreme. So even though Marvel logo was on the front, the content inside was coming from a very different place, both stylistically and creatively. Think more pouches, more guns, an anatomy that made you question whether anyone involved had ever seen a human body in real life. This was the birth of Heroes Reborn. It was part marketing stunt, part Hail Mary. Marvel's core non-X-Men titles were struggling. Captain America and Avengers were no longer pulling in readers, so why not give them to the guys who'd helped define the bombastic 90s aesthetic? In this new universe, familiar origins were rewritten. Captain America's past was redrawn, the Fantastic Four's mission reshaped, and Tony Stark's identity refreshed. Continuity was modernized to fit the era, jettisoning the Silver Age baggage for gritty redesigns and new world rules. It was a soft reboot dressed in hard abs and shoulder pads. But while Heroes Reborn offered a bold solution to Marvel's creative slump, it was also a symptom of desperation following Onslaught. The universe had just imploded, literally and figuratively, and this was Marvel's attempt to build something new in the rubble. But off-panel, readers were divided, and often furious. Fan backlash was immediate and fierce. Liefeld's run on Captain America was a lightning rod, criticized for widely exaggerated anatomy and bizarre designs. One infamous image of Cap with hyperinflated pecs and microscopic head became emblematic of all things wrong with 90s excess, sparking memes, parodies, endless ridicule. This Reddit comic sums up the event bluntly. I was so excited about Heroes Reborn, and even as a 14-year-old, I knew this comic was horrible. Not going to lie, I was so turned off by Liefeld's depictions that I never had the urge to read this. 100% garbage. Critics noted that the change felt unnecessary, particularly since Captain America had been thriving creatively under Mark Waid and Ron Garney. Fans were understandably upset that a critically praised series was taken away to make room for that. Reviews and retrospectives have called the event a boneheaded punchline and a failure of timing and taste, especially amid the speculator crash. Liefeld's two books, Captain America and the Avengers, were hit hardest by fan backlash and slipping sales, so Marvel pulled the plug on his contract after 6 issues. Titles were handed off to Lee's Wildstorm Productions, where the Avengers were given over to Walt Simonson. And even though the experiment was planned to run 12 issues per title, James Robinson was brought in to write the 13th and final issue for each of the 4 series. That finale, titled World War III, served as a Wildstorm versus Marvel style send-off, rebooted characters against each other in a climactic battle that somehow made even less sense than how they got there in the first place. In the end, the whole thing wrapped up with Heroes Reborn: The Return, a 4-issue miniseries that brought the characters back to the main Marvel universe, thanks once again to the reality warping powers of Franklin Richards. Just like that, the Pocket Universe was gone. The new continuity was swept under the rug, and the Marvel Universe just moved on, more or less pretending it never happened. Except, of course, for the fans, because nobody ever forgets that Captain America chest. Ultimately, Heroes Reborn exploded into public consciousness, boost sales temporarily, and force a conversation about what Marvel heroes should be. Fans largely rejected the extreme redesigns and heavy-handed editorial shakeups. While the line sold well initially, its critical reputation and legacy remained mixed, and in many corners, flat-out negative. When the smoke cleared, the heroes returned home to the main Marvel universe, and the peace treaty was signed, but the scars of that year remain, testament to the volatility of creative ownership and fan expectations. Following the chaos of Onslaught, Marvel launched Operation Zero Tolerance, a sprawling crossover event that unfolded across the several X-Men related titles, including X-Men, X-Force, Generation X, Uncanny X-Men, and even Spider-Man. At the center of it all was Bastion, a terrifying fusion of mutant hunting machines, Nimrod, and Master Mold, reborn with one purpose: to eliminate mutant kind by any means necessary. Bastion led a covert, government-backed purge against mutants, targeting not only the X-Men, but anyone with mutant DNA. The event ramped up paranoia, political manipulation, and brutal battles, with mutant heroes scattered, captured, or on the run. Bastion was created when Master Mold and Nimrod were forced through the Siege Perilous and merged into this new being. He infiltrated political circles by aligning with the anti-mutant group Friends of Humanity, led by Graydon Creed, who gained influence with key figures like Senator Robert Kelly. Bastion's plan was to secretly embed thousands of Prime Sentinels, humans fitted with nanotechnology, become mutant hunting cyborgs throughout the population, ready to be activated to eradicate mutants. The X-Men uncovered hints of Operation Zero Tolerance months before it became public. Gambit and Phoenix infiltrating a Pentagon gathering. Bastion was too shrewd to be fooled and too quickly identified the spies. In the wake of the Onslaught catastrophe, which saw the apparent deaths of many heroes and intensified anti-mutant sentiment, Professor Xavier was captured and held prisoner by Bastion. The assassination of Great and Creed further inflamed the hatred that gave Bastion political leverage. As Operation Zero Tolerance officially launched, Bastion's forces struck the X-Men during their return over Colorado. Despite fierce resistance, the mutants were captured and taken to a secret facility in New Mexico. Bastion publicly announced the task force as a legitimate effort to protect humanity, broadcasting footage of the attacks to manipulate public opinion. Meanwhile, the mutant team scattered across the country faced brutal challenges. Generation X was hunted and nearly wiped out in California. Jubilee was captured and subjected to memory extraction, and Wolverine escaped assassination attempts. The X-Men discovered the horrifying extent of the program, including the clinic of Dr. Prospero, which was transforming ordinary people into Prime Sentinels without their knowledge. Operation Zero Tolerance also caused uneasy alliances and betrayals, like Moonstar's double agent role within the Mutant Liberation Front and the unexpected aid of the Israeli mutant Sabra. As the crackdown intensified, key figures like Senator Kelly began to question their support for Bastion, eventually pushing to the program's shutdown. S.H.I.E.L.D. was called in, leading to the final confrontation in New York. Bastion's forces were defeated and ordered to stand down. The X-Men escaped, though not without casualties and lasting trauma. Cyclops was found to have a bomb implanted in him, requiring urgent medical care. Jubilee and other mutants struggled with the fallout of the brutal campaign. In the aftermath, Bastion briefly escaped custody, only to meet his apparent end at the destroyed Prospero's clinic, setting the stage for future mutant threats. Operation Zero Tolerance was a mixed bag for fans and critics alike. While it brought intense action and high stakes, many readers felt overwhelmed by the sprawling crossover that required jumping between multiple titles to follow the full story. The event's darker tone and brutal treatment of beloved characters, especially relentless targeting and imprisonment of the X-Men, divided the fan base. Critics often pointed out that Bastion, though menacing, felt like a one-note villain driven mostly by cliché mutant-hating motives. Some also criticized the event for relying too heavily on shock value and mutant persecution tropes, without adding much depth or nuance to the story. The extensive use of Prime Sentinels, while visibly striking, also contributed to a feeling of oversaturation and repetitiveness in battles. Additionally, the event was seen by some as a setup for other stories rather than satisfying standalone art. Despite the criticism, Operation Zero Tolerance succeeded in raising the stakes for the X-Men universe, setting up new dynamics and consequences that reverberated in subsequent comics. It remains a significant, if somewhat controversial, chapter in the late 1990s X-Men saga. Heroes Reborn wasn't merely a bold creative experiment, it was a sign of how far Marvel was willing to go to stay in the game. Handing over the Avengers and Fantastic wasn't just outsourcing, it was practically hitting the reset button on decades of continuity. And the result, a mix of sales spike, fan backlash, internet memes, and one of the most infamous Captain America drawings in history. Meanwhile, Operation Zero Tolerance offered a darker reflection of Marvel's core themes, took the X-Men's ongoing struggle for acceptance, and escalated it into something more paranoid and systematic. Prime Sentinels could be anyone, your neighbor, your friend, your doctor, and behind it all was Bastion, a villain created not just from two killer robots, Marvel's own continuity-consuming machine. Looking back, these weren't just events, they were growing pains. Marvel was in the middle of a financial freefall, creators were jumping ship, and fans were burning out. These stories tried to make sense of the chaos, sometimes succeeding, sometimes collapsing under the weight of it. But even now, in their flaws, they're a window into a publisher that refused to stop experimenting, no matter how messy things got. Now we've arrived at 1998, a strange and transitional year for Marvel Comics. The company was still clawing its way out of bankruptcy, juggling big-name franchises while experimenting with smaller crossovers that didn't always land. The speculator boom was over, sales were shaky, and Marvel was leaning hard on familiar characters to keep readers invested. X-Men, Avengers, and Spider-Man all headlined multiple storylines. But the real story of 1998 is how uneven the event scene was. Some arcs felt like must-read epics, others disappeared into the back issue bins almost as soon as they wrapped. It was a year defined by cautious ambition, where Marvel was trying to prove it could still deliver the kind of stories that kept fans coming back. During the summer of 1998, Spider-Man was in serious trouble. Norman Osborn had just pressured J. Jonah Jameson, the Daily Bugle owner and Peter's boss, into selling the newspaper to him. in Spectacular Spider-Man issue 250. With the control of the media now in his hands, Osborn used his new power to relentlessly torment Peter. This led to the crossover known as Spider-Man Identity Crisis. The story played out across Amazing Spider-Man number 414, 415, Spectacular Spider-Man 246 and 247, Sensational Spider-Man 27 and 28, and Peter Parker Spider-Man 28 and 29. Identity Crisis was a true 4-title event, crafted by writer Howard Mackey and artist Patrick Zurcher. Together they spun a complex tale of deception, desperation, and daring that would push Peter Parker to his limits. Osborn's plan was diabolical. He hired the villain Trapster to frame Spider-Man for the murder of a criminal, because why stop at ruining Spider-Man's reputation when you can try to get him arrested for murder? Then, Osborn baited Spider-Man into attacking him while secretly filming the encounter, because everyone likes a good reality show. With the control over the Daily Bugle and video evidence in hand, Osborn convinced the city that Spider-Man was a menace faster than Jameson ever could. Peter quickly realized this is a battle Spider-Man could not win. If he kept fighting as Spider-Man, he would be arrested or worse. So in one of the most creative moves in Spider-Man's history, Peter went undercover, not as one, but as 4 different heroes. He designed 4 new costumes and identities, each pretending to be a brand new superpowered individual who had just arrived in New York City. These were Hornet, Dusk, Prodigy, and Ricochet. Each suit was crafted to conceal spider powers and keep Peter's identity a secret. Hornet was the first. The armored hero wore a high-tech suit complete with mechanical wings and stun stingers, giving Peter the ability to fly and fight without risking exposure. Hobby Brown, the Prowler, lent his technical expertise in building the suit. Hornet was tough and aggressive, designed for heavy combat and intimidation. But let's be real, kinda looked like Spider-Man playing Iron Man dress up. Just a little bit. Then there's my personal favorite, Ricochet, the street-smart acrobat. Fast, agile, and unpredictable. Ricochet used throwing discs and clever flips to outmaneuver foes. This identity let Peter sneak into the criminal underworld and gather intelligence. Dusk was the shadowy, mysterious figure inspired by the Negative Zone tech. Dusk operated from the shadows, using stealth and fear tactics to manipulate villains like Trapster into turning on themselves. Think of Dusk as Spider-Man's goth phase, silent, brooding, and terrifying. And finally was Prodigy, the shining symbol of hope. Wearing a bright golden costume, Prodigy was the hero Peter wanted everyone to see. Powerful, honorable, and unbreakable. A guy who could probably sell toothpaste with his smile. Using Ricochet and Dusk, Peter infiltrated the criminal underworld and uncovered the truth. Then as Prodigy, Peter presented the fabricated evidence, showing the Spider-Man caught on Osborn's video was also an imposter, blowing Osborn's case out of the water. With no way to fight back, Spider-Man was officially declared innocent of the murder charges, forcing Osborn to abandon his scheme. These identities weren't just disguises, they were pieces of Peter's personality given physical form. By rotating between them, Peter kept everyone guessing and stayed one step ahead of the law. The story balanced action, mystery, and character drama, having deep into themes of identity, sacrifice, and resilience. While Spider-Man won this round, Osborn still found ways to come out on top. Using control of the Daily Bugle, he rewrote history to erase his past as the Green Goblin. This move kind of foreshadowed Osborn's eventual rise during the Dark Reign era many years later, when he basically took over America like some twisted CEO. Interestingly, Osborn chose to keep Spider-Man's true identity a secret, saving that juicy tidbit for personal torment rather than public exposure. Though Identity Crisis didn't shake up Peter's life in the long term, it left a legacy in the Slingers themselves. A short-lived group of young heroes took on the 4 new identities Spider-Man created, and actually had some really fun stories of their own. Most importantly, this story showed that being Spider-Man isn't just about webs and wall crawling. Sometimes survival means brains, guts, and rocking multiple superhero costumes without losing your mind. In 1998, Marvel was still recovering from its mid-90s implosion, scrambling to figure out what readers wanted. One answer was MC2, a bright, optimistic imprint set 10 years in the Marvel Universe's future, pitched as the opposite of the grim, brooding comics dominating the shelves. Think less rain-soaked vigilante and more Saturday morning cartoon that never aired. Concept spearheaded by writer and editor Tom DeFalco and artist Ron Frenz was simple: move Marvel's icons forward a decade and pass the torch to a new generation. The stories would stay true to the continuity while avoiding the tangled mess of the main 616 timeline. The flagship was Spider-Girl, starring Mayday Parker, daughter of Peter and Mary Jane. Here Peter had retired after losing a leg to the Green Goblin, but Mayday inherited his powers and his stubborn sense of responsibility. She wasn't just a girl Spider-Man, she had her own voice, sharper wit, and a knack for balancing school with superheroics. From the start, her rogues gallery took shape, with foes like an updated Green Goblin, a daughter of Venom, and the mysterious Dark Devil. 2 other launch titles rounded out the MC2 line, and helped flesh out this alternate future. A-Next followed the next generation of Avengers team, stepping into the shoes of the mightiest heroes. Among the roster was American Dream, Shannon Carter, the niece of Sharon Carter, who despite lacking superhuman powers, was a highly skilled and disciplined hero. Inspired by Captain America, a similar iconic shield, and embodied the same unwavering commitment to justice, honor, and the ideals that made Cap a symbol of hope. Alongside her was Mainframe, an advanced AI built in the image of Iron Man, equipped not only with powerful armor, but also Tony Stark's tactical genius. Then there was Stinger, Cassie Lang, daughter of Scott Lang, who had stepped out of her father's shadow, become a confident and capable hero in her own right, bringing her own style and energy to the team. Rounding out the core was Thunderstrike, Kevin Masterson, son of the original hammer-wielding hero, who grappled with the weight of his father's legacy while forging his own identity as a worthy successor. Together, these heroes brought a rich mix of legacy, innovation, and a fresh perspective that helped define the spirit of A-Next and the MC2 universe as a whole. The series didn't just rehash old Avengers stories. It played with the idea of how a team of fresh heroes would live up to legends while facing entirely new threats. Meanwhile, the other title, J2, brought a lighter, more comedic tone to the line, focusing on Zane Yama, the teenage son of the Juggernaut, inheriting his dad's size and unstoppable power, but none of his criminal streak. J2 was part superhero, part awkward high schooler, and all hard. Character constantly torn between clobbering villains and worrying about being late for class. These titles, while not as famous as Spider-Girl, expanded MC2's world and made it feel like a living, evolving Marvel universe, rather than just a one-off experiment. The MC2 books were colorful, energetic, in all ages, without talking down to readers. But Marvel didn't want to just sell them in comic shops, so they struck a Kmart exclusive deal, aimed at kids shopping with their parents. Plan backfired. Many stores didn't stock the books properly, sometimes hiding them in toy aisles instead of magazine racks. Hardcore collectors wouldn't hunt through big box stores. Casual readers barely knew the line existed. The problem wasn't the content, in my opinion. Spider-Girl quickly built one of Marvel's most passionate fan bases, but the combination of low sales, poor distribution, and Marvel's recent bankruptcy meant most of the titles fizzled fast. A-Next and J2 barely lasted a year. Spider-Girl survived only through relentless fan campaigns, eventually hitting over 100 issues across relaunches, making her the longest-running, female-led solo in Marvel history at that time. In the end, MC2 became a cult favorite. A hopeful, continuity-rich alternate universe where legacies mattered and heroes actually aged. It never became Marvel's next big thing, but it proved that sincere, imaginative superhero storytelling could still work, even if the world wasn't ready to find it next to the Kmart toy aisle. That same year, amid Marvel's effort to juggle multiple sprawling storylines, Siege of Wundagore stood out as a complex, multi-title saga that brought together mutant factions, superheroes, and cosmic forces in a battle over one of the Marvel Universe's most mysterious locations, Wundagore Mountain. At the center of the conflict was the High Evolutionary, a brilliant but dangerously unbalanced geneticist obsessed with accelerating evolution. His scientific citadel atop Wundagore Mountain had been seized by Exodus and his acolytes, fanatical mutants bent on power and control. To reclaim his domain, the Evolutionary summoned his loyal Knights of Wundagore, a team of superpowered warriors genetically engineered and fiercely devoted to their master's vision. But things quickly became complicated. Among the knights was the enigmatic Lord Anon, whose secret identity and motivations raised eyebrows. Meanwhile, the Heroes for Hire, a loose group of street-level heroes including Luke Cage and Iron Fist, were drawn into the fray thanks to the intervention of White Tiger, a genetically enhanced warrior created by the Evolutionary to hunt the monstrous man-beast. The story unfolds through a 5-part crossover spanning Heroes for Hire 15 through 16, Quicksilver 11 through 12, and the joint Heroes for Hire and Quicksilver Annual 1998, weaving a tale of shifting alliances, brutal battles, and unexpected betrayals. Exodus's control of Wundagore was a significant threat. The Acolytes' hold on the Citadel challenged the Evolutionaries' grand plans, while the heroes grappled with their own internal conflicts. The Man-Beast, revealed to be masquerading as Lord Anon, struck at the heart of the Evolutionaries' forces, turning friend against friend and escalating the battle to a fever pitch. Quicksilver emerged as a pivotal player. Using the unstable and powerful Isotope E, Quicksilver briefly became a near godlike figure, capable of turning the tide against Exodus and the Man-Beast. His leadership was key to uniting the fractured factions and confronting the escalating chaos. Climax saw the High Evolutionary undergo a dramatic transformation, evolving into a towering, godlike entity, ready to force the next phase of evolution on the world. But this power came at a cost. After a desperate struggle, the Evolutionary relinquished his divinity and returned to his human form, while the Man-Beast was stripped of his monstrous powers and reduced to his original animal state. The heroes for hire were restored, though not without loss. The White Tiger chose to revert to her natural form, disappearing from the superhero scene, and several knights perished or vanished after the conflict. One thing I've always found cool about this story is the Knights of Wundagore themselves. They're not just your standard superhero team. They're these genetically engineered warriors, each having unique powers and personalities, blending mythic fantasy and science fiction. Their loyalty to the High Evolutionary, combined with their tragic flaws and occasional betrayals, give them a depth and mystery that stands out. They add a rich layer to the story, serving as both noble knights and unpredictable wild cards in this chaotic struggle. This event was more than a battle for a mountain. It represented the clash of science, mutation, and morality. The High Evolutionary's god complex and the instability echoed themes of power and responsibility, while Exodus and the Acolytes' fanaticism highlighted mutant extremism. Quicksilver's involvement underscored the personal and political struggles of the Marvel mutant community. Siege of Wundagore remains a significant chapter for fans of Marvel's Mutant Saga and cosmic mythos. A tangled, ambitious story blending superhero action with deep character drama, scientific hubris, and the consequences of playing God. In 1998, Marvel launched two tightly linked crossover events, The Gathering of the Five and The Final Chapter, weaving a dark, mystical storyline across the Amazing Spider-Man, Spider-Man, the Spectacular Spider-Man, and the Sensational Spider-Man. Crafted by writers Howie Mackey and John Byrne, these events served as a major editorial reset under Editor-in-Chief Bob Harras, resulting in the cancellation of the Spectacular and Sensational Spider-Man titles, and the controversial renumbering and relaunch of the Amazing Spider-Man and Peter Parker Spider-Man. At the core was Norman Osborn's desperate push to complete an ancient ritual. This mystical gamble set off a chain of events that resurrected beloved characters, reshaped Spider-Man's world, and forced Peter Parker to confront the limits of his own legacy. The story kicks off with Norman Osborn still recovering from an assassination attempt by Nitro, preparing to perform an ancient and dangerous ritual called the Gathering of the Five, a ceremony promising one of 5 gifts or curses: power, knowledge, immortality, madness, or death. Osborn is determined to claim the ultimate prize, and to do so he recruits a handful of other characters, some willingly and some others under duress. Osborn, hungry for power, assembled his team. Himself, Gregory Hurd, also known as Overdrive, who was desperate to save his dying wife, Hamilton Cromwell, Madam Web, who was facing her own death and desperate for immortality, and a mysterious last participant who turned out to be Maddie Franklin. Another character central to the story is Molten Man, who is manipulated by a device implanted by Osborn to target Allison Mongrain, characters whose interactions ultimately reveal a crucial secret to Mary Jane before she dies: that Peter Parker's daughter May, who died during childbirth, is still alive. Driven by this revelation, Spider-Man trekked the Green Goblin to Osborn's hunting lodge, convinced that his daughter was being held captive. There, instead, he found his Aunt May, who was still alive, contrary to her apparent death 3 years earlier in Amazing Spider-Man number 400. Allison Mongrain was talking about a different May. This wasn't a clone or an imposter, it was the real Aunt May, kept prisoner and implanted with a device that would detonate bombs worldwide if removed. After rescuing Aunt May and taking her to Reed Richards for testing, the grim truth came to light. Though her identity was confirmed, the device in her brain was lethal if tampered with, forcing a cruel stalemate. Spider-Man faced an impossible choice: save his loved one, but risk global disaster, or let her die. Meanwhile, the Gathering of the Five ceremony took place, but expectations don't always match reality. Norman Osborn, ever ambitious, hoped for power, but instead received madness, leaving him mentally unstable and increasingly dangerous. Morris Maxwell, a wealthy businessman seeking understanding and insight, was granted knowledge, exactly what he desired. Madam Web, who had long battled mortality, received immortality, securing her place as a timeless seer. Maddie Franklin, young and inexperienced, appeared eager for strength or significance, and she indeed received power, giving her abilities beyond her normal limitations. Gregory Hurd, desperate to save his wife, and perhaps anticipating some restorative effect, tragically received death, which did not kill him outright, but instead transformed him into the fiery, destructive entity known as Shadrach, a dark and ironic twist on his hopes. The ritual's chaotic mix of expectation and outcome created dramatic consequences for each participant, underscoring that even in the Marvel Universe, nothing is ever straightforward. The final blows came in a showdown that nearly destroyed the Daily Bugle, when the Goblin launched a massive pumpkin bomb. Spider-Man saved the building, but knew the war had taken its toll, with the world's fate hanging on Aunt May's survival and his own life as Spider-Man at a crossroads. After this event, Peter Parker's life took a dramatic turn. He survived the ordeal, but the event left deep scars. Most notably, Peter made the heart-wrenching decision to retire, burning his costume. He stepped away from the mask for a short time, marking the end of the era. This led to the relaunch of Peter Parker's Spider-Man, with new storylines focusing on his life beyond the mask, as well as other heroes stepping into the spotlight. Thanks to Reed Richards and a team of expert surgeons, they managed to stabilize Aunt May by carefully removing the device's lethal functions without triggering the catastrophic failsafes. This medical miracle saved her life, though the device remained in her head as a ticking time bomb. Aunt May returned to being a beloved family figure, but with the ever-present shadow of danger from the lingering device adding weight to her story and Peter's ongoing struggle. The Gathering of the Five and the final chapter landed in a complicated spot with Spider-Man fans. On one hand, the stories brought back Aunt May, an iconic beloved character thought dead since the height of the Clone Saga, which pleased many longtime readers who missed her presence in Peter's life. On the other hand, the convoluted plot involving mystical ceremonies, implanted devices, and multiple crossover issues felt like a tangled mess to others, especially coming off the chaotic years of the Clone Saga itself. The attempt to reset the Spider-Man titles with new #1 issues also drew mixed reaction, with some fans feeling it was a cash grab rather than a fresh start. Moreover, the decision to leave Aunt May with a bomb implant device in her brain never fully revolved, but instead was permanently sidelined, added to the sense of unfinished business that frustrated readers. In the end, the Gathering of the Five and the final chapter marked a significant crossroads for Spider-Man in the late 90s. An attempt to clean house, reorient the character, and set up new directions for the franchise. While the story definitely wasn't perfect and left some narrative threads dangling, the events remind us what comic storytelling is awfully messy and imperfect, but always evolving. Even tangled, controversial arcs can open doors for new characters and ideas, keeping the world of Marvel's web-slinger fresh and full of possibilities. By late 1998, Marvel brought the X-Men into one of their strangest and most philosophical crossovers of the era, the Hunt for Xavier, running through Uncanny X-Men 362 through 364 and X-Men 82 through 84. The story was written by Steve Siegel and Joe Kelly, with art by Chris Bocciolo and Carlos Paccio, and it set out to finally answer a big question hanging over the book since the Onslaught event: what happened to Professor X after he surrendered himself to the authorities? When the story begins, Xavier is powerless and imprisoned. The X-Men search for the missing mentor took an unexpected turn when they crossed paths with a familiar threat, Cerebro. Once merely the X-Men's mutant detecting computer, Cerebro had evolved into a fully self-aware artificial intelligence. No longer content with simply locating mutants, Cerebro now believed the only way to ensure a peaceful future was to catalog every human on Earth. In its mind, this meant digitally recording the genetic and mental profiles of all people, mutants and non-mutants alike, essentially storing their essences in a massive database. To Cerebro, this was the first step towards creating a perfectly controlled, mutant-friendly world where no one could ever threaten mutant kind. Though in reality, it was more like imprisoning humanity in a virtual box. When the X-Men learned of this plan, they discovered that Cerebro had already been inducting mutants, including members of the newly reformed Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. These captives revealed that Xavier was also being held, not as a prisoner in chains, but more as a reluctant mentor that Cerebro hoped would approve of its grand design. Splitting into teams, the X-Men fought through Cerebro's drone army while working alongside Nina, a young mutant who had been jailed with Xavier during his time in custody. Nina managed to restore Xavier's telepathic powers, allowing him to confront Cerebro directly. Together they forced the AI into a mind link with all of humanity at once. mutants, overwhelming it with the full spectrum of human thought and emotion. The sheer complexity and contradiction of billions of lives proved too much for Cerebro's rigid logic, causing it to collapse and fade into nothingness, and freeing those it had trapped. With Cerebro gone, Xavier returned home to the mansion, reuniting with the X-Men, though the ordeal served as a reminder that even the tools built to protect mutant kind turn against it if left unchecked. While the Cerebro storyline isn't usually singled out as one of Marvel's most iconic art, it has gained a quiet reputation among fans as one of the stranger late 90s X-Men plots. It largely because it took a familiar piece of mutant tech and turned it into a sentient villain with disturbingly grand ambition. Reviews from the time are mixed. Some readers enjoyed the eerie sci-fi concept of Cerebro wanting to digitize the minds of every human being, mutant or not, as a way to achieve safe utopia to be overly convoluted and far-fetched. Behind the scenes, the arc was marked with one of the final major storylines before X-Men underwent a creative shift leading into the 2000s. It's often remembered more for being a transitional piece in the franchise than for its lasting impact. And that was Marvel in 1998, a year caught between recovery and reinvention. Some events still spark nostalgia, others are remembered only by the readers who were there at the time. But together they paint a picture of a publisher trying to find its footing after years of chaos. These stories weren't always perfect, but they set the stage for the bigger, bolder crossovers that defined the early 2000s. 1999 was a weird year for Marvel. Instead of one massive unified blockbuster, Marvel put out a run of events that were smaller, stranger, and way more interested in ideas than spectacle. Stories that weren't really about conquering the universe, they were about control, identity, power, and whether the systems holding Marvel Universe together were even worth preserving anymore. The Eighth Day. Before diving into the story, it's important to understand the origins of the Eighth Day. This Marvel event can catch you off guard if you're unaware of the background. The Eighth Day was a crossover event in 1999. It emerged during the late 90s when Marvel experimented with its smaller, character-driven events instead of constantly rebooting the universe. Instead of having its own miniseries, the stories unfolded across several ongoing titles, each written by its regular creative teams, resulting in subtle tone shifts from issue to issue. The main chapter of the events appear in a few key books. Iron Man Volume 3, number 21 and 22, establishes the threat and presents the larger mystical stakes. Thor Volume 2, number 17, ties the event directly into Marvel's hierarchy of gods. Peter Parker's Spider-Man number 11 shows Spider-Man discovering the God Machine beneath the Daily Bugle, and Juggernaut the Eighth Day number 1 is a one-shot that serves as the emotional and thematic heart of the entire story. No single creator is behind the Eighth Day. Instead, it was coordinated by editorial staff with the Juggernaut one-shot designed to unify everything and provide a real conclusion. Although it is often referred to as a Juggernaut story, it technically involves a crossover with the Avengers, Spider-Man, Thor, and the larger Marvel mystical universe. The event also took a rare, deep look into Marvel's magical world, bringing in names like Sidorak, Watum, Icon, Ragador. These names, typically associated with spells, became active players with lasting effects. With that context cleared up, the story of the Eighth Day actually begins with gods. Marvel has produced many large-scale events involving cosmic battles, universe-ending threats, and realities hanging by a thread. We might have already discussed a few of these, and I know at least a few of you have heard debates about which one counts as real events. The Eighth Day stands out because it focuses not on space or timelines, but on God's free will and a forgotten mystical wager that almost turned humanity into collateral damage. At the center is Juggernaut, a character known for sheer force and destruction, who unexpectedly becomes the only one capable of stopping a threat far bigger than himself. Long before modern civilization, 8 immensely powerful mystical entities clashed. These were not simple demons or sorcerers, but extra-dimensional forces revered as gods, each representing a different facet of mystical power. Their names were Balthak, Sidorak, Farala, Icon, Krakan, Ragador, Voltar, and Watum. Rather than engage in open war, they opted for a more complicated and dangerous approach. They established a pact called the Wager of Octessence. Each entity created a mystical artifact, a totem infused with part of their power, and built temples on Earth to house them. The rules of the wager were straightforward yet terrifying. The first human to touch each artifact would become an exemplar, a living avatar of that god's power. Once the first exemplar existed, a spell would trigger, compelling other mortals to seek the remaining temples. When all 8 exemplars were created, they worked together to build a massive arcane engine known as the God Machine. The purpose of the God Machine was absolute. It would strip humanity of free will and mentally enslave the population. Each exemplar would command 1/8 of the world's people as an army. Those armies would clash in global conflict called the 8th Day, and the champion of the winning god would be deemed supreme. Earth was never the battlefield, it was the prize. During the Korean Wars, soldier Cain Marko felt a powerful pull towards a hidden cave. Inside, he found the Crimson Crystal of Sidorak. The moment he touched it, Marko transformed into the Juggernaut, gaining immense strength and near invulnerability. However, the ritual went awry. An artillery strike collapsed the temple, bearing the ancient runes meant to complete the spell. The chain reaction never happened, no other exemplars were summoned, and the wager of Octessence stalled. This interruption had an unexpected result. Unlike the later exemplars, Juggernaut maintained his own will. Sidorak empowered him, but never completely controlled him. For decades, Juggernaut was a force of destruction without realizing he was meant to be the opening move in a god-driven apocalypse. Eventually, the ancient magic corrected itself. When the binding brazier of Balthak was touched, the dormant spell reignited. All around the globe, 7 people felt an inexplicable compulsion. One by one, they were drawn to ancient temples and transformed into exemplars. Inferno, Conquest, Bedlam, Carnivore, Stonecutter, Decay, and Tempest. Unlike Juggernaut, these exemplars didn't just gain powers. Their minds were reshaped. Their gods communicated through them. They were given purpose and an unwavering belief that their actions were necessary. Once united, the exemplars moved with precision. They chose Manhattan as their base and began building a god machine beneath the Daily Bugle. Spider-Man was the first to discover it, and immediately grasped the severity of the situation. Thor, Iron Man, Professor X, and other heroes joined the fight. But it made no difference, the exemplars defeated them all. With the machine finished, heroes and exemplars were teleported to the North Pole, a nexus of Earth's mystical ley lines where the God Machine would operate at full power. Must be why Santa Claus always hangs out up there. Humanity was a seconds away from losing its free will. Inside the machine, Juggernaut made direct psychic contact with Sidorak. An unexpected moment, what should have been a quiet, internal realization. For the first time, Cain Marko fully understood the truth. He was never chosen, he was owned. And for the first time in his life, Juggernaut refused. Where the other exemplars were extensions of their gods, Juggernaut resisted. Through sheer will, he broke Sidorak's control, turned on the other exemplars, and destroyed the God Machine from within. The 8th day ended before it even started. The backlash scattered the exemplars across the globe. The conflict wasn't truly over. They eventually regrouped, captured Juggernaut, and prepared to execute him as traitor of the Octessence. Even Earth's heroes were powerless to stop them. What finally ended the conflict was not strength, but clarity. Captain America argued that the exemplars weren't villains, they were victims. Mortals distorted and controlled by gods who didn't care about their fates. Bedlam used her psychic powers to show the others who they were before their transformation. The spell broke, the exemplars kept their powers, but regained their humanity. They turned their backs on the gods who exploited them. The Octessence lost. The 8th Day is not remembered as one of Marvel's biggest events, but it remains one of the most thematically rich. It is a story where free will is more important than raw power, and where a character defined by unstoppable force triumphs not through brute strength, but by choosing not to submit. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the Marvel Universe isn't a cosmic god or an ancient prophecy, it's a man who decides he won't be controlled. Magneto War. Magneto War is one of those late 90s X-Men events that doesn't really get talked about much anymore, even though it kinda quietly reshaped the entire mutant side of Marvel for years. Magneto War ran from March to May of 1999, and like the 8th Day, it wasn't a standalone miniseries. Instead, it unfolded across the main X-Men books of the time, letting each title handle a piece of the story. Core issues are Uncanny X-Men 366 and 367, X-Men Volume 2 86 through 87, plus the oversized X-Men Magneto War special that acts as both a prologue and thematic statement. This was also a transitional moment for the X-Men. Professor Xavier had only recently returned after being missing for months. The team lineup had shifted, and the franchise was still dealing with the long shadow of Magneto's last global-scale attack. The one where he shut down the world's electronics and ripped the adamantium straight out of Wolverine's body. That history matters because Magneto War isn't about whether Magneto is dangerous. Everybody already knows the answer to that. For months the world believed Magneto was gone. The man once known as Eric Lensher, or Magnus, was presumed dead after the destruction of Avalon, his space station. In his place stood Joseph, a younger amnesiac mutant who looked exactly like Magneto and had even joined the X-Men in an attempt to redemption. Some believed he was Magneto given a second chance. Others never trusted him for a second. Joseph didn't trust himself either. Haunted by the possibility that he was really Magneto Reborn, Joseph left the X-Men alongside Israeli agent Sabra, determined to uncover the truth about his origins. While he searched for answers, the world kept turning, and tensions between humans and mutants continued to rise. At the same time, the X-Men themselves were struggling. Xavier returns to find a team he barely recognized and a world far less willing to listen to his message of peaceful coexistence. Genosha was locked in an endless civil war. Anti-mutant sentiment was boiling over, and beneath it all, something was moving pieces into place. The Acolytes, once Magneto's most devoted followers, had fractured into rival factions. Some still believed Magneto would return, others were tired of waiting and wanted answers. That is what brings the story crashing into motion. The X-Men are attacked in their own home while they sleep. Fabian Cortez leads a group of renegade acolytes in a psychic assault, using the mutant Ram to manipulate dreams and influence Professor Xavier himself. When Xavier breaks free, the situation spirals out of control. Cortez forces Ram to push his powers beyond safe limits, nearly killing him. And this is one of those small but important moments in Magneto War. Xavier and the X-Men stop fighting. Not to win, but to save Ram's life. That choice doesn't go unnoticed. Several acolytes realize they've crossed the line, and hostilities break down on the spot. But when the acolytes ask Xavier for refuge, he refuses. Not because he hates them, but because he admits he no longer believes he can save everyone. Too many failures, too much blood on the floor. Instead, Xavier sends them away and quietly reveals the truth to his team. The acolytes believe Magneto has returned, and Cortez came looking for confirmation. If Magneto really is back, the X-Men need to find him first. Meanwhile, Joseph's search for answers takes a brutal turn. Medical testing reveals that while he is genetically identical to Magneto, his DNA itself is artificial, a forgery layered on top of a copied genome. Before Joseph can process what this means, he's abducted by a mysterious woman who calls herself Astra. Astra claims to be Joseph's creator and Magneto's past. She reveals that she was once part of Magneto's earliest brotherhood of evil mutants, before betrayal and resentment drove them apart. After Avalon's destruction, Astra recovered Magneto's body and used advanced alien technology to create a biological duplicate, Joseph. Younger, more powerful, and without the mental restraints Magneto placed on himself. To make the copy work, Astra had to salvage Magneto's mind, and in doing so, she restored the real Magneto as well. When Magneto awakened, Astra sent Joseph to kill him. Magneto escaped, injured Joseph, and left him amnesiac in Central America, where he was later found and mistaken for a de-aged Magneto. While Astra vanished to prepare her next move, Magneto stayed hidden, letting the world believe Joseph was him. And now, we get to the part where Magneto is done hiding. From his polar tower in the Arctic, Magneto calls his most loyal acolytes back to him and sends his robotic servant Ferris to United Nations with an ultimatum. Give him land where mutants can live free, or face the consequences. To make his point, Magneto unleashes a massive electromagnetic storm, crippling the planet's infrastructure across entire continents. Aircrafts fall from the sky, power grids collapse, the world panics. The X-Men race north and crash. Stranded in the Arctic, they're held back while Magneto's plans escalate. The United Nations scrambles for answers. When Russia launches a nuclear strike against the polar tower, Magneto stops it, barely. The detonation still damages the magnetosphere, forcing Magneto to concentrate every ounce of his power just to keep the planet stable. That's when Astra makes her move. Using her control over Joseph's altered DNA, she forces him into the battle, sabotages Magneto's amplifiers, and nearly pushes the world into magnetic collapse. Magneto absorbs part of the storm to keep the Earth intact, and is immediately attacked by Joseph. The X-Men finally reach the tower. The fight splits fast. Nightcrawler takes down Astra, others confront Magneto directly, and Wolverine, still carrying the scars of their past, wants blood. In the end, it isn't Magneto who saves the world, it's Joseph. Freed from Astra's control, Joseph helps repair the magnetosphere, then makes a choice no one else can. Realizing the damage can't be undone safely, he merges with the magnetosphere itself, taking the polar tower with him. Joseph dies, saving a world that never fully trusted him. With the tower gone, Magneto is finally vulnerable. Before the X-Men can act, the United Nations, guided by Dr. Huxley, hands him Genosha, not as a threat, but as a nation. Xavier stops Wolverine from killing Magneto. X-Men leave in defeat. Magneto stands victorious, but diminished. Power is fading, and the cost of the war has taken its toll. And Magneto War ends with Magneto ruling Genosha, setting the stage for Magneto Rex, the 12, and the years of mutant politics to follow. It fractures Xavier and Wolverine's relationship, reshapes the Acolytes, and quietly proves something unsettling. Xavier's dream isn't the only option anymore, and Magneto didn't win by conquering the world, he won by forcing it to negotiate. In contrast to many of the big-ticket 90s X-Men crossovers, like Fatal Attractions or Age of Apocalypse, Magneto War tends to be remembered as more polarizing than beloved. It wasn't universally panned, and plenty of fans enjoy parts of it today, but at the time it didn't generate a strong critical consensus of excellence. It left a mixed legacy that is often appreciated more in hindsight for the influence it had on things like Genosha and Magneto's role coming in the 2000s. Earth X. Earth X wasn't born as a normal Marvel event. It didn't come out of an editorial summit or a line-wide mandate. It started as a thought experiment. In 1997, Wizard magazine asked Alex Ross to imagine a possible future universe. Ross came back with something bleak, strange, and quietly unsettling. A world where every ordinary human has gained superpowers, and where that miracle had broken the idea of superheroes entirely. The issue sold out almost immediately. Interest was strong enough that Marvel republishes Ross' notes and designed the Earth X sketchbook in 1999, and that sold out too. That was the moment Marvel realized this idea had legs. Rather than scripting it himself, Ross handed his notes to writer Jim Krueger, with John Paul Leon on interior art, and Ross remaining deeply involved through his painted covers and overarching concepts. The result was Earth X, numbers 0 through 12, released in 1999, set in an alternate future officially designated as Earth 9997. It wasn't a crossover, it didn't interrupt ongoing books, and it didn't rely on tie-ins. It simply asked one question: what happens if the Marvel Universe keeps going and everything finally breaks? 10 years after the end of the Heroic Age, that answer becomes clear. Black Bolt, fearing the eventual persecution of the Inhumans, releases the Terrigen Mists into Earth's atmosphere, mutating humanity on a global scale. Almost everyone gains powers, but unevenly and without control. To hide what he's done, Black Bolt blinds Uatu the Watcher and abandons Earth entirely. With Uatu unable to fulfill his role, X-51, Machine Man, is taken to the moon and forced into the position of Earth's new Watcher, a job he neither wants nor fully understands. From there, the familiar pillars of the Marvel Universe begin to collapse. Captain America kills the Red Skull and immediately quits the Avengers, convinced that crossing that line disqualifies him from being a symbol. Reed Richards attempts to solve the world's energy crisis with a global vibranium power network, only for it to catastrophically fail, triggering a chain reaction across the planet. One of his scientists falls into the reactor and emerges encased in vibranium as Iron Maiden. Soon after, Doctor Doom and Namor clash with the Fantastic Four. Doom and Susan Storm die, Johnny Storm is killed by Namor, Franklin Richard retaliates by cursing Namor, forcing half his body to burn when exposed to air. A shattered Reed dons Doom's armor and exiles himself to cancel Doom in Latveria. As Terrigen mutations spread, the world looks for someone to blame and settles on Reed's failed experiment, labeling it Plague X. At the same time, Benny Beckley, the son of Comet Man, manifests a terrifying psychic ability to control others. backlash from his powers kills nearly every telepath on Earth. Benny becomes known as the Skull, a child dictator with godlike mental influence. Captain America, now partnered with an evolved Red Ring, tries to stop him, but even they fall under the Skull's control. The world is only free when Cap kills the boy himself, another victory that leaves nothing clean behind. Running underneath all this chaos is the true revelation of Earth X. Loki uncovers the secret behind the superpowers themselves. Earth is one of the countless worlds seeded with gestating celestial embryos. Ancient humans were modified by the Celestials to develop powers not to be heroes, but to act as antibodies, defenses meant to protect the planet and the growing Celestial within it. Mutants and humans, gods and devils are all part of the same system. Even the gods are psychologically constrained, becoming what mortals believe them to be. Loki realizes he was never inherently evil. He became that way because that's what humanity expected him to be. When the Celestials finally arrive to harvest Earth, the last pieces fall into place. Galactic appears, not as a mindless destroyer, but as a necessary counterbalance. A force meant to consume celestial embryos before they can be born. Reed Richards asks him to remove his helmet, revealing the most devastating truth of all. Galactus is Franklin Richards. After the Fantastic Four destroyed the original Galactus long ago, Franklin willingly erased his own identity and convinced himself he was the Devourer of Worlds, because the universe needed one. Reed understands this and makes the impossible choice not to remind his son who he truly is, knowing that saving Franklin would doom everything else. X-51 finally understands the Watcher's true purpose. They were never meant to observe heroes, they exist to guard celestial eggs, and long ago they failed. X-51 destroys Watu's ears, ending his ability to hear, and sets out to destroy every celestial embryo in the universe, so this cycle can never happen again. Back on Earth, Reed converts his vibranium network into massive human torches, attempting to burn away the Terrigen Mists and restore humanity, even if the world that comes after will never resemble the one that came before. Earth X isn't remembered because it was loud. It's remembered because it was heavy. It is a story about destiny versus identity, and whether power makes somebody special or disposable. In a world where everyone becomes superhuman, heroism doesn't vanish because it's no longer needed. It vanishes because it becomes unbearable. Sometimes the Marvel Universe isn't undone by villains or invasions. Sometimes it collapses under the weight of its own mythology. And Earth X leaves you with one final uncomfortable question. If this is what the future looks like, was the heroic age ever meant to last? When Earth X released in 1999, the reaction was mixed but intense. Some readers were blown away by how ambitious it was, praising the world building, the Alex Ross designs, and the sheer nerve of re-examining the entire Marvel Universe from the ground up. Others bounced off it hard, finding it dense, heavy on exposition, and more interested in ideas than action. This wasn't a book trying to please everyone, and it definitely wasn't trying to be a traditional superhero event. Over time, though, Earth X has settled into something closer to a cult classic status. It's been reprinted multiple times, revisited in sequels, and constantly rediscovered by readers who want something different from standard crossover chaos. It's the kind of story people argue about, and that alone says a lot. And personally, this is one I genuinely love. Not because it's perfect, it isn't, but because Marvel rarely swings this hard. Earth X treats the Marvel Universe like modern mythology, and asks what happens when the mythology starts collapsing under its own weight. It's thoughtful, bleak, strange, and unapologetically big idea science fiction, wearing superhero costumes. It's not comfort food, it's not easy, but it sticks with you. And for me, that's exactly what makes Earth X special. Taken on their own, the Eighth Day, Magneto War, and Earth X can feel disconnected. One is mysticism and free will, one is political brinkmanship, and one is full-on cosmic existential dread. But together they paint a really clear picture of Marvel in 1999. This was a company experimenting again, pushing characters into uncomfortable places, letting villains win, letting heroes fail, and asking questions that didn't have clean, reassuring answers. Juggernaut wins the Eighth Day by refusing to be controlled. Magneto wins Magneto War by proving his way might actually work. and Earth X ends by questioning whether the entire heroic age was ever sustainable to begin. None of these stories are perfect, but all of them are interesting, and that's something Marvel events don't always get credit for. If you're following along with the series, next time we hit the year 2000, where Marvel shifts gears again and starts building towards a very different kind of event storytelling. By the end of 1999, Marvel's event isn't an experiment anymore, it's a system. What started as loose crossovers and accidental consequences has become a formula, one that coordinates stories across multiple titles and promises that something big is always about to happen. From here on out, events stop being occasional surprises and start driving the line itself. This compilation covers the first part of the story, the formative years, and you can think of it as kind of a volume 1 of the ongoing series. Later eras will get their own chapters, but here we've seen how Marvel figured out what an event was, why it mattered, and how it reshaped the way the company told stories. Looking back on those years, you can see both the brilliance and the growing pains. Some experiments worked beautifully, others were chaotic and completely overstuffed. But together, they laid the foundation for everything that would come next. The blockbuster crossovers, the line-wide storylines, and the era-defining moments that would define Marvel Comics for decades. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content. And if you want to support me so I can keep making content like this, you can always buy me a comic over on my Ko-Fi. The link is in the description. Every little bit helps, and it really keeps the series going. Before I go, I also wanted to hear from you. Which early Marvel event surprised you the most? Are there any forgotten events from this era you think deserve more attention today? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I love seeing what everyone else notices in these early years. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.